The title run was filled with so many memorable moments that you'll lose count. Some absurd, some hilarious, some memorable, great matches, whatever. And Steve Austin was just the perfect resemblance of the late 90s, no doubt about it. He took the ball and completely ran out of sight. Can't say anything bad about this title reign, to be honest. What's there to say? Austin, he came out of it even more popular than he was previously. I mean, the first night he won the title, the pop that he received was deafening. It was honestly so damn ridiculous, and I don't think we are going to see somebody receive a pop like that in the near future. Like, how is that possible? I don't know. In this video, I cover Stone Cold Steve Austin's first WWF title reign, from post-WrestleMania 14 all the way up to King of the Ring 98. When I was making this video, I was under the impression that I was going to make a video about both of his title reigns. I thought this was going to be a bit short, but man was I wrong. So for me to cover this one, let me give you some background as to where and how Austin won the title. WrestleMania 14, March 29th, 1998, Austin stepped in with one of the all-time greats, Shawn Michaels. I covered that whole story in this video, you can check it out, but long story short, Michaels' back got the best of him during that match, and it was clear that he was in pain. Nonetheless, a 60, doubtful, I don't even know what percent, but it was much less than 70 for sure. HBK was still better than most. He got through the match and put over Austin, and we all know why he did it, but at the end of the day, he did go through with it. And with the title victory, the Austin era has just begun. One thing to note is that Shawn did make quite a fuss during that press conference, and Shane McMahon had to get him out of there, but he was gone. Now, in storyline, despite just becoming the champion, Austin already had an issue. That being, management didn't want him to become the champion in the first place. Vince McMahon, the boss, never wanted Austin as a focal point of the show because he didn't fit his vision of a WWF champion. So basically, Austin's WrestleMania victory was only the beginning. On the March 30th, 1998 episode of Raw is War in Albany, Mr. McMahon opened the show holding the very new WWF Championship. Damn, look at the amount of signs in the crowd. They were anxiously awaiting Austin, not McMahon, and it showed. They were so damn loud that Vince couldn't really hear himself in the arena, and once he did hear himself, he introduced the champ, and they were louder than before. And out he came, the brand new World Wrestling Federation champion, Stone Cold Steve Austin. He quickly swapped the title belts, showing no respect to the old one and no respect to Vince. Once things settled, McMahon tried to clear up his statement from weeks earlier on how he wouldn't want to see Stone Cold as champion. He took a complete 180 turn, stating that he actually is proud of him, and he was just looking for a partnership, you know. He's like, my mental prowess with your physical prowess, you can be the all-time great, blah, blah, blah. Austin knew that his boss dislikes him, but it was okay because he hates him right back. And he wanted to straight up tell Vince that what he sees is what he gets. And his response, well, one thing to know is that McMahon was still very corporate at this point. Hate is not in my vocabulary. I find you to be a swell guy. Hell, Vince even said he loves Austin, and this ticked off the Texas Rattlesnake. It got a bit awkward for the chairman, and he had to loudly say that he loves Steve once again. Austin wasn't having it with the sentimental stuff and promised to raise hell and give Vince gray hairs. He didn't want anybody telling him what to do, and that's the bottom line. Vince's response, we could do this the easy way or the hard way. Austin wanted to know what was the definition of the statement, and McMahon simply wanted Steve to just adapt. The hard way, well, he'll be forced into doing it anyways, whatever Vince McMahon's way is. The champion sarcastically asked for 10 seconds to think about the decision, and he chose his way by delivering a stunner as the fans cheered. He asked the fans if they'd like to see things the hard way. They obliged, and man, was this fun. Nobody in the crowd, in the arena, disliked him, let alone hated Stone Cold Steve Austin. He was just simply the most popular man in professional wrestling at this point, no doubt about it. One of the most popular men in the entire world, as a matter of fact. But hey, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. As a result of this incident, Vince brought in a couple of police officers. A couple of minutes later, they end up arresting the new WWF champion. They almost got into it, but Steve was thrown into the vehicle. And I should ask, like, how many title reigns start off like that? The champion gets arrested the night after his big title victory. Since such a big thing had occurred, the owner of the company decided to come out and discuss why he called the police on his champion. He came out all apologetic, they showed no respect, and he was the most hated man in the entire building. McMahon thought a 24-hour cooling period was good for Steve, and since Austin selected his choice, he selected his also, you know, sending him to jail. Later that night, Austin spent his one phone call from jail on the commentary team. Yep, he ain't calling his lawyer, he decides to call in to the show. He called Vince a sorry SOB, and he stated that his ass belongs to him. Austin promised to show just how pissed off he was. the next week. And if that doesn't work, well, he'll pay Vince's ass a visit to his house. Now, a little side note, this was a crazy Raw in general. DX stronger than before, depends on what you think. The star-making image of The Rock, things were happening very quickly and abruptly. The following week, the owner once again opened up the show. He was prepared to give everyone an update on Austin's arrest, and he revealed that Steve was released later that night because he's a good man. He claimed that Austin's learned his lesson the hard way, and yes, this means Austin will no longer be a beer-swelling, foul-mouthed SOB. He guaranteed a new and improved Steve Austin, and he offered the fans their money back if that's not the case. Later on, the owner of the company once again came out and proudly introduced his new WWF champion, and out he came. In a suit? So he's gone corporate. Austin still had ways to go, but the marketing idea was very well received by McMahon. The fans, though, Austin's holding the title like he did back in the early 90s, and McMahon cited this as a giant leap for the World Wrestling Federation. The fans, though, still believed in Stone Cold, and Vince asked about the Gucci shoes. Austin thought they were too tight, but still, the change is welcome. The hat, though, it's gotta go. Then, Vince asked the big question. Why did you change? Austin said that he asked himself inside that cell, like, what kind of chance do you have to compete against Vince McMahon? I'm just a guy from Victoria, Texas. He's the owner of a multi-million-dollar company. Hell no do I have a chance against beating a Vince McMahon. Then he asked for a little picture, a snapshot, and he said that the old Steve would have told him to stick it. But the new Stone Cold tells him to get the film developed because this is the absolute last time you'll see Stone Cold Steve Austin wearing a ridiculous suit. Yep, Austin turned up on Vince like 2020 at a moment's notice. He pulled his pants down. He stated that he refuses to change for anybody and then nut-shot at him before taking a picture. The fans were cheering on, enjoying what was transpiring. And also, what was the point of the police there? Were they under some cheap contract that doesn't cover nut shots or something? Anyways, the following week, though, things escalated in a very big way. First of all, Austin called out McMahon to come down to the ring. He eventually appeared like a little kid, police behind him, and now he's all confident, he's acting all tough. The champion wanted to know who was his opponent for the next pay-per-view, but McMahon, for some odd reason, claimed he hadn't made up his mind yet. He did promise that everyone will know soon, though. Steve still was annoyed about McMahon's vision of a champion, and the more and more he thinks about it, Vince wants someone not just like himself, but as a matter of fact, he wants to become the WWF champion. The description in Austin's mind matched. He cracked jokes about him wearing the title at home acting like a jackass, and so for that, a challenge was set forth by the Texas Rattlesnake, himself against Vince McMahon for the World Wrestling Federation Championship. He was caught off guard by the announcement, but the fans absolutely 100 times wanted to see it. He even gave a callback to the easy way, hard way statement, and hell, Austin said that he can beat him with one arm tied behind his back. As for the hard way, well, it would have saw Vince get his ass beat inside his office with the world watching anyways. And even if he tries to run away, well, his limo's got 4 slashed tires. The Stooges suggested he accept the challenge and whoop Austin's ass, and eventually the decision was that he's going out there. Austin was really surprised at the decision because it was essentially a no-brainer, so at the end of the night, it was on. The World Wrestling Federation Championship, the boss himself challenges the champ. Shane wasn't on board with Father's Choice, but he's already gotten out the WBF pants. He wasn't going to change his mind then. JR was stressed out over the direction of the company because if Vince goes down, well, how's he going to pay his mortgage? Tensions were high, and that image is worth 10,000 words in my eyes. Vince slaps Austin, and it was on. Now, the boss did have something up his sleeve. He demanded Austin tie his arm behind his back, and the champion wasn't backing down. Vince was clever in tying the stunner arm, and the crowd was rapidly chanting Stone Cold's name. He asked them if they'd like to see a one-arm ass whooping, and they were more than happy. Vince asked the opposite, and they responded with a hell no. Right when the match was about to begin, Boss was wasting time preparing for things, but once it was go time, Dude Love appeared. Austin was fuming, and all he's talking about is how there's not a lot of love around here. He was out here to bring peace, but the fans wanted something else. He injected himself into the whole thing, stating that McMahon writes the checks that allows him to live the life he lives, and Dude was just rambling on until Vince, like a savage, shoved him. All of a sudden, he reverted to Mick Foley and was hell-bent on locking the claw head. Turns out he wanted Austin. The fans booed, and Mick Foley was a heel once again. He continued the assault. Some fans were throwing stuff in protest, and all of a sudden, Vince is all tough now, claiming Dude stole his thunder. Austin had some fight in him, but was unable to neutralize him as Raw went off the air. After the show, though, Stone Cold didn't even remain down for long, and DX came out to get some. The heat in the arena was at maximum capacity. Kane comes in, LOD. What the hell is going on? As you guys may know, this was the episode, and this is something WWF will always tell you, is that they beat Nitro for the first time in about 83 weeks due to this storyline. On the final Raw before Unforgiven in your house, Dude Love held the Dude Shack. First of all, he was confirmed to be the #1 contender for the title. Second, to give you an understanding of why Mick Foley attacked Austin, Here it is. He was sort of jealous with Austin's popularity. He cut a promo 2 weeks earlier stating that the fans were ungrateful for all the pain he's been through and trying to entertain them. And once they hear Austin's music, they're all happy and they forget about him or something like that. Anyways, on the Shack, Vince fined Foley $5,000 for getting involved in the match the previous week. He didn't want anyone interfering in his business, and he was trying to make it seem like he would have kicked Austin's ass. Afterwards, Dude Love explained why he came out during that match. He said that he wasn't happy about getting sucker punched, but he reminisced about his times with Austin. Despite the whole #1 contender thing, Dude was willing to forgive him if he grovels on his knees. Yeah, no. As for Austin's answer, the psychedelic jackass pissed him off a little bit too much, and he believed it was a conspiracy between Vince and Dude Love. The fans definitely believed it too, and he promised that he'll whoop his ass eventually. Austin was a bit impatient for Unforgiven in your house and guaranteed that he'll get his hands on both Vince and Dude Love. It was clear that he was in a foul mood, but hey, I don't need to tell you that. You can see it for yourself. There, that nice Steve Blackman got screwed over. It was a bizarre finish. Then Austin runs in there and kicks both of their asses. Dude was aggressive. The crowd was loud. It was some very exciting stuff. McMahon didn't get his though, and Dude and Austin continued fighting to end Raw. As for In Your House, Stone Cold made an abrupt appearance during the show to question the timekeeper Mark Eaton. He asked if it was Vince who told him to ring the bell last week. The reason why I was asking him these questions was because he wasn't ready to be screwed and was gonna drag his ass up and down the arena also if he went through with it. He threatened his life, stating that, sure, Vince fires you for not screwing me, but you could find another job. But if you do go through with it, well, you're going to have to find another life or something like that. Meanwhile, Vince was claiming something catastrophic was going to happen tonight. He mentioned how he is a native of North Carolina, and they weren't proud of that. And as for the conspiracy theory, he refused to be held responsible for what happens in the main event, and he didn't want to accept any responsibility if Stone Cold Steve Austin screws himself. As for the match itself, fun, I liked it. Crowd was once again very exciting, which is a joy. Both men engaged in a non-stop brawl, and it's often underrated, but for very good reasons. Nothing wrong with it, just came at the wrong time, that's all. Both men were very aggressive out there. Outlandish bumps throughout the match. JR was pretty funny last time around, and Vince once again had to be out there to watch the match. No, this was only a couple of months after Montreal, so there might have been a possibility that he could affect the outcome of the match. He did play his part in giving Dude the advantage at one point. And speaking of Dude, what the hell is up with him? Like, what is he doing over here? He's taking these ridiculous ass bumps, and man, I commend him for that. He doesn't really have to do it, but he does it for the fans. There was the obligatory ref bump, mandible claw, but Austin fought back. McMahon tried reviving the referee, but he wasn't waking up. And he obviously had to get involved once again, but it didn't really do much. As a matter of fact, Stone Cold blasted him with a chair. The fans were going crazy. He hits the stunner on Dude Love, but there was no ref. He counts himself to victory, and with Stone Cold, there's no inconveniences. He literally won the match for himself there. That chair struck Vince so badly that they had to get him a stretcher. Despite the victory, ended up being overruled in favor of Dude Love. DQ win due to Austin striking a WWF official, and so the pay-per-view ended in a way forcing the viewer to tune into Raw the next night. Austin essentially sent him to the hospital, and the expectation was that there was going to be repercussions. The next night on Raw's War, Dude Love made it seem like he whooped Austin's ass, but since Austin took the easy way out, well, the dude was without the gold. All the jargon summed up, he wanted a title shot. He was talking with his weird slang words or whatever. Not only that, but he suggested Austin get his title stripped and handed over to himself. In other places, the owner whined about how Stone Cold Steve Austin tried taking his head, and due to the chair shot, he suffered a mild concussion. As for firing Stone Cold, not yet. He announced a WWF title match with Goldust challenging for the gold. The official for the match, Gerald Briscoe. He also announced that if Stone Cold lays a single finger on the referee, not only will he be stripped of the title, but he will also be fired. Jerry took the time to provoke Austin, knowing very well that he couldn't touch him, and he did promise to be an impartial referee, so there's that. At this point, McMahon was very desperate in getting the title off Stone Cold. He probably would have considered Goldust a month ago in storyline, but things change. Dude Love was pissed off about this announcement and stormed off in anger. He's like, I wear tie-dye, I beat Austin, but this is what I get. Vince was upset about being filmed, and that's all from that camp. Stone Cold wasn't all that positive about defending the title. He wasn't really that angry about it. It was more about Vince screwing him. That's what really upsets him. He didn't give a damn if he had to defend the title every night. The main event, as expected, had some controversy. For one, Austin had the match, but Briscoe preferred to do a slow count. Once he reached 2, something fell into his eye or whatever. Then Dude Love runs in there and tries to redeem himself in Vince's eyes. He fails miserably, and as McMahon tries sneaking up to Austin trying to hit him with the title, he knocks down Briscoe, and the whole thing, it was bad for those guys. Nothing worked out at all. Even when he stacks the deck against him, it doesn't matter. He managed to overcome it. Also, side note, this Raw was the most watched professional wrestling show in cable, keyword cable history, drawing a 5.71 rating. Monday Nitro drew a 1.72 due to the fact that the NBA playoffs were going on. You know, they were on TNT, and it aired at 12:30 Eastern. Just wanted to mention this stuff. On the May 4th, 1998 episode of Raw's War, Mick Foley kicked off the show with a Dude Shack in normal attire. He was frustrated with what's gone down recently, most importantly the title shot thing, but also the fact that he was booked to face his good friend Terry Funk in a hardcore match. He refused to throw 13 years down the drain sucking up to Vince McMahon, and he didn't want his family to see him dancing with second-rate strippers, and he was damned if he performed in the Dude Love attire. So he was back to Cactus Jack. This led to the boss coming out. Foley threw the tie-dye right into McMahon's face, and he finally responded. The owner reminded Foley that sure, you wanted Unforgiven, but Stone Cold Steve Austin is still the WWF champion. He criticized Foley's whining last week, stating that he expected better from him, and the Terry Funk match isn't a punishment in his eyes, it's a reward. If he beats his friend within an inch of his life, reaches into his heart, and pulls it out, then and only then will Foley have made the kind of sacrifice that's necessary to beat Austin and become the World Wrestling Federation champion. Damn, he's got that cult leader mindset. Foley understood that pep talk got him motivated. Not only that, but he also got a slap. All of a sudden, the rattlesnake made his way down with a grappling hook. Why? I don't know. Oh, that's why. Mick Foley ended up leaving as Austin's raising hell. Now, the main event saw Stone Cold Steve Austin sit as a guest commentator, during the Terry Funk and Mick Foley match. He drank beer probably the first time on a regular basis. Mick Foley had no music during his entrance, and yes, he did destroy his friend. Pat Patterson, rest in peace, was the special guest referee. Terry Funk took a huge amount of punishment, but was very resilient. He took 2 pile drivers in the ring, not to mention a spot on the concrete floor, and that was finally enough for the win. Despite this, Foley was leaning into his deranged side and continued the attack. Austin decides it's time to provoke him and does just that with a cup of beer. Patterson got involved, boom, stunner. That wasn't it. Dude Loves music plays, and out came McMahon with the ladies and the attire. He redeemed himself, and this is the best part for me. Austin's just about to laugh his ass off, and why wouldn't he? I mean, the boss is out there dancing, doing some of the most random stuff. Mr. McMahon's living his best life, as you can see here. I probably would have burst out laughing at that moment. The following week, McMahon introduced the new #1 contender, Dude Love, and he's all corporate. He's even got a newspaper in hand by the looks of it, and what about the teeth? Also, look at that side. Mr. Foley spoke in such a professional manner, and he basically became the champion Stone Cold was intended to be. Apparently, he was a speaker in 4 languages, a reader of Greek tragedy, and a student of American history. That honestly reads like a Facebook bio. He even proclaimed himself to be the toughest SOB to a chorus of boos, and instead of dancing, they hugged this time around. That wasn't it. The guest timekeeper ended up being Gerald Briscoe. And look at the teacher's pet. Right when Vince mentioned the G in Gerald, out he ran. It's like he's so proud to be representing McMahon. I mean, that's what it was, I guess, but yeah, that's what I think. He was ready to do anything for Mr. McMahon. The guest ring announcer for the match at Over the Limit, Pat Patterson. Boos were in the air, and best of all, the special guest referee for that main event, he's in a bus of mediocrity? Oh, I know what it is. It's Shawn Michaels, finally. Too bad he was running late. McMahon went to check on the referee, who was too nervous to appear, and after a while, Patterson finally introduced him as the best there was, the best there is, and the best there ever will be, Vince McMahon. And yes, the fans booed him. They absolutely hated this guy's guts. The referee mocked Austin, and the funny part in all of this was the fact that the champion was completely unaware of what's going on. Once he arrived, he called them the 3 jackasses and claimed they'll never take the title away from him. Austin wasn't happy about being in a tag match, and once again, he ran out there a while later. Crowd, once again, very exciting, and he was not out here to cry and complain. He knew that Vince couldn't stand him, but that's also the same feeling he has, Once again, Austin wanted the boss to come out and let him know what's going on tonight. Vince from a distance refused to give away much, and once it was time for the main event, the Nation ended up being the mystery tag team Austin was set to face. The partner? Vince McMahon. Tag team partner never really entered the match. Austin, though, still had some fight in him despite the isolation. He went to business himself, and just as he got the win in his hands, Vince comes in with a clothesline. The Stooges come in, but they accomplish nothing. Dude Love enters the ring, and this moment in itself is what I love about the Attitude Era. These guys all had beef with someone, and it ends in the craziest way possible with the fans going nuts. DX had issues with the Nation. Dustin Rhodes was angry with Vince. It all made sense, and I just love those Raw and Nitros that end in chaos. 2 weeks before Over the Edge, Mr. McMahon announced Stone Cold suffered a mild concussion. Knowing that he was going to come anyways, well, he barred him from the building. Then he introduced Dude Love. Once again, professional vocabulary. It was the same stuff about how he'll capture championship gold and how his name will be announced after the match. McMahon, by the looks of it, was just so enamored with every passing word fully uttered. He then called out Dustin Rhodes, and that's a whole other story. Meanwhile, Stone Cold destroyed the security guard and entered the arena. Once again, he came out and demanded that they bring their coward asses to the ring, and this time he threatened to tear down every 50K camera there was in the arena. And out he came. Vince didn't appreciate the fact that Austin barged in and the fact that he's insulting his associates, Patterson and Briscoe. The champion had enough of all this trash and he wanted to settle it in a match against all three of them. Austin asked the crowd, and that was one of the loudest hell yeahs you'll ever hear. Patterson and Briscoe finally expressed their dissatisfaction with Austin verbally, and in an effort to have things go down the fair way, 2 out of 3 of them were going to face the man, the Texas Rattlesnake, in a street fight. But there was a little damper on this whole situation. The police were looking for him. I assume it's due to an assault charge, he assaulted that security guard. McMahon continuously provoked the Texas Rattlesnake and made it seem like he regret the match not happening because he's a tough guy. And about a half hour later, the security guard didn't press charges for odd reasons, and so Steve was released. Austin was more than appreciative of the fact that the guy didn't press charges. The main event went down, and as expected, Mr. McMahon didn't compete. There was, however, a special referee, the Commissioner, Sergeant Slaughter. Al Snow stuck in the front row, that's a whole other story. And those guys got what's coming to him. Dude Love ended up having to come to the rescue. There was a street fight all over the ringside area, the crowd's cheering, Foley's tripping. But then a fan blasted Austin with a chair, and it ended up being Vince. He's in Austin's disguise, and he almost got his ass beat, but the plan worked out very well. Austin chants intensified, but he never fought back. He did after the show, though. On the final Raw before Over the Edge, yet another memorable segment occurred. As expected, Mr. McMahon opened up the show to discuss the trolling from last week. He showed footage that made it seem like the Stooges gave the champion a hard time. McMahon felt very good about this, stating that he assaulted Stone Cold Steve Austin and got away with it. As for Over the Edge, it will be the demise of Stone Cold Steve Austin. It didn't take the champion long to respond. Crowd is loud. I don't even need to say it at this point. He said that Vince proved that he's the dumbest SOB. Why? Because the owner of the company admitted that he assaulted Stone Cold Steve Austin. The Texas Rattlesnake demanded they arrest the piece of trash, but he was claiming it was a figure of speech. And it didn't matter to the police officers. He was embarrassed, and Steve then got those 2 arrested for obstruction of justice. Later that night, however, Vince was freed after apologizing to Austin. He really forced it out of him, but after being uncuffed, he had this evil face on him, and on the War Zone, he complained about being arrested in public like a common criminal. He didn't like the beer being poured down his neck, add to that having a condition upon his release, that being forced to apologize. McMahon was then bragging about how there isn't one WWF star that intimidates him, but that wasn't it. He then announced a match between Stone Cold and The Undertaker. About the match, the boss made himself the special referee, and as if seeing him earlier wasn't enough, the match never got going because The Undertaker chokeslammed him. He did say there was nobody intimidating, so yeah. Then Kane runs in there and they brawl. Both men disappears, the glass shatters, and the real business was gonna pick up. The Stooges received a stunner, Vince is tied up, and just as Dude Love comes in and makes the save, he fails. That's the most Mick Foley thing I've ever seen. It was high intensity, high energy, high gear. What can possibly go wrong at Over the Edge? About that match, well, if you put a gun to my head and ask, what match captures the Attitude Era so perfectly? This match. Was it the greatest match from the Attitude Era? Doubtful. Maybe it is to you, and honestly, it's in my top 5 from that era, that's one thing for sure. One of the best crowd reactions, one of the best brawls you'll ever see, 5 amazing characters, 2 of the all-time greatest brawlers. It was honestly some of the most ridiculously awesome, tremendous, great, entertaining stuff you'll ever see. No lie about it, it was a pure classic. The story between Austin and McMahon was clear. He wanted a champion that he could control, and Steve was essentially a PR nightmare. McMahon's preferences changed over time. Hell, he would have taken Goldust, another controversial figure, as champion over Steve. It wasn't just about Austin's character and morals, although that's a big reason as to why he hates him. Vince just hated the man himself. Every time he sees him, he gets angry. Before the match, Michael Cole asked the champion if he thinks this is the final time he'll walk to the ring as champ. It was clear that there was no doubt in his mind that he's retaining, and as for an enforcer, Steve believed everybody was so scared of Vince that they wouldn't risk going out there. McMahon himself claimed that he will be fair and impartial. Also, apparently, Pat's dream was to announce a new champion. That's something he's always wanted to do. Vince threatened to strip Austin of the title if he assaults him. By his hand, the match ends. Nobody else, and I should note that's very crucial to the result of the match. Okay, Pat Patterson received the longest introduction for a ring announcer I've ever seen. Gerald Briscoe's introduction wasn't short either. Hell, they even promoted his brother and himself's body shop. The ridiculous part is that Pat gave the entire address, phone number of the body shop, and he was just wasting time. The fans were getting irritated as the seconds go on, and it peaked when it was time to introduce the American Icon. Nobody in the crowd was happy to see him, and I thought that was it, but I forgot about the challenger. They wasted a bunch of time on him also, and when it was time for the champion, the guy that holds the most coveted title in the company, they trashed him. Hell, Patterson refused to introduce him, but it didn't matter. Why? Because the fans loved that guy. Vince himself just wanted that title in his hands, showing a sign of what's to come, you know? Once you let go of it, you're not going to get it back or something like that. And just as the bell's about to ring, the Undertaker's music played. So there was a volunteer that was going to force Vince to call it like it is. About the match itself, one of the best brawls ever, no lie. Very hot crowd. Vince was going for fast count. Dude's teeth came flying out. Exciting back and forth action. The Undertaker was lurking over Vince, who decides it's time to remind the crowd that this is a no disqualification match, which I should note, it wasn't beforehand. From there, it turned into chaos and anarchy in the best way possible. Briscoe got knocked down. This spot was absolutely mental. JR shouting. Then it was announced as false count anywhere. They were changing up the rules as the match went along. And it wasn't like both men slowed down on the outside. At times, it was much faster than it was inside the ring. They bumped into cars. Dude, Love went for a damn sunset flip off a car. Wild would be an understatement to describe what was happening during this match. Blood was drawn. Austin was at a total disadvantage, even with The Undertaker around. Patterson was tripping him. Foley takes control. It was bad for him. Things did seem pretty bleak for Stone Cold, but he managed to turn things around and hit himself with a chair. He had some momentum at this point and knocked down Dude Love. Then Vince let his ego get the best of him. Dude comes in and accidentally hits his boss with a chair, and boom, stunner. The excitement in JR's voice when he says it, man, that's truly something. Unfortunately, though, there was no referee. Mike Chioda runs in but is pulled away by Pat Patterson, and The Undertaker decides to finally intervene and chokeslam him through the announce table. Briscoe, he gets a chokeslam also. In the ring, Austin escapes the claw and hits another stunner. He drags Vince's lifeless body and forces him to make that count, and finally, he's beaten Dude Love. He's retained the title. Now that's a main event. Taker did his work, and man, that was truly special. It was special in every sense of the word. It was a classic. It was everything you'd want in a brawl, in an ODQ match. The blueprint for every Attitude Era main event. I felt like Austin and Brett was the typical blueprint, but watching this is what every match followed. Like, this is what every match tried to be like in the Attitude Era in the main event. Brett and Austin wasn't that overbooked. This one, though, yeah, it makes sense. It's like they started to use this template of a match afterwards. Even though many of them followed, the first is arguably the very best. The crowd was consistently loud for every move, be it from Dude or Austin. They reacted to everything. And also, I like the fact that McMahon's promise came true. My hand will end this match. He wasn't lying about that one. I highly recommend you watch this if you never have. It's something I consider to be on the highest level, honestly. It's literally one of the greatest matches WWE had in the 90s. Hell, it's one of their best matches from 98. It probably is the best. Depends on what you think. Now that Dude Love was bested and showed that he couldn't stop Stone Cold Steve Austin, nobody probably could, the tyrannical boss fired McFoley. So what's next? For one, The Undertaker cut a worked shoot promo about the WWF and Vince McMahon, and in essence, he wanted a title shot. Vince was pushing some buttons, but managed to keep Taker in check by giving him a #1 contenders match against his own brother, Kane. About that main event, Stone Cold was guest commentator, and Vince was anything but happy over this. He was forced to sit down with his arch nemesis to watch the main event, and near the end of that match, Taker had it won, but Mankind comes in with a mandible claw. This was the first appearance of Mankind's in nearly 5 months, I should know. Vince was somewhat happy to see him, and his interference gave way to a Kane victory. Tensions between the two men grew as Raw went off the air. It went off the air after the other two fought, so to say. Now, I would talk about McFoley, but this is a Stone Cold video. I felt like he wanted to save his job. He wanted to redeem himself in Vince's eyes, and he was kind of embarrassed, so he reverted to the Mankind character. Who knows, I might have to make a 3 Faces of Foley video and try to explain this stuff in kayfabe or something. It'd be cool. The following week, the boss was in a very festive mood. Apparently, he was going to have a little ceremony at the end of the night. Austin was going to be there too since he was the champion. So he comes out literally wearing a black tie. Vince was annoyed over this but let it slide because this was his night. Apparently, he was being honored with 2 Humanitarian of the Year awards. Both Darnell and George did admit Austin was their favorite wrestler, so there's that. Vince was all acting nice. It's cool, he's your favorite wrestler. The PR stuff. Deep down, he was angry. Vince thanked the fans and tried to extend his hand to Stone Cold Steve Austin, and it was at this moment JR sensed something's up. He thought this was unnecessary. Fans booed and Steve pickpocketed him and took advantage of the moment to donate to a cause. He preferred if Vince was Jackass of the Year, and Taker's music played. It was clear that there was some sort of setup, there was druids and caskets, but it ended up being Kane and Mankind. They jumped him and Taker had his own issues in the back. Austin gets tossed into the casket. Fans boo. McMahon's ecstatic as Raw concludes. So basically, the whole humanitarian thing was a way of buying time in order to have Kane and Mankind attack and best Austin. Taker was filing Vince, he had some issues with him, but that stuff was easily settled with the police and whatnot. Austin immediately responded to the issue the following week, and he was tired of this chicken stuff McMahon's been playing, and the boss ended up running away. He tried getting Austin to react in a way that didn't involve violence, but he wasn't having it. But he managed to calm him down by placing the blame on whom? Whom, you might ask? The Undertaker. He was just grasping at straws, but Vince's reasoning sort of swayed Stone Cold into that direction. Both himself and Steve felt for the Undertaker had a plan intact that saw Kane and Mankind attack. He surrounded himself with police to not make the save, you know. The whole conspiracy was going to be put to the test because the dead man made his way to the ring. He said that it's true that he made a challenge for the gold, but he did it like a man. As for the whole theory, it's a damn lie. Then Kane and Mankind appeared. Debut of the shirt and tie, I should note. Paul Bearer added fuel to the fire, claiming that the Undertaker, like saying himself, wants to take Steve Austin's soul. On behalf of both Kane and Mankind, he challenged both men to a Hell in a Cell tag team match. Bearer called the ring the entrance to the highway to hell, and about those two, well, Steve wasn't really trusting the Undertaker and vice versa, so basically, it was going to be an odd pairing. Undertaker stated, how could you trust someone whose literal motto is DTA? You know, don't trust anybody, and it made sense to him. Now, for some odd reason, Mankind and Kane competed in a tag team battle royal. They won and were patiently awaiting their opponents. In the meantime, Paul Bearer provoked them. Austin comes out, but Taker was nowhere to be found, so Mankind tries to bring the fight. It was 2-on-1, and Paul locked himself in the cage. He's all safe. This was a huge wrongdoing because the Undertaker respawned from under the ring and gave him a much-deserved beating. Kane was desperately trying to find a way in, but to no avail. Paul was eventually lacerated. Austin had no troubles with Mankind, and Raw concluded just as it used to, in chaos. After the show, Steve ended up winning the match, and other than the fact that this was the most random Hell in a Cell, other than the 2011 one, I find it funny that WCW coincidentally had a cage that had a roof on top of it of their own on the same night, you know, keyword coincidentally. I heard Dusty and others got news of the Cell match and wanted to do something similar, but it was just a glorified cage match. With that said, on the final Raw's War before the King of the Ring, Mr. McMahon came out and announced the match between Kane and Stone Cold Steve Austin will be a first blood match. He revealed that Kane was so confident he'll win the title that, and this is the first time Kane ever spoke, I should note, if he does not win the title, he'll set himself on fire. Paul Bearer at home was raging because, well, he's 100 miles away from his son and couldn't do anything about it. Paul knew his son very well, you know, if he says that he's gonna do it, but he promised to appear at the pay-per-view where his son will be crowned the WWF champion. Kane in other places was going crazy because his father was attacked by the Undertaker. And at the end of the night, Stone Cold finally gave his answer regarding the first blood stipulation. It was going to be interviewed by Sable, but he preferred to speak alone in the middle of the ring. He said that he wasn't afraid of bleeding and basically accepted. He mocked Kane's proclamation of setting himself on fire, stating that he'll bring the marshmallows, the beer, and he'll celebrate. Kane finally responded to those statements, but he was more known for letting his actions speak louder than his words, and that's exactly what happened when he poured some stuff onto the WWF champion. Kane said that the blood on Austin will be for real on Sunday. One thing to note about the match heading into Pittsburgh is that Austin was hospitalized 2 nights before the event due to a staph infection, and also he had a high fever. I believe it was 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The match itself, despite Austin's injury, wasn't bad. Cell was lowered, making it a first blood cell match, and it was one of those Attitude Era brawls like I mentioned earlier. Kane was hanging from the cell, and the story was simple. How can Austin bust open a masked monster? Mankind eventually interferes, which is astonishing to think about. The cell is lowered again. He took a stunner. Kane attempts to chokeslam. It's unsuccessful, and he receives the stunner. All of a sudden, the Undertaker runs in there with a chair. Mankind ducks, and Austin takes the shot. Taker realizes what's up, but he's not really apologetic. Austin's busted open, and for some odd reason, the Undertaker tosses the ref into the ring trying to wake him up or something. I'm not even sure. Hebner's awake, and on the other side, Stone Cold's desperately trying to bust open the big red machine. It's like the 95th minute of a football soccer game. He was trying to escape the loss. Kane gets the chair shot in, but the ref notices Austin's bloody face, and so rings the bell. He was obviously pissed, but there was nothing he can do about it. And Howard Finkel's introduction, the winner of this match, and there's this pause like this, and no, it was so damn dramatic. Vince in the skybox had a smile on his face, and JR softly saying no as King of the Ring went off the air. And that's Stone Cold Steve Austin's first title reign. The story of Austin and McMahon was just so damn entertaining. High quality stuff on a weekly or near weekly basis. Memorable title reign that set up Austin perfectly, and right out of the gate he got a perfect foil in Vince McMahon. Fans dislike the guy, and whoever he brings in can feud with Austin. It made sense. One name that I thought could have been cool, my opinion, who knows how it would have went down if it actually did happen, was Ric Flair. There's a story from Jim Cornette, I believe, that during April of 1998, Flair had some legal issues with Eric Bischoff in WCW, and he really considered joining WWF so hard that he was driving around the Greensboro Coliseum the night of the In Your House pay-per-view. He was going to sit down in the front row, and he was going to be introduced as Flair, and the focus was going to be on his son Reed because he was an amateur wrestler. But the Lord swayed Flair in a different direction, and it didn't happen. I think it would have been an awesome pay-per-view program for Stone Cold being 1 or 2, and I think it would have went down. It would have been very fun. You know, Flair wears the suits, Vince respects him, stuff like that. Either way, Mick Foley was the very best choice that Austin had post-WrestleMania. No other guy. If you had Triple H, he wasn't that big of a star yet. Sure, there's a story of how Austin beat his friend Shawn Michaels and whatnot, but nah. I don't think it would have been better than the Foley program, so there's that. At this point in time, WWF was red hot, like 96 Bulls hot. It didn't matter what they were churning out, the people were watching. However, WCW was still in the fight. Both sides were trading wins, and it wasn't a foregone conclusion. However, the Stone Cold McMahon storyline really got people interested in watching Raw because Austin was relatable. He was a blue-collar man being chastised, being trashed by his boss. Unlike others, though, he'd actually assault his boss. The story template was so good that it's still being used to this very day. The story started off slow. McMahon didn't want Austin competing for his well-being, and that slowly transitioned into Vince now wanting Austin as a WWE champion, all while acting like he was some sort of nice boss. Then after Steve pissed him off from hell to back, Vince was like, you know what, here's the real me, and decided to continuously screw over the Texas Rattlesnake. His hatred of Austin was so bad that he'd prefer somebody like Kane as champion. Initially, it was about his own man, you know, dude loved taking the title away from him. But after that, he was getting desperate, handing title shots to the likes of Goldust. Simply put, Stone Cold refused to be a puppet of sorts. So now that I set the stage, let's get into it. On the June 29th, 1998 episode of Raw's Wars, Vince McMahon had a little ceremony in honor of Stone Cold losing the WWF Championship to Kane. McMahon was celebrating like it's the day after WrestleMania or something, you know, it was like a breath of fresh air for him. He felt that with Austin losing the title, a new era had dawned. The era of old had been cleansed. There was no more foul mouth, no middle fingers, that was all gone, and the man who became champion lacked any of those qualities. Hell, he'd never even drink beer in his life. And there he is, the new World Wrestling Federation champion. A little side note, to think Kane was only supposed to be involved with one storyline is insane. I mean, this guy is awesome. Everything about him screamed cool. From the pyro going on in sync with his music to that tombstone pile driver, and it's a good thing that all that hard work that was put into the character was rewarded. And damn was Paul Bearer so proud. He revealed that the WWF champion dreamed of this moment. He used to idolize his brother, hanging his posters around the walls and saying, "Dad, I want to be like him." Paul told him, "Son, you can be better than him," and for the first time ever, The Undertaker was standing in the shadow of his little brother. Then as they're trying to place the title on his waist, the glass shatters, the crowd erupts, and McMahon had a look of unease on his face. Austin said that the stipulation stated that the winner has to draw blood from his opponent. That didn't happen. Kane never busted him open, that was The Undertaker. Austin threatened to knock McMahon's head off for wearing those shoes, and hell, even demanded his rematch then and there, which Vince tried to dance around. He didn't want to say no outright, but after Steve pushed him, he declined. The fans, though, quite the contrary. They wanted that rematch, they were craving it. So Vince was like, "It's alright with me, ask Paul Bearer." And his reaction was like they told him The Undertaker's coming. He pushed his problems towards Kane, who ended up making the decision. The champ obviously felt challenged, but Austin added fuel to the fire, telling him that The Undertaker won the belt for his sorry ass. So Austin, King of the Ring, wasn't a fair victory for Kane. As Psychology 101, you know, mind games. By making Kane's win seem like a victory given to him by a big brother, he accepted and it was on. Kevin Kelly didn't know why Kane accepted, so he asked the question. Champ's like, "I know I can beat him because I am a greater champion than my brother ever was." Steve Austin, on the other hand, was really eager to have the match. He was very confident of his chances because The Undertaker's stupid decision cost him. Regarding the match, it was heated. Title matches were rare in previous years, but with an ongoing television war, you know they were going to pull out all the stops to win it. Anyways, Austin struggled with Kane throughout the match. He was aggressive, agile, and even when he starts to fight back, Paul Bearer gets involved. Then all of a sudden, The Undertaker came out, and before I go back to the match, I gotta mention why Taker did what he did. It was because he didn't want to see his brother get burned alive. You know, he felt empathy for his brother. Anyways, the crowd loudly chanted for Austin. Unfortunately, though, he was caught with a choke slam. As Kane goes for the tombstone, Austin counters. Stunner's unsuccessful, and as was the boot. And as Austin ducks, he catches Kane at a moment's notice with a stunner, and the crowd absolutely lost it. 1, 2, 3, new champion. All of a sudden, The Undertaker runs in there and has a moment with Steve. Paul distracts him, and boom! stunner to him as well. This was only the second title change in Raw history. I'm talking about the WWF title, of course. And it was a huge moment. Another thing to come out of this show is the fact that maybe, just maybe, The Undertaker was going to side with Kane. JR was repeatedly shouting this as well, and with regards to the episode, it did a 5.4 to Nitro's 4.1. Opening up the show the following week, The Undertaker straight up demanded a title shot for tonight, and there he is. McMahon took notice and quickly crashed the party. He didn't want to see the inmates running the asylum, and questioned Taker's #1 contender status. You know, nobody made him the contender, he just straight up said he wanted the title shot. In Austin, he's not allowed to accept the challenges that come his way. However, he was inclined to allow these men to fight together. And Fully Loaded, of course, as a tag team. This clearly angered both men, and their opponents were Kane and Mankind. On to other topics. McMahon saluted Stone Cold on becoming champ in a very special way. He also struggled with selecting a #1 contender, so he booked a triple threat with Kane, Mankind, and The Undertaker. About the main event, well, for some odd reason, The Undertaker was nowhere to be found. So McMahon forced Tony Chimel to say, The Undertaker's not here because he's a chicken. Add to that, it was no holds barred. Then, if things were already bad enough, Mankind refused to fight Kane because he's his friend. Austin and Vince were bickering on commentary. Kane slowly approached Mankind, who was on strike, and he absolutely obliterated the poor guy with a chair. Austin thought it was well deserved. McMahon took the time to promote the WWF for being like this, and the shot seemed to knock out Mankind, and Kane was the #1 contender. At least that's what everyone thought, because when he unmasked, it was revealed to be The Undertaker. Stone Cold's reaction was of that when Shawn Michaels heard he's losing at WrestleMania 14. He couldn't believe it. At this point, the question in McMahon's mind was, are Kane and The Undertaker in cahoots? He denied this, not outright, but Austin seemed to share that belief as well. He wanted to know if The Undertaker was going to team up with him or against him at Fully Loaded, so Taker responded telling him to go to hell. Then DX came out, and the reason for that is because they were screwed earlier on in a title match. Also, Triple H with black wrist tape does not feel right. DX wanted their rematch with Kane and Mankind to feature 2 enforcers, The Undertaker and Stone Cold Steve Austin. That main event itself was chaotic, and of course it was only a matter of time before the enforcers got involved. The rules were completely thrown out the window, tensions rose between the two guys, Shawn Michaels on commentary was hyped, and here we go. To top it all off, the Nation ran in there as well, and a full-on brawl ensued. Austin stunned Kane, Henry, Billy Gunn, D-Lo to end Raw on top. And yeah, it's one of those Attitude Era endings, obviously. Heading into Fully Loaded, there was still discussion over whether or not Kane and The Undertaker were in cahoots. At this point, Austin was starting to believe this whole conspiracy somewhat, and it didn't matter to him if he was going into the pay-per-view alone or with a partner, it was going to beat somebody's ass. He even supported The Undertaker leaving because McMahon deserved to be screwed. The boss responded by booking Austin in a handicap match against the tag team champions. He refused to face him because that would show that he's a puppet, so McMahon threatened to strip him of the gold and hand it directly to The Undertaker despite the hatred for him. See, McMahon at this point, like I said, he hated Austin so badly he'd give the title to his other enemies rather than Stone Cold. Austin was obviously going to go through with that now, and even went as far as to say he's going to whoop McMahon's ass in the back. That match was a clear struggle for the WWF champ. It took him a while to even take his vest off, but oh, there he is. Despite this, Steve was doing all the work, and when The Undertaker was actually ready to do something by the looks of it, he intended to blast Steve. Instead, Mr. DTA moved out of the way and Kane was the victim. Austin then used the chair of Mankind before blasting Taker as well, showing that he's going into Fully Loaded alone. As to the pay-per-view itself, well, The Undertaker was running late. Tom Pritchard and the commentary team couldn't exactly comprehend this news because The Undertaker was well known for being a locker room leader. Several minutes go, but he still hadn't arrived. In the arena, though, the champs came out along with Paul Bearer, and to him, the reason why The Undertaker didn't come out was because he didn't want to fight his brother. McMahon refused to be held responsible for the no-show despite the fact that nobody's blaming him, and instead he placed the blame on one Stone Cold Steve Austin who used the chair on Monday. Add to that, he said that every time WWF does a show, there's always a little disclaimer, card subject to change. If Taker didn't show, then the Brooklyn Brawler was going to be the replacement. Taker arrived about a half hour later and the match was on. Tag team title match, I should note. It wasn't outstanding stuff, but it was decent enough. Add to that, it advanced the storyline. It gives me WWF Attitude on N64 vibes for some reason. I assume it's because the game was set around this time period, but let's talk about it quickly. First of all, The Undertaker debuted the first version of his Dark Side theme. The challengers had a tense stare down that lasted 2 seconds because the champs attacked. Attitude Era brawling, crowd was hot. The Undertaker actually followed his brother for a change. Mankind, for the most part, was the good guys' punching bag in the early going, and even when he was on the offense, it didn't last that long. Once Austin was tagged in again, it was explosive. JR was on his element, Crowd was into the match, back and forth action, a mean looking chair shot from Austin almost gives him the victory, but the ref took a little bit too long. The champ ended up isolating Steve Austin for a bit. He breaks out this rub, even then the Undertaker didn't put his arm out. Even after Kane shoved him, he was getting maimed, all while the ref was too busy with the dead man. Chokeslam is successful, but as he goes for the tombstone, Steve Austin escapes and hits the stunner. Mankind suddenly runs in with a mandible claw, but he takes the stunner as well, and the Undertaker was completely emotionless. The crowd loudly chanted the WWF champ's name. He crawls towards the dead man, but Kane tries pulling him away, and at this point, Austin had the unwavering crowd support. Even then, Taker didn't put his hand out. But something in his mind happened. He's like, you know what? Here I am, and it gets tagged in. Poor Mankind couldn't catch a break. Taker had the strength of 4 demons in him. He chokeslammed both men, even Tombstone Kane. 1, 2, 3. Again, absolutely insane crowd, but that's expected because, for one, it's 1998, and 2, Stone Cold's in the ring. Because they hate each other and because he scored the W, The Undertaker took both titles, but yeah, they raised the roof with that main event. Sorry, Booker T. And so we're now off to the highway to hell. Kicking off Raw, The Undertaker came out demanding an apology from Stone Cold Steve Austin. He thought Kane and himself were in cahoots, but last night clearly showed that that wasn't the case. McMahon, though, thought it was very odd that Taker wanted an apology. To him, even though he tombstoned Little Brother, it doesn't change a thing. Add to that, it took 1 tombstone to beat him at last night, whereas at WrestleMania it took 3, and if anyone needs an apology around here, it's him. One way or another, he was going to get his apology. That's exactly what he said. Also, Mr. McMahon revealed that the new champs will face the New Age Outlaws for the titles tonight. Cue Stone Cold's music. Of course, the boss wasn't going to receive that apology. As a matter of fact, Austin told him to take his ass to the back. He admitted that they were champs, but he wasn't going to be a buddy or anything like that. However, if the jackass is making a tag team main event, he's going to come out and defend the title. And there's the apology. Regarding the match, it was a bit of a struggle, but they managed to get through the Outlaws. Austin even handed Taker a cold one, and by the looks of it, all was good. That is until Kane and Mankind attacked. As if things weren't already bad enough, The Rock and Owen Hart wanted the title shot until Stone Cold and The Undertaker were like, say no more. The problem with this, though, is the fact that Kane and Mankind were still eyeing a rematch, and this caused Austin to get maimed in the ring. He managed to bounce back, though, and in other places, Mr. McMahon was still promoting this conspiracy that The Undertaker is working with Kane. He provided some evidence from last week and earlier that night. Taker and Austin then interrupted, and the WWF champion explained why he was buddy-buddy with Taker. It wasn't because they were friends, but because he wanted to get him to SummerSlam. He wanted to get him there 100% so they could have a fair match. The WWF title was the only belt he gave a damn about, and he left the tag belt in the ring. The Undertaker didn't respect his actions and told him that he's doing exactly what McMahon wants him to do. He wants tension to grow between them. Taker wanted Austin to be a man and take back the tag team title. He took it back, and the dead man said that Austin's the safest SOB until SummerSlam. Then promised that at the pay-per-view he'll take back what's his, and that's the WWF Championship. As to the main event, again, it was just like the Outlaw situation. The difference maker was once again The Undertaker, and emerged victorious. Right after the match concluded, Kane and Mankind made a run-in, but this time Kane accidentally blasted his tag team partner, and if that wasn't heated enough, the New Age Outlaws made a run-in, and as a result of this continuous chaos, a 4 corners tag team match for the titles was booked on Raw the following week. The collusion plot was thickening at the same time, and Kane and Undertaker were acting real sus at this point. The match itself, though, is one of my favorite Raw main events. It's not outstanding due to the action. It's the fact that these charismatic characters and their stories all intertwined to give the fans a memorable main event. Each team had their moment to shine, whether it be Billy Gunn showcasing his strength for all to see, or The Undertaker putting a whooping on D'Lo Brown. Then there was this moment where both Austin and Taker tagged in. It was very confusing, the 4 corners rule. They opted to save the fight for SummerSlam, though. Owen Hart was supposed to feature the match but got attacked earlier on, and with regards to it, the action was very impactful. Showmanship was on full display, intensity, all that, and by the end it was a mess. And the fans finally got the answer to the collusion question because Kane chokeslammed his brother to win the titles. Yeah, that still didn't explain why Taker was disguised as Kane on Heat last week. And plus, it was only 1 chokeslam. Taker doesn't kick out from 1 chokeslam. From his little brother, nonetheless. But later that week, the dead man appeared to give his confession. He said that he's tried to protect Steve Austin. The only person he couldn't protect him from was himself. Stone Cold had zero fear coming down to the ring to confront the dead man, but then the pyro went out and Kane emerged. They teased the beatdown as Sunday night Heat went off the air. The next night on Raw, Austin brought in a hearse to the arena, and Jerry Lawler felt that the vehicle was a message to somebody. He demanded Mr. McMahon come down to the ring. Why? Well, we're about to find out. Instead, the Three Stooges came out and Austin was ready to sit in the middle of the ring. But his demand was met. Vince made it seem like he wasn't proud of that tag title loss. and the champion was completely seething. He said that he's going to put his foot out of the grave and into Taker's ass, and even threatened to throw both Taker and Vince into the hearse. Fast forward to the end of the night. The Undertaker came out for the confrontation. Austin follows through, and business was about to pick up. Taker had his back turned to Austin when all of a sudden the pyro went out and it was revealed to be Kane. Chokeslam, and Steve was completely out of his element. But he managed to fight back and send Kane to the crowd where they brawled. Austin managed to win this battle and send Kane into the hearse, but the door was shut. Turns out, the Undertaker was in there. He rode off into the night, all while Austin looked very confused at what had went down. Now at this point, the Undertaker didn't really care, He didn't care if anybody sensed some sort of collusion between himself and his brother. Hell, he even came out with Kane on the final Raw before the event. Much to the delight of the WWF owner, I should mention. He was bragging about how he was right all along, and he thought it was a foregone conclusion that the Undertaker was going to win the title once again. He also warned him not to be a foe, rather an ally. Another thing to mention is the fact that there was a Hell in a Cell hanging above the ring. JR was completely confused. Paul Bear was looking like he was about to shed a tear, he couldn't believe that Kane had done this to him, and even called his mother a sleazy whore. Taker was ready to strike, but Kane pulled him away, and then Paul Bear begged his son to destroy the Undertaker. That didn't happen. Instead, he was battered and beaten. Then Mankind came in, and they ended him with ease. You see, McMahon was loving this, because to him, the Undertaker and Kane were his instruments of destruction. With this chaos they caused, there was only one man left. When Stone Cold came out, a wall of fire randomly emerged, leaving him completely perplexed. Austin wasn't happy with nearly being burnt up like a crisp, but decided to talk about SummerSlam. He knew damn well that he stood no chance at the pay-per-view, so he's ready to take out somebody tonight. Yeah, about that, well, first of all, Mankind was destroyed. Second, Austin thought this was a perfect moment to strike. He wasn't stupid, and because he chose the right moment, the Undertaker was locked out. He tried breaking in, but a certain somebody wanted to protect his investment. At the end of the night, Shawn Michaels, making $15K a week, I assume was chilling on commentary, when a bunch of druids came out with a casket. The Undertaker appeared, promised to win the title at SummerSlam, and instead of having help from Kane, he was going to do it like a man. Also, he challenged Stone Cold to a fight tonight when the boss interrupted. He wanted to know if he was going to be friend or foe once again. Taker decided to gift him with a chokeslam when Stone Cold came out of that damn casket. Then Kane emerged out of there, and again, Stone Cold was outnumbered. As Austin's running up the ramp, flames emerged from out of nowhere, and so basically Taker and Kane were on very, very good terms. Austin doubted his chances, but was going to die trying. And McMahon, well, we don't need to explain it. We all know he's ecstatic. Before SummerSlam on Heat, Mr. McMahon expressed his worry over Austin potentially ruining the main event with a sledgehammer. The reason why he even had a sledgehammer in the first place was because of Kane. The Stooges tried taking it away, but failed miserably. So McMahon was ready for the challenge. Once they confronted each other, Austin called out the boss on his malicious behavior. It wasn't like McMahon was worried about Austin's own well-being, rather Kane and the Undertaker's. If one of them goes down, that decreases the chances of a title change. A few minutes later, the hearse arrived and Austin decided to cause destruction, ending Heat on top. Now, with regards to their main event, it wasn't bad, but for some odd reason, it didn't click. What I mean by that is when you think about Stone Cold versus The Undertaker in the main event of SummerSlam during a time where the WWF was red hot, you're thinking this is going to be special. However, I will say though that it was pretty damn good. Don't think what I'm trying to say is that it was bad. It was good. Anyways, let's talk about the match. It had a very special vibe to it. It was built for nearly 2 months. The action was pretty back and forth. Then Kane came out. The dead man opted to go one-on-one, and following this, the first big move in the match occurred when the Undertaker hit the chokeslam. Despite this, some damage had been done to Taker's leg. They did the Attitude Era brawl in the crowd thing. Taker hit the leg drop out to Austin through the announce table, and at this point, Steve was concussed. He lost his train of thought, and in his eyes, he believed that it hurt the match quality. In the ring, the challenger was fully in control, even with Austin trying to evade his offense, but all of that was thrown out the window when they hit a double clothesline. Now, we're in the final third. Complete slugfest. Austin with several rights, shoulder tackles, even the Lita's press and the bionic elbow. Taker, though, bounces back with a chokeslam, and it was tombstone time. Well, it was actually counter time. Both men were reversing each other's moves, but the end was not. Old School gets canceled with a low blow, and boom, stunner. 1, 2, 3. Good match. Afterwards, The Undertaker had the smoking skull in his hand, looking like something's gonna happen, but he just handed the title to Austin instead. Steve was a certified man of his word, he'll do anything to keep the title. However, it was clear that there'll be another day for The Undertaker. Now, Austin himself isn't exactly fond of this match, although he's the same man who hates the WrestleMania 14 main event, which to me was better than it had any right to be. Here's what he said about 2 years ago on his podcast. And I quote, "The reason we were not happy with the caliber of that match, we knew that we could have had a better match. The crowd wasn't hanging on every single move or every single section of the match. It wasn't a cookie cutter prefab match. We had 5-6 bullet points and the rest was fill in the blanks. We knew that we had not captivated the crowd to the degree that we had them hanging from the rafters, winning on the next move, who was going to win. The drama wasn't high enough. Dare I say interest at the proper depth, because when you go back to some of the matches that Taker had with Shawn, maybe the one I had with Bray, or maybe The Rock, when people were hanging on every single thing you do, we didn't have it that night. And we knew that we could have done better, and we didn't hook the crowd enough. Bottom line, we didn't hook the crowd enough. You can ask Taker and he'll tell you the same thing. The wrestlers are their own biggest critics, right? But like I said, enjoyable match just didn't reach that 6th gear in my opinion. On the September 5th, 1998 episode of Raw's War, Saturday night episode I should note, dog show struck once again. McMahon came out in a very festive mood. You'd think it'd be the opposite, but it clearly wasn't. He quickly announced that on September 27th, Stone Cold Steve Austin would experience an emotional breakdown. When this plan is executed, he will no longer be the WWF champion. Vince criticized Taker, calling him a damned fool for telling Kane to go to the back. He called Kane the R-word, which completely shocked Jerry Lawler, and McMahon felt that both men were supposed to cast terror into the WWF wrestlers. They should terrorize the company, but instead the wrestlers are starting to snicker at the sight of the brothers. He even said that they couldn't terrorize a kindergarten, and to top it all off, he said that The Undertaker and Kane had been reduced to nothing more than 2 putrid...
What in the hell is he saying?
Oh my god. That's probably the most shocking sentence uttered in the Attitude Era. I can't really see anything that tops it. And Jerry Lawler's reaction says it all. And immediately upon hearing this, the brothers sprinted down to the ring, causing McMahon to run into the crowd. Later that night, they broke into the boss's office, but he wasn't there, and they ended up causing destruction in the arena, though. This carried into the next night when they threatened to dismantle the Stooges. He never showed, which led to them being sacrificial lamb. Now, everyone wanted to know what this master plan was. Problem was, nobody knew what the hell McMahon was spewing. That is until the end of Heat, when he once again proclaimed In Your House breakdown to the end of Stone Cold's title reign. Despite the ongoing chaos throughout the show, he was still acting tough, saying, "I'm not too hard to find." And so now the quote-unquote were coming out to the ring. And by the looks of it, they clearly weren't missing. McMahon wanted to apologize for his remarks on Saturday. He took back everything with regards to the important topic he called out Stone Cold. And the hatred, the tension, you could cut it with a knife. Clearly threatened, McMahon said he doesn't see why Austin is so revered. He also told him that he's disrespected Mr. McMahon for the final time, and even said that Austin lacks any value to the WWF. Suddenly, McMahon revealed that Steve's got to defend the WWF title against Kane. He's also got to defend the title against The Undertaker, and simply put the titles on the line in a triple threat match. Now, the brothers weren't the only ones who were eyeing a title match with Steve Austin. Ken Shamrock was talking about how he only received 1 title match in his entire career. And I'm like, oh, boo-hoo, Gangrel received 0. But yeah, Austin received the message. He came out to talk about the events of SummerSlam at the end of the night. Austin refused to give McMahon the satisfaction of himself losing the title. And as for Shamrock, he respected his ability in the UFC, but piss on UFC, the WWF is a whole different thing. He told him that he should bring his blue trunks ass on out of here so he could get his ass beat. And there he is. Vinnie Mac comes in and Austin's like, I want to fight him as the show goes off the year. When you're looking at it from Vince's perspective, what's a negative? What's a negative from this situation? Austin loses, the title's gone. He wins, worn down at the very least. The match went down on Raw the next night, and since it's a title match, I'm obligated to watch and actually talk about it. Before it went down, Stone Cold went face-to-face with Mr. McMahon. He revealed that in the triple threat match, Kane can't pin The Undertaker and vice versa. At this point, McMahon had some balls of steel because he straight up told the WWF champion, I didn't screw you, Stone Cold screwed Stone Cold. He attacks, leading to a brothers double team, and Vince even went a step further, mocking the Texas rattlesnake. Fast forward to the end of the night, and he's defending the gold against Shamrock. Right out of the gate, Austin struck. Crowd's exciting. Oh, I don't even need to say that. It's 1998. He's in clear control at this point. Shamrock was essentially the underdog despite his skills. Matter of fact, I'd go as far as to say that Steve was working as a heel. He's doing rakes to the eye, doing headlocks, slowing down the match. Whatever Shamrock was doing, Steve quickly stops him dead in his tracks. They brawl on the outside. Austin gets back dropped, and now he's the babyface. Shamrock had the Boston crab lock, the type of Austin managed to reach the ropes. Ref doesn't notice, and Steve hits the low blow. Before stomping a mud hole, of course. They end up clotheslining each other, and it was time for the final part of the match. Well, that's what it looked like because Kane and The Undertaker ruined everything. To top it all off, The Rock and Mankind ran in. Austin has a chair. It was wild. On the final Raw's War before breakdown in your house, Mr. McMahon was desperate to have things work. He told The Rock, Shamrock, and Mankind that if they don't team up with Stone Cold, he'll place them in a #1 contenders match. Austin, meanwhile, once again reiterated his statements from earlier on. He'll be damned if somebody takes this title. He even said that trying to take this is personal. Champ wasn't reliant on anybody being his partner. Matter of fact, he was ready to whip those two monsters his ass alone. Partner, though, ended up being Billy Gunn. They had a great showing, but they unfortunately took the L even though Billy Gunn wasn't legal. Because of what happened, McMahon refused to hold himself responsible for what the brothers might do at the pay-per-view. Fast forward to the end of the night, Taker and Kane once again ruined a main event match. Austin, though, managed to find an opportunity to put a whooping on McMahon's ass before Raw went off the air. Later that week on Heat, Mr. McMahon once again guaranteed Austin that he wouldn't leave the arena with the WWF title. What's even crazier is the fact that McMahon wanted Mark Henry, to face Austin in a cage match before the pay-per-view even began. Yeah, about that, well, Henry got attacked by China. Then one of those technical guys shut the door and it's revealed to be Stone Cold Steve Austin. The henchman tried climbing up, but by the time they ran in, it was too late. Seeing as he's got a safe face one way or another, he shouted, "He who laughs last, laughs loudest." He told everyone to tune into Raw at 9 o'clock to see him with the WWF title in his hands, and damn was the man possessed. Like, it's such a complete far cry from the man in March. This man was going insane. Now, with regards to the pay-per-view, Michael Cole asked the brothers, who's got to take the fall? Taker told him to mind his business before revealing that they've come to an understanding. Like I said, McMahon was desperate. If anyone interferes on Austin's behalf, the title's gone. He knew they had to do something about the situation and quickly attacked both brothers with a chair before the match even began. The strategy seemed to work initially because the Undertaker was out for a few minutes. Austin then tried dissecting Kane and even hit the Stone Cold Stunner on him, but the dead man ruined everything. What's odd about this situation was the fact that the brothers couldn't really keep Stone Cold down. Even when they hit an offensive move, they couldn't keep the momentum going. All of a sudden, the Stooges came out to watch from the staging area. JR didn't like this, and meanwhile, Stone Cold was taking a hell of a lot of punishment. At one point, he was in the middle of an ass-kicking, and for some reason, just sprinted towards Briscoe and knocked him down. He wasn't helping himself. JR wasn't losing hope, though, as bad as the situation looked. Anyways, Austin had a burst of momentum a few minutes later, but it went nowhere. That is until he grabbed the chair. He whacked the hell out of Kane, but Taker broke the pinfall, and then those two threw that understanding out the window. Taker quickly ended this, telling him to not do it. Stone Cold was being mauled, and the match was looking like it's over, but the problem was between the two brothers. They actually ended up fighting, giving way to Stone Cold. Hell, he literally worked together with Kane for a few seconds. So the brothers got back on the same page for all of 2 seconds because of the gold. And again, Stone Cold erupted. The crowd was just waiting for the kick to the groin, but unfortunately though, it never came. The brothers hit the chokeslam and went for the pinfall at the same time. 1, 2, 3. As JR said, Austin's lost the title. Problem was, nobody knew who won the title. With regards to the match, it wasn't bad. It did drag at times and it did feel longer than it should have, but it was entertaining for the most part. McMahon was looking like he was going to blow a load or something. Briscoe managed to get a hold of the title and hand it to the boss, who wasn't very welcomed in Hamilton, Ontario. He quickly bolted into a limousine, all while his stooges tried to fight off Steve. They were about as strong as those security guards in the WrestleMania 19 game. By the time he reached the parking lot, McMahon was like 100 feet away. He was shouting, Austin doesn't have this title anymore, it's his now, and was flipping the bird on the Texas Rattlesnake, and thus began Stone Cold's road to WrestleMania 15. I just might do that one, I'm not sure though. But yeah, that's his title run. For certain, it was a very memorable one. The build to SummerSlam in 98 just might be the very best. The collusion between Kane and The Undertaker, wow. Every segment Austin was in, 9 times out of 10, was the best of the night. Crowd gravitated towards him like nobody else, and when making this video, I realized that there will probably never be somebody as over as Stone Cold Steve Austin. My top 3 matches from this run were the tag match from August of 98, love the crowd, the action, the variety of stars in the match, Kane vs. Austin from the June 29th, 1998 episode, my personal favorite, Stone Cold vs. The Undertaker from SummerSlam. Favorite segment would probably go to the one on Heat when Austin destroyed the hearse. What do you guys think of Stone Cold's title reign? Please comment down below. They went full on insane with The Undertaker. He was really in his element during this time. He might hate it himself, but to me it was one of his most memorable runs. He was essentially believing in everything he's saying, claiming this was all for a higher power he answers to. It was some crazy stuff, and I don't think we will ever see something like it. So how did the ministry start? Well, in October of 1998, The Undertaker realigned himself with Paul Bearer, turning heel for the first time in 6.5 years. He promised to unleash his Ministry of Darkness onto the World Wrestling Federation, and there was a bunch of mentions of this stuff over the next couple of weeks, and Taker was slowly transitioning into this evil character. He tried embalming Austin, burying him alive, and even crucified him. I'm not an Attitude Era kid, obviously, but I remember there was a certain episode where I believe it was the 15th anniversary. They just showed this video, this package, and I was mind blown. I was like, what the hell is going on here? I had to search for it, and I couldn't find it for months until I eventually did. Yeah, it's just a cool moment to look at. A bunch of people were very angry, religious groups, parents, they were very frustrated and angry with what WWF was putting out at the time, and I believe this was the reason they went TV-14, because before this, WWF was actually PG. The entire time it was PG. All the stuff you were seeing in 1998 was PG, and this is the one thing that caused them to go TV-14. It's just crazy to think about. But yeah, this moment, it belongs in the top 20 Raw moments for sure. Definitely. It set the stage for The Undertaker's ministry. This basically showed what he's all about, this new character of his. Taker really didn't have minions, they were just mentioned at this point, and the metamorphosis into this whole new character would be cemented when Stone Cold buried him alive. Like, up to the point where Taker announced a ministry into a buried alive match, there was just these mentions, you're helpless against my ministry or whatever, the symbol is appearing. It was slowly coming, you know what I mean? In his time away, Taker grew this beard to that really, and I mean really, added to this incarnation of his. Normal Taker was menacing, but this was totally different. As for how the ministry officially began, here we go. Heading into 1999, a couple of strange things were occurring in the World Wrestling Federation. First of all, the Acolytes, who were already strange enough with a Jackal, well, they were talking some stuff. Jackal ended up getting released, and so we never knew what their allegiance to the Jackal was all about, but there was a place waiting for them in the Undertaker's ministry. Then, well, they decided, you know what, let's go after Dennis Knight. So one night, they managed to commandeer his vehicle and attack him before tossing him into the trunk. Why was this happening? Well, earlier in the night, Knight was chatting with X-Pac and said he wanted me to be here. The following week, he was discovered all chained up, shouting for help, and later on, the Acolytes re-entered the room, dungeon, or whatever, and informed Mr. Knight that he's ready for you. He was shouting, he's like, no! And then they threw him into some room. I don't know what the hell that was. Probably hell itself. That's what they were probably implying. But if you thought that was crazy, well, you ain't seen nothing yet. On the January 11th, 1999 episode of Raw, a ceremony of sorts was prepared for Dennis Knight. The Acolytes were there, Druids also, and out he came, the Undertaker. Updated look and all, Paul Bearer had dark hair this time around, and then he mentioned the Buried Alive match and how they failed to get rid of him. And if anything, he's more powerful now. He said that this was the plague of darkness that he was talking about. How he's the reaper of men, chaser of souls, the weaver of nightmares, the purity of evil. And then he stood up and spoke in tongue. He recited some sort of passage and then cut himself. He dropped the blood into this glass. Austin chants intensified, and Taker informed Dennis Knight that he's no longer Dennis Knight. He's Midian, and he drank some of that blood. Then he split open his chest, drawing his symbol. And the Attitude Era was basically the Wild West. They could do whatever the hell they wanted. And add to that, Michael Cole shouted, oh my god, he's levitating. Bro, can't you see? Then he set fire ablaze onto one of his symbols, and I don't know what to say about this. Like, it was totally out there. The commentary team were at a complete loss of words. They had never seen anything like that. I mean, if you go watch the segment, you might be disturbed a little. From here on, Midian began carrying an eye. I don't know why. And the next week, he was all happy talking about something and suggested Jerry Lawler and Michael Cole tune in. The Undertaker once again spoke about people and how the world is filled with polluted souls. He claimed Midian can see what they cannot, and Knights may have ceased to exist, but Midian was given an everlasting life. And worst of all, this wasn't it for the initiations, because January 24th will be the day the next sacrificial lamb will be slaughtered. You know what that night was? Royal Rumble, of course. So, during the night, he ends up going after Mabel. The ministry whooped his ass and tossed him into this hearse. And the following night, they made their mark by attacking Road Dogg and Al Snow. And yes, Mabel was now an official member of the Ministry of Darkness. The Undertaker was claiming that this will be a holy war, and honestly, that can mean just about anything. The ministry weren't done scouting potential new members for the group. The February 1st episode of Raw was supposed to be The Undertaker's first match back, when he was set to team up with Midian and Viscera to face the Brood, but he had other plans. By the sounds of it, the Brood were pretty over, and the match quickly went south when the rest of the ministry got involved. One thing to note, however, was the fact that the Brood assaulted the refs to prevent any kind of help, protection. It was just confusing. And then the ministry continued the attack. Things got worse for them when the Acolytes decided, let's tie a noose onto Gangrel's head, and they choked him out. As a matter of fact, he said in an interview that he was almost gonna die, but luckily, Midian saved him at that point. A couple of minutes later, the Acolytes go out to the ring to face Road Dogg and Al Snow. The match was wild, I don't need to say it. Viscera helped a bit, and then right after the match, a couple of Druids come in, jump the guys before the Undertaker once again appeared. The Acolytes removed the hoods, and it was the Brood. So it was an initiation. The Ministry is slowly getting the WWF's attention, and McMahon didn't outright mention them or anything like that, but a match between Midian and the Big Boss Man was made for St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Anyways, Boss Man won this bout, and right afterwards, the Ministry surrounded him. They attacked, and Taker slowly walked down to the ring. Viscera hit 3 splashes on the corporation's finest before dragging him to the back. So the next night on the War Zone, the Ministry come out, and Taker once again spoke about his plans. Paul Bearer, for the first time in a long time, actually spoke and suggested that Mr. McMahon listen, because it's not very often he speaks. The Undertaker then claimed that the World Wrestling Federation will be his. You know, it was totally out there. And the reason why he took out Boss Man was to warn Vince that they can take anybody at any time he desires. He also said that he owns the key to Vince McMahon's heart and soul. And while he was busy with petty dealings, you know, Stone Cold, he's actually built an army, and they've taken the power of someone far greater. Basically, what The Undertaker was trying to say is that he's gonna own the World Wrestling Federation, and he was working for a higher power. Who was that at this point? I don't know. I was looking at the dirt sheets, you know, Meltzer Wrestling Observer, and they believed it was Linda McMahon. They thought it was going to be Linda McMahon, and then McMahon's, you know, Shane and Vince were going to feud with her. That's what they believed. And honestly, that might have gone down better than what we got. Anyways, the Boss Man didn't take these statements lightly. He challenged the Dead Man to a 6-man tag and threatened to stick his foot in his ass. Leader of the Ministry, however, warned him to be very careful what he wishes for. Later in the night, the match goes down. It's like every early 99 Raw episode. Brawling for 1 minute before a real match. It eventually gets thrown out the window, and this time, The Undertaker and the Brood appeared. The rest of the Ministry refrained from fighting because, well, they had Shane McMahon. Standoff on the ramp while Taker delivered some stern words to the new European champ. Shane was getting choked out. He's struggling to breathe, and Taker handed him an envelope for his father. What was in that envelope? Well, fast forward to Sunday Night Heat. McMahon finally responds to The Undertaker. He thought it was a very ambitious plan for Taker to claim that he's gonna own the company. As for what's in that envelope, well, Vince warned Undertaker not to go there. You know, back off. He responded to this threat by booking him in a match against his own brother, Kane, in an Inferno match on Raw's War. He said that the hell that The Undertaker knows will be heaven compared to what goes down on Monday. Poor Kane, he's always forced into these uncomfortable situations. At the end of the night, the Boss Man faced yet another Ministry member, Viscera. Why am I mentioning this? Because of this cool-ass ending. So the corporation come down to the ring and jump Viscera when the Ministry make an appearance. The Undertaker said that he may burn in hell, but McMahon will be coming with him. Look at that visual. So McMahon's like, don't you go there. Like, that's gonna scare him. Just look at him. I mean, they probably should have gotten a hold of a cucumber or something. Maybe that would have helped. Maybe, but it's doubtful. At the same time, The Undertaker was asserting his power. He was disciplining members of the Brood for losing, showing that if you get out of line, translation, lose a match, you're gonna get it. The Undertaker felt that McMahon wasn't taking his threat seriously, and so he was gonna show it by bringing him a surprise at the end of the night. From the boss's perspective, if he chops the head off, well, what's left of the Ministry? It was a good idea on paper. Also, just to mention, this was the first televised match for The Undertaker since Rock Bottom in Your House. McMahon sat down and provided some insight into what will go down and everything that he was talking about, what did happen. First of all, Paul Bearer delivered a little gift to the chairman that brought him down to his knees. The mysterious gift left him speechless, and it was a teddy bear. The teddy bear got him crying, tears were streaming down his eyes, and poor Kane was on fire yet again. Man. The Undertaker then approached Vince and set the bear on fire as the owner tearfully shouted, "No," as Raw went off the air. Once again on Heat, the Dead Man sent yet another message to the owner of the company and promised something for Raw. So Vince responds to this by putting another roadblock ahead of the Undertaker, that being Mankind. If Mankind wins, he gets to officiate the WrestleMania main event. The reason why he was doing this was because he knew about Mankind's victories against the Dead Man in the past and felt he could do some damage to him. McMahon also promised a surprise for The Undertaker. Now what would that be? Well, it was Hell in a Cell against Big Boss Man at WrestleMania 15. That wasn't even it though. Anyways, later that night, Vince once again sat down at commentary to watch Taker and Mankind. During the match, The Undertaker set his sights on Vince, and just look at that. Boom, turns around, punches him. At the same time, he got counted out, but I doubt there was a care in the world for him. He strikes, looks for a chokeslam on top of the table when the Boss Man comes to the rescue, and along with Vince, he runs into the crowd. Brood and acolytes follow along, and damn, I don't think you want to piss off that guy. Mankind's all happy in the ring, but takes a choke slam. Now, the problem with this was the fact that Boss Man basically got the attention of The Undertaker, because on Heat, the acolytes tried getting a hold of him, but were unsuccessful, and things were looking dire for the corrections officer, because on Raw the next night, The Undertaker had a search and destroy rule hanging over him. It seemed like he was losing his patience with him, interrupting matches. McMahon took notice of this and told Briscoe and Patterson to keep an eye on the Ministry. They were dressed in some goofy outfits, and Briscoe thought he could take them down. Turns out he was delusional. Once they opened the door, the Godfather whooped their asses. Just wanted to mention that. Later that night, the boss man finally arrived. He wasn't afraid of the Undertaker, but that quickly changed when the rest of the ministry jumped in. That's it, they got him. After the commercial break, there he was. They dragged him out for yet another sacrifice. Taker was saying one by one the corporation will fall till there was only one, and then she too will be his. Who was she? Nobody knew at this point. Boss Man, though, managed to break free from the symbol, and luckily for himself, the corporation made the save. Hell, even The Rock came out wearing Versace. He tried to make an effort to save him. Things got worse, though, when the police ran in there, and Taker didn't mind beating them up. For odd reasons, the rest of the ministry didn't make an effort to fight them. Yeah, that was confusing. And before he surrendered, Taker set the symbol on fire right as Paul Bear received a phone call. Who was that? I don't know, Vince Russo or somebody. Afterwards, as Taker's being loaded into the car, McMahon delivered some stern words warning him of what's to come. He's like, you threaten me, you threaten my corporation, you threaten my family. You better stay in jail, because if you don't, I'm going to get you when you get out. So now that Taker's gone to jail, he wasn't planning on appearing on Raw. He's going to go someplace else to stick it to McMahon. On the March 15th, 1999 episode of Raw, Vince McMahon provided commentary for his son's match with a faux Legion of Doom. He wins the match, but that's not the point. So along with his father, they're slowly walking up to the back when a familiar voice calls for Vince. Not only that, but he was at a familiar place, which was Mr. McMahon's own damn house. And the Undertaker was waiting for her. They frantically called the police, who thought it was a publicity stunt. They ended up going. Now, just to mention, they were thousands of miles away from home. A couple of minutes later, the Undertaker's on the phone. He's literally asking the boss of the company, like, it's 10 o'clock, where's your family? Anyways, Midian, the only ministry member in the arena, was punished in a cage match, or special terms, a hard times match. The corporation assaulted him, but he was more than likely willing to take the beating. McMahon was trying to threaten Taker by having the corporation go after Midian, but the guys in Connecticut wouldn't budge. He didn't realize that they'd literally die for the Undertaker. Right as the segment concluded, a car arrived at the McMahon house. They tried calling, no answer, and once the officer did arrive at the house, nobody was there. This didn't mean they were gone, though. The Undertaker was still waiting for her, and meanwhile in the arena, Triple H was calling out Kane. He ended up brawling with him, and McMahon came out to get some much-needed help. He felt Kane was the only one that could talk to him, but he unmasked, and no, it wasn't Kane, it was him. He told McMahon that it's simple, anytime, anywhere. So at this point, the Undertaker had yet to get it. The corporation, on the other hand, had some glaring issues that the ministry took advantage of. So The Rock was out here insulting everybody in sight, including the boss man, and this led to a main event match between the guys on Heat. Kevin Kelly was asking Shane who she was, and he refused to answer. Anyways, they actually had a fight, but then the ministry came out. Rock was too selfish to do anything about it and walked to the back, but his pathway was blocked because the Undertaker appeared. Big Show tried to come out to his aid, but it was a bit awestruck with the Undertaker, and yeah, that's the segment. Also, what in the hell was this JR storyline? I mean, I get what the hell it was, but why in the hell did they do it? The final rally for WrestleMania saw a little brawl between the Acolytes and Taker and the corporation, and that's all. And then were Taker's punches fast, and that was the build-up to the match. The Undertaker had yet to show any vulnerability. He was unstoppable. Boss Man was just a stopgap in his eyes. The Undertaker was persistent. He was hard-headed. He was going to remain on the course until he gets what he wants, and that's to own the entire company. On Heat, an hour before WrestleMania 15, Michael Cole interviewed the Boss Man when the lights went out and Taker took over the speakers once again. He said that Boss Man will come face-to-face with an entire movement of darkness, and he will be his personal escort through the one-way trip. Then the Brood struck. Their music's playing, some random voices, and once the lights were back on, Big Boss Man was a victim of a Brood bloodbath. Hell in a Cell, we meet again. Basically, McMahon felt Boss Man was the right choice to roughen up the Undertaker, and looking at this story, I can't believe I thought the ministry were babyfaces as a kid. I was an idiot, because I thought the crowd were cheering him, they liked him or something. Anyways, the Undertaker had a remix version of his 1998 theme song. He had a totally different look. He was scary looking. I mean, if I was Boss Man, I'd be pissing myself. Just the thought of being stuck with that guy in that cage, oh man. The match itself, it was plotting, boring, and the fact that it was at WrestleMania didn't help. I mean, back then, Hell in a Cell was supposed to be hellacious. Yeah, it was just too much to follow, you know? But, shockingly, it isn't the worst Cell match ever. I mean, it was a couple of years ago the worst in my eyes. Hey, that's my opinion. Anyways, Taker won to go 9-0. And right after the match, the Brood descended from the rafters. They looked like a bunch of toys, and they brought down a noose for the Undertaker to use to hang the Big Boss Man. Like, what? I don't know what to make out of this, seriously. Like, what the hell is going on? Who literally pitched this in the back and was like, yeah, we should have Boss Man getting hung on live TV on pay-per-view. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to make out of this. The Brood gets stuck in the air for a bit. Boss Man's hanging. Paul Bear was lifted in a cell, I should know. And just something about this felt uncomfortable. Was it because Boss Man's dead? I'm not sure. But just something while making this video again and seeing it, something was off. And also, I gotta ask you guys one question. Is this symbolic? Is this symbolic? Oh, shut up, man. Anyways, the next night on Raw's War saw the official debut of Stephanie McMahon. She did appear on TV beforehand, but that wasn't official. Just wanted to know. So first of all, the ministry interrupted whatever Sable was doing to come out to the ring. The Undertaker was ready to choke slam her to hell and threatened to do so if Vince didn't come out. McMahon told his kids to stay put and he went out to the arena. So he asked the Phenom, "What kind of a man are you?" But then he realized something. The acolytes weren't there and he ran back shouting for Stephanie and she was gone. Shane had no idea what happened and decided to call the police, but Vince knew what Taker was capable of. I mean, Exhibit A, WrestleMania 15. Shane couldn't find her and was very remorseful, and all of a sudden the phone rings and yes, it was him. Taker was taunting him, saying stuff like, "She is sugar and spice and everything nice." And since she was nowhere to be found, Vince sent Ken Shamrock to search for his daughter. Shortly afterwards, Ken Shamrock faced Gangrel the Ministry, and he promised to get an answer out of him. And about the match, Shamrock beat him from pillar to post. He was really trying to force the answer out of him as to where Stephanie is, but before he can attempt to do so, the rest of the Brood came on and gave him a bloodbath. This time around, though, it was a bloodbath gone wrong. Christian was caught and he quickly confessed. "Oh, she's in the basement." A couple of minutes later, there she is and mission complete. And in other news, Big Boss Man made a miraculous return after 7 days. See, why can't this guy turn into a babyface? He was too much of a man, to sit down at home after getting hung at WrestleMania. Just look at him. As for Vince and Stephanie, they were interviewed by Jerry Lawler on Heat. This interview is notable for the whole "he literally believes in his character" or whatever thing. Vince revealed that the envelope contained some very candid images of Stephanie. That's for the teddy bear. She really loved that teddy bear and she was very uncomfortable discussing the stuff. McMahon felt that Taker has become this creature. He's believing in this character. Like, he was believing everything that he was saying. Not only that, but the others believed it as well. Jerry Lawler then asked him, "You created The Undertaker. What's up?" It was strange to the boss and it was far, far away from business. It was personal at this point. Stephanie was talking about how she feels safest with her father and he was ready to hurt somebody. And yeah, that's the segment. Now, a bunch believe this was something Vince Russo came up with because if you don't know, the guy really loves shoot interviews and whatnot. And yeah, that's what I gotta say. The next night on Raw, Stephanie was once again there. Shane was causing a ruckus with how things were going. He took over the show and the Ministry ended up coming out to the ring once again later that night because The Undertaker promised a sacrifice. Not any sacrifice. The one beautiful woman will be taken away from her family and she will accept him as her savior. And while Vince would do anything to prevent this, he knows there's not a damn thing he can do about it. Meanwhile, Christian received a lashing for revealing Stephanie's whereabouts, and things would look gloomy for himself when he lost a tag match that he wasn't even involved in. Later in the night, Ken Shamrock faced Viscera, and things did look good for him initially, but the rest of the Ministry ran down there and jumped him. It was damaged goods at this point, and they abducted him. The reasons were unknown, but they would become apparent later. The corporation did want to do something about it, but Shane believed it was a trap. He mentioned Bossman's neck as a reason to not go out there, and Shamrock was tossed into a trunk. The rest of the Ministry plotted, and the lights in McMahon's room were flickering, and then they completely went out. And after the commercial break, it was time for the sacrifice. Ominous music played, and everybody was under the belief that it happened. The Undertaker came out and said that Vince will be held responsible for this, and oh, there she is. The woman on the symbol was not Stephanie McMahon, it was actually Ryan Shamrock. Taker thought of her as a replacement for now, and he was going to get Stephanie eventually, but this will do from now. Stephanie was watching in complete fear. The symbol was raised, Taker was speaking in tongues, and she was screaming, and then there was this legendary moment. "You stay away from Stephanie." Bunch used to think that was about Randy Savage. I wonder why. Ken Shamrock was of course missing, and he couldn't do anything about it, but on Heat he did do something. He whooped Midian's ass, and one thing to note is that Ryan was nowhere to be found at this point. The Ministry had her, Shamrock went berserk, and he sent a message to The Undertaker saying that he's going to be at Raw in Detroit, and asked him, "I'm willing to die for my sister, are you?" During this segment, I was too busy paying attention to the crowd. They were making fun of him or something. Yeah. Shamrock was slowly turning to a babyface. Vince wasn't really thinking of business. Shane was doing a whole lot of things, and he was starting to get a big head. As a matter of fact, his father tried to lecture him on respect, to which Shane responded, "Respect this," and boom, he slaps him. Such a memorable moment. One of the most memorable moments from 1999 for sure. As for The Undertaker, he said that it was a matter of time before his daughter, Vince's daughter, Stephanie, will be his. But tonight, another innocent victim will be sacrificed, and once again, who's going to be held responsible? Yep, Vince was. Meanwhile, the Brood were set to face the Big Show in a handicap match, and I should note they received a very positive reception from the crowd. Right when the match was about to begin, The Undertaker felt Christian had to prove his worth, and so Edge and Gangrel, well, they were forced to leave or else, they were going to pay. Christian got in 0 offense and the Big Show won, and this meant a gloomy future was in store for Christian. Once again, a couple of minutes later, the Ministry made their mark. They attacked Jarrett and Owen Hart for obvious reasons, a sacrifice. And once again, he grabbed a hold of a woman and blamed Vince. He told Deborah that she's going to have to do for tonight, and then all of a sudden the crowd cheers, and out comes Ken Shamrock with a ball bat. The Undertaker, though, stood his ground, and he ended up giving the location for his sister Ryan, which JR thought was ironic because, well, Christian did that and he got punished. Ministry tried to confiscate the bat, but were unsuccessful, and he ran to the boiler room, but Taker warned him to be very careful. A couple of minutes later, Shamrock finds his sister with Mankind when they hear somebody entering the boiler room, and I just wonder, oh, who is it? Shamrock wasn't exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer. He doesn't really think things through in kayfabe, and so he got his ass beat. Mankind too. But they didn't give a damn about him. They cared about Shamrock. The commentary team were mentioning how Taker's brought this persona to life. The Undertaker called Ryan a slut and held her responsible for what's to happen to her brother. And so what I can take away from this was the fact that Taker wanted Shamrock in the Ministry. He was talking about how he's got to suffer pain and then he's going to join or whatnot. That's what I took away from this. After the commercial break, he was brought out for yet another sacrifice. So the Brood are tying him up, doing the work when the Undertaker grabbed Christian and demanded they tie him to the symbol. Viscera tries to grab a hold of Christian and he's like, no, you two put him on the symbol. And he was obviously referring to the Brood. They refused to do so, and so a punishment was looming by the looks of it. But they decided, what, screw it, and they attacked. The crowd cheered for them. Shamrock was untying himself in the midst of all this chaos. Mankind comes out. The crowd's loud at this point. Vampires were flying. Foley chants, and the Undertaker slowly descended away. And honestly, this is my favorite Ministry segment. Just chaos occurring. The Brood breaking free. I loved it. And the Taker, the one who caused all the chaos, who was deserving of the beating, runs away. At the end of the night, Shamrock, the dumbass, came out and called out the Undertaker. He talked about how Taker always slipped out the back door and actually referred to him by his real name, Mark. He told him to come out to end this thing right here and right now, and then he says, it's about time you're brought down to reality. I don't know what the hell that meant. Let's go on. Taker responds, and Undertaker's unstoppable. Luckily, though, he managed to counter. The crowd was loving it, and it was a very long time since Taker was beaten up like that. But the rest of the Ministry came out. Brood weren't there, of course. They beat him senselessly. Luckily for himself, the Corporation made the save. There was a little standoff there when Triple H decides to blast him. So he was out of the Corporation. Asshole chant intensifies. Shane McMahon had a smile on his face, and the lights go out and nobody knows what's up. On the final Raw before Backlash, things happened. First of all, the Undertaker demanded the Brood get destroyed. About the match, Shamrock ran in there and whacked Bradshaw with a baseball bat. And this meant the Acolytes were going to get it. The Undertaker didn't give a damn if Shamrock interfered, and he attacked them. The rest of the Ministry also. Later on, the Undertaker was discovered talking to Midian on the phone, and once again, he refused to accept failure. Ahead of his match with the Phenom, Shamrock faced the Big Boss Man. He struggled to manage to get through him, and right after the match, the Undertaker revealed that he had an idea about where Shamrock's sister is, and he teased paying her a visit. Meanwhile, Vince and Stephanie were interviewed on a couple of stuff when somebody gives Vince the news. He's here. Who is it? Well, you don't know. And he sprints to the son of a bitch. And the way Vince was running, you'd think somebody stole his pizza or something. Turns out it was Midian. He gets his ass whooped, manages to quickly take control and storm off into the night. And that was one hell of a segment. Unexpected chaos once again. Vince sprinting will always be iconic. That's one thing to know. The Undertaker, for some reason, wanted some of the Big Show. Unknown as to why that happened, but it did. Now their man budged, and just as Big Show had the advantage, Viscera comes in, and despite this, they couldn't knock him down. Mankind then made the save, and they worked as a tandem duo to get rid of the big guy. Taker, though, he left unscathed, and that was a common occurrence during this time period, during the Ministry. He was always fighting, but once he realizes the guy has too much heart, too much passion, or whatever, is just too tough, he decides, you know what, screw it, let them do it. And so that's the build-up to Ken Shamrock versus The Undertaker at Backlash, that's all. On Heat, The Undertaker and the Ministry caused chaos once again. They assaulted too much, and The Undertaker addressed his match with Ken Shamrock. He promised a horrible tragedy for that night, and he hoped that the Lord has mercy for their souls. What was that tragedy? Well, from the commentary team's perspective, it meant Shamrock was in for a rude awakening. Later in the night, the Ministry destroyed the Brood. They needed Viscera's help, but a W is a W. Afterwards, Taker was talking about how they should prepare for the higher power and how the tragedy begins. And as for the Shamrock match, it's a hit or miss with you. You might appreciate the submission moves, the holds, the MMA style wrestling, and all that, but others felt it wasn't that interesting. Last time around, I thought it was decent, but it was a bit boring at times, and I may have different opinions on it now if I were to watch it. I think many in the arena were expecting a very wild match or something, but it wasn't to be, and Taker was more mad-based during this time, and it was so out there. Like, Taker wasn't exactly pulling out stuff like this during the Attitude Era at all. It was unusual. I do believe if this match happened, say, in 2006, it would have been much more appreciated and would have been way better for sure. At times, some were chanting, boring, boring. Yeah, the crowd wasn't really that hot for the match. Anyways, Shamrock did put in the work, but Bradshaw ran in there with a ball bat. Taker took advantage of these distractions, and he was victorious. Afterwards, the Acolyte continued the attack. He totally destroyed the world's most dangerous man. Hell, he even choked them out. But that wasn't even it for the Ministry. At the end of the night, Stephanie McMahon was waiting for her father so they could leave the arena. The Ministry then come out calling for him while the driver leaves, departs the venue. So the car's moving, whatever. Stephanie asks him, wait for my father and whatnot, when he pulls down the window and it's the Undertaker. Where to, Stephanie? That will never get old. This and Buckle Up Teddy were some of the most unintentionally hilarious stuff I've ever seen, in my opinion. Vince was unaware of what was going on, and it would become apparent as to why Stephanie was abducted the next night on Raw. He wanted the company. The Undertaker wanted to own the WWF. McMahon arrived to the arena with the signed papers. Patterson suggested he call the cops, but Vince thought that was a bad idea. Shane McMahon, on the other hand, was not really all that worried about his sister, and several minutes later, the phone rings, and it was him. He said that Stephanie's real fine, and he didn't want to waste time. He knew Vince was aware of what he's after, that being the company. The boss assured him that the documents were signed, sealed, and were ready to be delivered. Taker then gives him the location, but the problem with this thing was the fact that he wanted Stone Cold Steve Austin to bring him the documentation. This was a tough pill to swallow for Vince, because for one, he loathes this man. He absolutely hates him with every fiber in his being, yet he has to call for him, he has to ask for his help, and second, if he doesn't do it, well, he's screwed. So he goes out there and tells Steve that he needs his help. He admitted why he needs help, and Austin didn't understand what in the hell he was saying. So McMahon tells him about Stephanie. She got abducted by the Undertaker and whatnot, but he didn't give a rat's ass about the boss's problems. Vince tried telling him the Undertaker made demands and I have to meet those demands, but Steve reminded him of the past 15 months and how he's endured what was essentially a living hell. And since Vince McMahon needs Stone Cold, by the same token, Stone Cold needs Vince McMahon to kiss his ass. Oh man, he is screwed. Realizing there's no solution, Vince decides to go out and hand him the documentation himself. In other places, the Big Show was trying to get Austin to understand, but he just didn't give a damn. Vince was waiting and waiting and waiting. Austin took notice of this, and JR was wondering, like, what is this leading to? As for McMahon, well, nobody showed, and JR speculated on what this could be about. 2 seconds later, it becomes apparent. They wanted to sacrifice her. So a couple of minutes later, they drag her out on the Undertaker symbol. They brought her out to the ring in order to have something. Nobody knew what it was. They thought it was a sacrifice. The Undertaker said that he wasn't to blame for what's about to happen. It's Vince. He didn't live up to his end of the agreement. And as for Steve Austin, he showed his true colors tonight. Austin chants intensified as Paul Bearer was reading the vows, reciting some passages. I don't even know what the hell this was about. When he reveals it's a wedding. JR's like, a wedding? Not a normal wedding, but a black wedding. Paul was asking her if she accepts Taker and whatnot when Shamrock tried making the save. He was unsuccessful. He failed miserably. In the back, the corporation were ready to go out there and do something about it, but Shane was like, if it escalates, we'll do something about it. Big Show then comes out, and he actually gets through the minions, but the groom whacks him with a ball bat. Bear then continued where he left off, and he's like, you may now kiss your bride, and the glass shatters, and there he was. Austin stormed in with a clothesline on Midian, goes toe-to-toe with The Undertaker, stuns Midian, whacks the entire ministry with a chair, and man, was it beautiful. They bolted, and definitely one of my favorite Stone Cold interruptions. Like, the fans were just waiting for it to happen, and the glass shatters, and it finally did, man. And she shows her appreciation for Austin coming out with a hug. McMahon then comes in, hugs his daughter as Raw went off the air, man. I love that moment. You look at the WWF from January to April of 1999, it was building up to that eventual Austin Taker battle. They finally collided then and there, and oh man, I loved it. The entire ministry run, Austin was kept away from them. They caused a lot of chaos around the company, but now they got into his business and escalated. I mean, The Undertaker basically called Austin a coward, and he did something about it. Not only that, he felt that saving Stephanie was the right thing to do, regardless of who her father was, because she's not to blame for what went on. So yeah. That's the ministry run. I think we all know what happened on Thursday, and I'll eventually dive into that run. I'll think of a way to do it. I don't know. Maybe we'll do it in one whole video. Maybe we'll split it into two. Who knows? But yeah. The ministry, I thought it was very entertaining. I wasn't bored at all while making this video. I actually enjoyed it. There was some goofy, cheesy-ass stuff. Some people call it B or C movie stuff, but a lot of it was entertaining, I will say that. The Undertaker, he was totally in his element at this point from a character standpoint. He was really focused on getting this thing to work. But I just don't understand why in the hell they're talking about how he's believing in this character and whatnot. It just came off as unnecessary, but hey, whatever. I don't really care about that. Another thing I really liked was the fact that The Undertaker, he wasn't scared of anybody. He was afraid of nobody, and it was really good stuff. They did go overboard a bit, Yeah, it was entertaining. It was some crazy stuff. I do think the Brood, to be honest, this is my opinion. I don't know about yours, but I think the Brood shouldn't have been in the ministry. Why? Because of the fact that I felt they were good enough on their own. They were over before joining the group. They were over after leaving the group. They should have just remained on their own. They could have feuded with them, and it would have been much better in my eyes. That's what I think. Because when they were in the Brood, they were basically like pigeonholed. They were stuck to a certain level. They couldn't rise above that. The others, it was a great platform, for the acolytes. Farouk wasn't doing anything. It really helped that he was in the group. Bradshaw also, Bradshaw before this, he was irrelevant. Midian, him also, it really helped. Mabel, Viscera, yeah, it was good for those guys. So yeah, my favorite segment from this run was definitely when the Brood left. I really love that moment. Mick Foley, Mankind comes out, whoops their asses, vampires flying around. Oh man, it was entertaining. Considered by him as the worst point of his career, he took leadership and control of several men, all in the name of an unknown higher power. The ministry were out there hanging people, doing blood rituals, blood baths, and nothing could stop them. On the very first SmackDown episode, April 29th, 1999, Mr. McMahon kicked off the show to address the events of Monday. Before he could properly speak, Shane McMahon and the corporation interrupted. Since the Boy Wonder had a hell of a lot of leverage, he was able to get rid of Father Vince. This was because of the circumstances of the confrontation, but nonetheless, with the ring cleared, Shane addressed the two people that frustrated him most in recent weeks, The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin. He knew very well that these two despised each other and thought it would be best to have them team up. Triple H on the other side was the first volunteer to challenge those two, and while there were others that wanted in, McMahon wanted takers. Obviously, he's referring to the Undertaker. He was seething over Monday and how Austin caused chaos. This is the first time in about 5 months that Austin and Taker crossed paths. They're kept apart for the longest time up to this very point. However, in that time, a lot happened, especially on the Undertaker's side. So the match was confirmed. It was going to be Rock and Austin on one side, and the other, Triple H and the Undertaker, which sounds ridiculous. There's just too much star power. Fast forward to later that night, The Rock was in the ring and he's mad over. The Great One warned Austin about double-crossing him and promised to whoop his ass if that were to happen. A few seconds later, the WWF champion was here. He threatened Rock before Shane McMahon interrupted. This man was salivating at the thought of those two fighting and felt it was the perfect time to unveil his plan. Lights go out and once again the Undertaker was here. This time though, he was side by side with Shane McMahon, but not only him though, the rest of the corporation and the ministry. They could barely fit on the ramp, and for some reason it's hilarious to think that the Mean Street Posse were associated with the Undertaker. It just sounds random, as if I were in the group or something. They're out there wearing sweater vests and the others were donning black colors. Makes for a funny visual. In other places, Ken Shamrock beat the living hell out of Bradshaw for what he did at Backlash, but on the topic of the main event, it was a very uphill battle for Austin and Rock. They didn't lose, but the match turned into one of the Attitude Era DQ things where chaos is caused. The rest of the ministry made a run before the ex-corporation members made the save. McMahon leveled his father before taking a mean-ass chair shot from the Undertaker. This led to Austin stunning the dead man and catching Shane with one as well. So even though they formed the group, Austin ran through them like they were jobbers. Later that week on Heat, they showed that the group ain't no joke and attacked the likes of Mankind. But the Big Show was able to get rid of him, and already he called out the Undertaker. The dead man was no coward and he was down to do battle. Just not alone. This only pissed off the Giant, who was so scary that Shane McMahon called the police on him. In the meantime, it destroyed the ministry's limo, and it happened just in time for the police to take notice. Shane confidently walked down to the ring in order to address the biggest problem of them all, that being The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin. With the Great One, Triple H was the perfect candidate to shut him up. As for Austin, he's facing the Undertaker for the title, and you could smell the corruption come into play here as Shane McMahon booked himself as a special referee once again. Before ending the promo, McMahon dared his father to come to Raw. Next night, the team kicked off the show, but this time around, Shane spoke about a bunch of things. He insulted the fans for living paycheck to paycheck. P. Gas was loving what he heard, and again, they look so out of place. Shane also flexed on about slapping his father before handing the mic to Triple H. He started trashing The Rock before confidently predicting over the edge in his favor. Let's skip a bit. Taker, who was too good to hold the mic, said that he purposely let Austin go. He talked about how he'll be the executioner and promised 3 things. He'll take his title, beat him like never before, and third is going to be the ultimate sacrifice the next night on Raw. Clearly, he doesn't remember what happened last time around. All of a sudden, the 4 ex-corporation associates appeared, and Foley said that they're disgruntled former employees. And oddly enough, the group was called Union. A lot of people really like to mention that name, the Union, because it's ironic. And anyways, Big Show was pretty damn close to bursting out in anger. Then all of a sudden, Foley's like, let's go and grab some balls. What? Upon hearing this, the big ministry guys didn't get any wood. With that said, Shane McMahon took the reins of the show and started doing some rebooking. Vince finally had enough of this and tried to put a stop, and at this point, there wasn't any idea of Shane McMahon's business with The Undertaker. It's obvious that they were doing this for their own good, but this was when Shane decided to drop a bombshell. First of all, he still wanted the match citing the box office draw. His mother begged him and he quickly shut her up, and the intensity here, wow, that's another story. After Vince left, Shane opted to reveal that he was the one who orchestrated the abduction. Not only that, but he did everything previously. You know, from the envelope to the teddy bear to the house visit, all of that was Shane McMahon's doing. McMahon tried doing something about this, but he couldn't even lift his hand, even though he took a huge beating the match was on. Now, the matches that Shane McMahon booked for the ministry, they failed to make good on. Nonetheless, Shane was ready for the match, and he even had the game and the dead man attack his father. After bragging endlessly about having the match won, McMahon finally made an appearance. This man took a beating like he was the 99 Knicks, yet came back and dropped Shane with a stunner. Mankind, this image says it all. Big Show, he was knocked out with ether, and Taker cracked a baseball bat on his head. All that was left was Austin and Rock in a ministry lumberjack match. Unlike the previous matches, the rest of the roster made their presence felt. This left the Big Four all alone, and the fans were going wild here, but that would be shut down when Austin and Rock were thrown off this stage. So basically, within a week of forming, the corporation and the ministry showed that despite their huge differences, the motives and the goals were the same, that being to take over the WWF. Around the end of Heat on Sunday, a very incensed Rock came out to finally offer his thoughts on Monday. He guaranteed to be over the edge in order to entertain the millions and millions of fans, and upon hearing this, the game responded. He had zero remorse and took a page out of his book saying, Rock's ass is grass. So the Great One asked the ministry to be the lawnmower. He didn't suffer for long enough though because the Union made the save. As for the McMahon drama, well, it came to a head in a huge way. Shawn Michaels made an extremely rare appearance on the May 10th episode of Raw. Funny enough, Brock Lesnar shows up more nowadays than HBK did as commissioner. Anyways, he made some changes. First up, Shane wasn't the only referee at Over the Edge. Vince was now a ref as well. Farouk and Bradshaw, they're going to face off in a ministry lumberjack match. Test was going to face the Big Boss Man in a nice stick on a pole match. The Mean Street Posse against Patterson and Briscoe. Shamrock versus Chyna. Big Show against Paul Bearer, and the man fainted. Viscera and Midian against Cactus Jack, and best of all, The Undertaker, Shane, and Triple H against Rock, Austin, and Vince himself. The special referee for this one was Shawn Michaels himself, who was not in San Antonio, as it was a pre-recorded promo. About the Paul Bearer match, yeah, Big Show was wearing jeans, so he wasn't worried, He was confident. He was so confident that he wanted the lanky dead man to come out. This almost went awry, but once again, the Union was here. Boss Man, a few minutes later, spoiled their plans. Cactus Jack showed he's indestructible, and the Acolytes were an inch away from exploding, but they solved their problems just in time for the Union to deliver a whacking. The Mean Street Posse looked like jokes, and what's even funnier about this match is the fact that it did an 8.6 rating. That was one of the highest rated matches in Raw history. Shamrock dropped Chyna with a belly-to-belly, and as for the main event, the star power was off the charts. The match didn't begin properly, which is an Attitude Era tradition. Everyone's brawling, hitting their finishes, and from out of nowhere, Austin caught Shane with a stunner, and instead of allowing his arch nemesis to win the match, he opted to stun Shane for the second time to win it for himself. That was one hell of a Raw. It was ridiculous in terms of booking, a lot of stuff was happening, and they were rewarded, Nitro was on, and so they got an 8.1 rating that night. In an effort to regain some momentum for the corporate ministry, Shane McMahon booked Stone Cold in a match with Triple H. The Rock had a much tougher task though, as he had to face The Undertaker in a casket match. Taker had felt Rock was a silly little man, and after making a mockery out of caskets and funerals, he promised to send him to a place with no return. The Undertaker claimed that the higher power wanted Austin, and the fans were clamoring for him here. Now, Monday's episode of Raw was supposed to be huge for the corporate ministry. First of all, they had a great start. They managed to do something to the Union's ride and prevent an appearance for the time being. And as for Vince, Shane was ready to bring the fight, and he wasn't joking. The door was locked, but the ministry could care less, and Briscoe and Patterson suggested McMahon search for something in the closet. The Undertaker just popped out from out of nowhere and did a number on the boss. Stone Cold didn't really speak much about The Undertaker, this is something I gotta mention until this segment. As expected, Austin wasn't afraid and even threatened Chyna if she got involved, citing it as a bonus plan for the ministry. As for Sunday, he's ready to beat The Undertaker's ass. The promo was over, but Shane felt it was necessary to talk about his plans for Over the Edge. He warned Austin not to look at him the wrong way or you will lose the title by disqualification. And seeing as Vince was in the hospital, Shane thought he needed a buddy by his side. That plan went south, and instead the Union brawled with the ministry. Paul Bearer took a stunner, and oddly enough, the man who was craving a fight didn't think it was the right moment. The reasons for this would become apparent in a moment's notice, as the next match on the Warzone was between The Rock and The Undertaker. Now about this one, The Rock was at a huge disadvantage with a broken arm. In the back, the mid-card ministry and the Union continued brawling. Oh, and this is a top 5 people's elbow, I should know. Undertaker was making more mistakes, but it didn't matter because the game and Shane aided him to victory. Triple H had to use a sledgehammer to break that damn arm, and even then, the victory wasn't enough, and Triple H showed that he's more sadistic than The Undertaker by flattening the casket with a sledgehammer. The Green One took a huge battering, and all that was left was the WWF champion. They were in hiding, but their plans were foiled after the Union appeared. This got to a point where the ministry was like, we had enough. Instead, Triple H had to do the hard work himself. During the match, the Undertaker symbol made its return, and it was a signal for the dead man to appear. The commentary speculated that Austin was possibly the supreme sacrifice, and this is a moment where the other guys came in. They're trying to jump Austin, yada yada yada, and the Union were back. Because of this ongoing chaos, Stone Cold managed to handcuff the Undertaker to his own symbol. He was raging, but Austin could care less and instead flipped the bird at him. All Taker could do is laugh at the fury that was coming Stone Cold's way. Over the Edge is remembered for a very unfortunate tragedy, that being Owen Hart's death. It's a very blurry one, you know, like there was this one time where I was watching 1999 WWF, and I just skipped through it. Like, there's just no reason to watch through the show, honestly. Like, I did watch the main event, but my main thought while watching it wasn't exactly with the match itself. On Heat, Shane McMahon of the Ministry appeared. He claimed that his arm might prevent him from counting 3 for a Stone Cold, and in order to prevent that, the Boy Wonder was going to officiate a match between Midian and Stone Cold himself. Upon arriving to the arena, McMahon nullified everything Shane booked, but even then the little man decided, hey, you want Stone Cold out of the match? Then you take his spot. He ended up accepting, and meanwhile, Rock continued roasting Triple H, leading to the game threatening to take that cast off his arm. Instead of getting pissed, he said that the only thing being removed was his boot from Triple H's ass. But back to the big story. First of all, the Union were trapped in this room. This is because Mr. McMahon was relying on them for protection. The match itself was extremely one-sided, and to top it all off, Midian destroyed his knee. Man, were they wildin' on Heat. So much developments from the show that if you missed it, well, you might be screwed. As for the show, it was off because a man died. I mean, what's there to say? McMahon was loaded onto an ambulance, leaving Shane all alone. The Union, meanwhile, managed to break through and beat the Corporate Ministry in an elimination match. Helmsley got himself disqualified and took a brutal beating from the Great One. And even though his arm was hampering him a bit, it didn't matter to The Rock, and he almost hit the people's elbow, but China made the save, leading to a Mankind run-in. All that was left was the main event. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this was the one match that I actually watched, and it's hard to remember. In Vince's place was Pat Patterson. The Undertaker brought that iconic entrance gear again, and Taker got rid of Patterson with ease. Stone Cold knew that there was no time for preparation and quickly brought the fight. The dead man slowed down the pace, but the champion had these moments where he upped the intensity. Both men were strategically targeting the leg, but it was Austin who easily edged out Taker in this instance. The damage was done there, however, the dissection coming from the challenger didn't end there. They fought in the crowd, and in all honesty, it was a plotting brawl. Punches, slow movement. After wasting so much time, Stone Cold managed to take advantage and had the match won, but Shane experienced Windows 98 lag. Even then, he went 2 for 2 just in time for Gerald Briscoe to enter the match. Now, I should note this was the final third, of course, so you could expect some drama. Briscoe was clotheslined, and all of a sudden, limping Vince made his return. It was anybody's match here. They traded blows, and from out of nowhere, Austin hit the stunner. Family drama leads to a quick roll-up, and Shane counted the pinfall fast, and this meant that the WWF Championship was within the vicinity of the Corporate Ministry. Afterwards, the Ministry came in, and it was like Austin was playing slobber knocker mode with the constant stunners. Okay, this match in particular wasn't special. For one, a man died in the ring. You can't expect them to put on a classic after that. And second, Austin and Taker did not have the best matches together. Obviously, there's some matches that contradict this, but for the most part, that statement is a fact. Here, it was a plotting brawl with the interesting parts few and far between, but again, as I said, you cannot hold that against them. A tragedy had just occurred in that very same ring, and add to that, the crowd was into the match, despite what had happened earlier on. Later that week on Heat, the Texas Rattlesnake finally addressed the events of Sunday. Austin called The Undertaker a big dead SOB and told him that there's no way that the dead man can say he's champion. He then issued the challenge just in time for the new champion to respond. Since he was no chicken, The Undertaker accepted and claimed that a gift was to be bestowed upon Heat, and that gift was Stone Cold himself. He was going to deliver him to the higher power. He wasn't exactly fearful of this and said that he's gonna put his boot in his ass and he'll be drinking beer all night long. Yeah, about that. It wasn't as simple as a straight up title match. Kicking off Raw the next night, the Corporate Ministry along with a couple of druids appeared. The Undertaker bragged about beating Austin and reiterated his statements from the previous night. What was that about? That being the decree of delivering Stone Cold to the higher power. Vince McMahon, though, didn't seem to enjoy all this talk. He called out the controversy from Over the Edge and claimed that he's going to screw The Undertaker. How's that going to be? The Undertaker was defending the World Wrestling Federation title against Stone Cold Steve Austin. However, the boss gave the dead man a chance at kicking his ass. He still held resentment from the abduction thing, but Shane didn't want to do this simply. He said that if Vince beats Taker, then the title match is on. And the Union and Stone Cold were barred from ringside. But wait, there's more. Shane McMahon even said that if McMahon loses, then Austin can never challenge for the title. Austin washed out on the back because there was huge stakes, and this one was quickly thrown out the window because Taker shoved the referee. While the decision did go his way, Stone Cold was anything but thankful. The Corporate Ministry didn't have an entirely terrible night though, because the Acolytes managed to win their first tag team titles. But the most important business was on the horizon. About this match, yes, the crowd was electric. They were behind Austin's every move, but as time went on, the champion integrated into the match. Austin wasn't entirely out of it, but the Undertaker was almost indestructible. From out of nowhere, he hit the stunner, and again, Paul Bear ruined everything, leading to the Ministry's interference. They tied him up and it was time. The higher power is here, and to give you a refresher on this unknown being, they had been mentioned several times in the past 7 months. This being was referenced to as somebody much greater than The Undertaker, to the point where he'd sacrifice himself for this greater power. It was hyped up so much to the point where it had to be huge. Taker and the rest of the ministry knelt down in anticipation for the higher power's appearance, and at this point, the commentary believed it was Shane because of the constant teases from the Undertaker early on. The higher power didn't reveal themselves then, except to one man. The man that had been a constant thorn in the ministry's side, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and his reaction is like you asked him to wrestle Jeff Jarrett. So before we move on to the big reveal, we gotta look at it from that time period. For some reason, a couple of people believe that the likes of Jake the Snake Roberts, the Jackal, Ted DiBiase, and a certain somebody were better choices. First of all, let's look at Jake Roberts. He was unreliable. If that wasn't the case, well, he would have been the best damn choice. I could just imagine the veil being lifted and his cold, raspy voice on the speaker. It would have made sense because he hated Stone Cold so much because of how he insulted his beliefs and used his misfortune as a launching pad to achieve championship glory. While Austin main evented shows, appeared on talk shows, Jake Roberts fell off. However, he had a lot of issues at the time. This would only get worse as evident by the Heroes of Wrestling show. So there was no way of this happening. The Jackal, great talker, had this charismatic leader presence surrounding him. Add to that, he actually led the Acolytes in the very beginning. But this man had more heat than a kitchen and was already gone a few months earlier. Christopher Daniels, this one is honestly hilarious to me. Sure, he had the Fallen Angel character, but he probably wouldn't have been taken seriously, you know? Like, Undertaker's hyping this guy up. He reveals himself to me, Austin, and nobody knows who he is. Ted DiBiase, similar to Jake Roberts, he had motive. This man brought Steve Austin to the WWF, yet only 5 months later, that same man drove him out of the company. Add to that, he brought The Undertaker to the WWF as well. Again, I can imagine DiBiase removing that hoodie and doing that laugh. Problem was, he trashed pro wrestling in general at the time, saying it's nonsense, this or that at church. And other wild choices could have been Stephanie herself claiming she did this for her own gain or something. And of course there's Shawn Michaels. That would have been huge, and the dynamics are weird of course, but he had his reasonings. You know, McMahon and Austin outed me from the company, and I'm here to reclaim my spot. This couldn't have been done because, for one, HBK was on a lot of stuff at this point. Add to that, he recently went through back surgery in January of '99. There's one more choice, but I'll get to him later on. On Heat, Stone Cold relayed what he saw to a couple of officials, but at the same time decided to unleash hell. This man came out to the ring several times to stun somebody, and when they did try to ask him about the higher power, he refused to say, stating he wasn't even here tonight anyways. He went on yet another stunner rampage. Look, that man was so powerful, the air stunned the ref. And it's definitely a memorable moment from the history of Heat. Kicking off Raw the next night, wrong show, on Nitro, Eric Bischoff managed to correctly guess who the higher power was despite Raw being alive an hour later. This was in spite of a bunch of speculation over other potential guys. Okay, there was a lot of hype for this greater power reveal, as evident by Vince kicking off the show to talk trash about him. The boss claimed that he had already met him and listed names that were rumored at the time, and he basically shot down those rumors. But that wasn't it, you see. McMahon wanted to face his son in a winner-take-all match. The winner earns 100% of the company's power. Shane accepted and denied being the higher power, but nonetheless it was almost time. Stone Cold, meanwhile, was discussing something with somebody in a limousine, and once more, The Undertaker started talking about how grand this greater power is and gave him a lengthy introduction. The ministry showed respect to this figure, and one thing to mention is that Shane McMahon wasn't the higher power because there he was. Now things got interesting, and the commentary was confused. They were heavily reliant on Shane McMahon being the higher power, but that wasn't the case. Although the King was fearful of Jake the Snake Roberts being the higher power, Shane made this guy seem like he was supernatural, and you'd be thinking it was the devil himself. He bestowed the honor upon Vince to reveal the greater power. Vince opted to stay in the back and asked the evil demonic figure to reveal himself. And there he was. And I've seen this a million times, but I was on the floor. Because watching the whole story, it gives off a different perspective. You see McMahon transition from this cold-hearted villain to a man with so much sympathy. And the way he's booked, there was no chance in hell was he intended to be the first choice. Hell no. As a result of this reveal, criticism from some was drawn on how the reveal couldn't live up to the expectations that the storyline had built. Here's what Bruce Pritchard had to say on Something to Wrestle last year. Yeah, not cool. I think we landed on Vince just out of not having anybody strong enough to put in that position to bring it back to what worked and what people were comfortable with and what they knew. Was that the right decision? I think that will be left up to debate for everyone else to debate. I think it was an opportunity to introduce somebody new and something different. I wasn't a fan of the reveal. Actually, I wasn't a fan of it being Vince. I was kind of like, can we get beyond that? That was, I believe, the original intent. But then as you got there, you realize, well, it's not done yet. There's still more meat left on this bone, so let's go grab what we can grab with Vince. Vince is a natural antagonist to Stone Cold Steve Austin, and to this day, people love that dynamic of Mr. McMahon and Stone Cold. It was a very natural rivalry and easy to relate to. Pritchard also acknowledged the issues of having McMahon himself as the higher power. There's holes big time. He kidnapped his daughter, burned up in teddy bear just to get Steve to trust him and come on board, just to say, haha, I got you. Yeah, there's definitely holes, but at the same time, I think had it been able to go on longer, where you actually saw Vince and Austin together a little bit longer and really believed that trust, then you would have had me hooked. But it was so fast. Frankly, I think that was the original plan, that the higher power would be somebody, yet there would be the evil emperor above the higher power. Personally, it was basically a best case scenario at the time. You can't really expect somebody that nobody knew to deliver in that position. If it were Christopher Daniels, you'd probably hear crickets at the time. The other guys, as I mentioned, were unavailable, and one man in particular that I forgot to mention was Mankind. This is the name that I've seen passed around while making this video, and apparently there were reports at the time that he turned it down. Personally, I don't think it would have been good. The Undertaker was throwing this guy off cells and caused more harm to his body than anybody else. Why would the leader of the ministry get down on his knees for this guy? Also, I liked Mankind's evolution from a deranged, bitter person to a very likable family man. It was just unnecessary. Now, on the McMahon review, we talked about the bad. Let's look at it from another perspective. The whole thing showed that he was truly insane, and judging from his character, he would actually do all of this to prevent Austin from being champion. As we all know, he hated that man with a passion, and week after week tried to screw him over numerous times. It wasn't out of character for him to play the fans with this scheme. Unfortunately, though, the way some of it was booked, he broke his leg, he took a chair shot and all that, makes it weird. Back to your scheduled program. Vince bloated about fooling the fans and placed the blame on Stone Cold for all of this. He said that there's no price he won't pay to make Austin's life a living hell. He thanked Shane, The Undertaker, and the rest of the ministry, and all of a sudden Linda and Stephanie came out. They asked the big question: why? McMahon said it was business, and speaking of business, this is when the whole thing goes south, Linda informed him that neither McMahon owns 50% of the company, rather it was equally split between the four of them, and because of this, she stepped down as the CEO of the company, and with this came a lot of changes to the way the company was structured. The moment Linda said that the employees could drink on the job, the fans went crazy. As for the successor, it was him, and McMahon was looking like he was in hell. The tie is a nice touch, and basically, whatever Shane and Vince were building, it quickly went to hell once the higher power was revealed to Austin the previous week. The Texas rattlesnake began to speak in a corporate manner, and it just sounded so odd. First of all, he confirmed his title shot, and second, Austin booked himself in a handicap match against the McMahons. They tried to sound tough, but the new CEO shut them up by booking the Boy Wonder in a handicap match against X-Pac and Kane. And the Union could face anybody they want. Triple H gets to face The Rock in a cast match. It sounds stupid, but the game was raging like someone barred him from speaking on the microphone. So basically, this was a colossal L in storyline. Months were spent trying to build the story. Women were sacrificed. Men were hung. All that happened just for Stone Cold to come in and throw that ID in the trash next to a copy of King of the Ring 1995. Very electric segment. Even if you don't like the reveal, it was entertaining as hell with the crowd following along the entire thing. With that said, Shane was saved by the posse. Triple H got his. Well, almost, because the Undertaker saved the game yet again. And the Big Show wanted the dead man, whereas Shamrock wanted Vince because he was wronged earlier on. Vince was like a kid trying to prevent an ass whooping from his parent, but once the cage opened, he was done. I'm referring to Shamrock because Jeff Jarrett smacked the living hell out of him in the shot. That shot is low-key one of the hardest I've ever heard or I've ever seen. McMahon's ran the hell out of there soon afterwards. All that was left was the main event. For one, it's a title match, and two, they broke the ring. Big Show opted to send The Undertaker down to Hornswoggle's house. As a result of this, the title match was over. Big Show dropped the rest of the ministry to end the show on top. Kicking off the June 14th episode of Raw's War, Stone Cold was shown being the worst, translation, best CEO in the world. He changed the employees' attitudes to be more in line with his. He fired guys, hired men who were deemed unqualified for the job. There's some very fun segments due to the uniqueness of it. Austin wasn't exactly shown operating in everyday type situations, such as an office, and it's awesome to see him try to bring his style to the work office. Meanwhile, Mr. McMahon denied any sort of tensions within the corporate ministry, and he even said, "That's not going to happen tonight, that's not going to happen any night." Austin chant intensified as the McMahons were deciding what the King of the Ring match stipulation could be. They considered a bunch of mid-card-esque matches, such as a blindfold match, but in the end, this segment dragged. So let's skip a little. The Stooges had an issue with Vince's recent actions and were booked to face Midian and Viscera. Fast forward to later, and the Grey One told The Undertaker that he has checked himself directly into the SmackDown hotel with his actions last week. He made the champion's taunt seem like some childish stuff. He asked him to put the title on the line. After roasting the dead man for several minutes, he had enough. Taker tried to verbally teach him a lesson and accepted the challenge for King of the Ring. All of a sudden, though, McMahon put a stop to this. Why? Because he wanted to place obstacles in the way. So he booked the match that ended up being detrimental to the corporate ministry. In a little way, I should note. After Austin ruined his company, Mr. McMahon had enough and wanted to put up his share, along with Shane's. Of course, Austin puts his share on the table for a ladder match, winner take all. Before they could announce the Rock's stipulation for the main event, Shane was seeing stars as a result of a belly-to-belly from Ken Shamrock. But on the topic of The Rock, he had to face Triple H and The Undertaker in a handicap match in order to earn the title match at King of the Ring. During the match, things were going terribly for the duo, and to make matters worse, they were bumping into each other. China wronged the wrong person, Triple H got angry, and Taker indirectly cost himself in the game of the match, making Rock the #1 contender. And what's that saying? Not tonight, not any night. Well, this directly contradicts that. The rest of the ministry had to come out and separate them, and even then the game still wanted a fight. This, of course, boiled over to heat, where Triple H said that he has one goal in mind, and that's to be the WWF champion. He didn't care if it was Stone Cold or The Undertaker who was champion. The dead man, meanwhile, was anything but worried over The Rock. But the more interesting part of this interview was about Triple H. JR claimed that the game didn't respect the dead man, and he showed that his temper was shorter than Andre's title reign. He said that if anyone had issues with him, they could come and deal with them. For all that talk, Taker ended up being the one who brought the fight to the game, and the McMahons were nowhere to be found, and similar to Raw, it was all up to the corporate ministry to prevent them from fighting. They had to wait until Monday, and it wasn't even them who started the show. It was instead an incensed Hunter Hearst Helmsley who called for his dead ass to come out. The rest of the ministry came just in time to prevent this thing from going down. Austin finally accepted the ladder match challenge and added the stipulation of his own. If the corporate ministry interfere, well, he owns 100% of the company. They turned it into a no-holds-barred match, and it was time for one of the random HBK appearances. He's donning a Spurs shirt, of course, and entered through the Brute's platform. To resolve this issue, Stone Cold faces a corporate ministry member, and if somebody from the ministry interferes, Austin gets full control. But if it goes down normally, the winner gets to choose their stipulation. McMahon chose The Undertaker to represent him, but he was booked, so it was going to be Triple H. That wasn't going to be either. Because The Undertaker was defending his title against Triple H, it was going to be the big boss man, and to prevent any interference, HBK is the special guest referee. In an effort to ease the competition, The Undertaker tombstoned The Rock. The boss man fell victim as he always did to Austin, and to gain some heat, the McMahons wanted to use the ladder, but Stone Cold flipped Vince over, and he let out the anger on the Stooges and the big boss man, who he ended up kicking out of the ministry and eventually firing. As for the title match, it was intense. The Rock interfered and ruined everything for Triple H before calling for this goofy-ass Brahma Bull symbol. Smoke was blowing from it, and the boss man of all people saved The Rock because the ministry had attacked him early on. The Rock then told The Undertaker that he's going to stick the horns up this candy ass, and so basically, from my perspective, Paul Bearer was just tied up for no reason other than to mock The Undertaker. On Heat, Mr. McMahon once again assured everyone that there's no cracks in the corporate ministry, instead claiming it's friction. HBK once again rained on their parade after hearing the McMahons say they could fight all night. So he booked the match between Vince and Shamrock. Man, they were really on something because this damn stuff was happening on Heat. Obviously, it ends in interference or something stupid, but it's cool to see that they put effort into the pre-show. Anyways, Michaels was fair and asked if Vince wanted to find a replacement. Unfortunately for him, everyone was booked except for the Acolytes, but HBK likened them to the Olsen twins. It's very hard to explain. All that was left was Shane, and his reaction is like he was going on a road trip with 1995 HBK. Once again, the corporate ministry is barred from ringside about that match. Well, this is Heat. I mean, what do you expect? Steve Blackman, of all people, interfered, and Shane was left unscathed. The Rock, meanwhile, gave his final thoughts on his title match with The Undertaker, and after roasting his 33-pound head, his Mickey Mouse tattoos, the dead man shut him up and did something about that symbol. Moving on to the show itself, yes, Shane was hurting, and it was an awkward situation for Vince himself, who canceled the match. Like HBK had been annoying him in the back for years, he did the same thing over here. It was like real life. HBK got what he wanted. So Mr. McMahon asked for a replacement. In other places, The Rock and The Undertaker had one of the world-famous Attitude Era brawls, and once they entered the ring, The Rock never seemed to click just yet. The champion applied a lot of pressure to him and tried to keep him down, and it took time, but The Rock was finally back in it. He hits the people's elbow, but the ref was knocked down. Paul Bearer brought out that ether, and it went to the wrong person. Helmsley, though, hated The Rock so much that it cost the match, and even then, The Rock kicked out. The Undertaker ended up hitting the tombstone to retain it, and this match, honestly, I don't see why you should watch it. If you're a big Attitude Era person, then that's a different story. Also, if you're a fan of The Rock, The Undertaker, maybe you will enjoy it, but it's not like stand out. It's not one of those main events that we know from the Attitude Era. This interference was catastrophic for the corporate ministry because Triple H was kicked out of the arena, so Vince had to call somebody on the phone. Turns out, Steve Blackman was the partner for all of 2 minutes because Goldust decided to expose him. Steve Blackman was kicked out, and Stone Cold had momentum on his side like he was the 99 Spurs, while the McMahons were the 99 Knicks. Low-key, this is a match I like. It clearly wasn't going to be revolutionary or even a memorable affair, at least for the action, but looking at the situation itself with Shane and Vince, yeah, it was good enough. Austin the entire time was dropping them, throwing them into ladders, and at one point dropped all these ladders onto them. He dived through tables, and it was everything that it needed to be. I mean, you weren't expecting them to hit DDTs off ladders or anything like that. He dished out a 15-minute beatdown, and when it was time to retrieve the briefcase, somebody raised it. Austin couldn't really do anything about it, and the McMahons finally took advantage of the numbers to win it. Decent match, not must-watch or anything like that, but if you're going to watch it, I assume you're going to enjoy it if you like the matches from this era. If you don't, well, that's a different story. Since my video got delayed due to some rendering issues, I listened to Bruce Pritchard's podcast, Something to Wrestle, about King of the Ring 1999. And he spoke about the possibility of somebody else raising the briefcase. It wasn't always supposed to be Boss Man, and they actually considered other people. And here's what he had to say about that. The story was there, and you could have got another layer to the story. Instead, it was just, okay, they sold the company back, we're back to where we were, and it was a reset. It just was anticlimactic as you're a viewer and you're waiting for the payoff, and your payoff is, well, nothing's changed. So it was underwhelming to me, and it was a lack of planning or just a lack of not really knowing where the hell they wanted to go. He was then asked about the possibility of it being somebody other than the big boss man. It was someone like that. The original germ of the idea was, What if it was like a Linda or a Stephanie or someone like that had been on Austin's side prior to that, and then it was within Bossman had taken over? There were a lot of different things that were bandied about, but the original germ of the idea was for someone to double cross Austin. Alright, I think that would have been interesting as well, but I don't know how they would have went about it, because the WWF 99 was kind of wild, and they were doing some random ass stuff just for the sake of it. I don't know. The very next night on Raw's War, you're expecting Stone Cold to have a terrible night. Nope. It was the contrary. The corporate ministry came out and the crowd was excited. McMahon guaranteed that this will never be a forgotten night, and I gotta say, he ain't wrong. Shane McMahon fired Stone Cold as CEO, and they said that he will be at the bottom as an in-ring performer. Since he was that, Stone Cold was wrestling in the opening match and will disassemble the ring after the show. Vince announced the Undertaker and Triple H match were fully loaded, and all of a sudden the Big Boss Man with the Hard Time song comes out. Turns out this was all a scheme. It was all a scheme. They kicked him out of the ministry in order for him to raise the briefcase, and they had him rejoin the very next night. That's the story, basically. The Undertaker was apparently too cool for all of this, of course, and the boos would soon turn into cheers as Stone Cold interrupted. Knowing very well that he could be screwed, Austin made sure to sign a new contract and remove the whole no-touch rule from a while ago. Other than that, he did nothing. Just book a title match the night after King of the Ring, and upon hearing this, they were pissed. Oh, and I should note the corporate minister are barred from ringside. Fast forward to the end of the night, and this is a very memorable matchup from the Attitude Era. And it wasn't because of the action, rather the occasion. Because this is the highest rated segment, cable I should note, in wrestling history. It did a 9.5, which saw almost 11 million people watch The Undertaker and Stone Cold face off, and it also helped that Nitro ended a bit early. The match itself wasn't noteworthy, basic action, but people were invested in the characters a lot, so that helps. Austin caught Undertaker with a stunner, but Paul Bearer ruined everything, and it didn't matter though, because Austin hit yet another stunner, and all was normal again because the WWF title was back to its rightful owner. The Undertaker though didn't appreciate this and whacked the new champion in the face with the title. Stone Cold was bleeding, yet was forcing a comeback, but unfortunately for him, the Undertaker was far too much here. By heat, it had become apparent that the Undertaker craved blood. Not anyone's though, he wanted Austin's. The Dead Man issued a challenge for Fully Loaded First Blood match. Austin responded the very next night on Raw, and he told McMahon that he crumbled up his plans and shoved it in his ass, and yes, he accepted the match. I mean, this guy would accept that challenge from his grandma. He said that it was right for the match to be First Blood because Payback's a and an incensed McMahon stormed down and said that he's got something to say. You see, McMahon was so annoyed with Austin as a champion that he risked it all. If Stone Cold wins, he will never have anything to do with him again. However, if it goes the other way, Austin could never even attempt to challenge for the title. You see, Steve Austin was marketable. He was a notable face, but as champion, it causes a whole lot of issues for McMahon. He's not corporate friendly, but regardless, Austin on the roster makes him cash, He's better off on the roster making him money than having him fired. It's just not best for the company's image that he be champion. That's basically my perspective as to how Vince goes about things. McMahon went on to add that if The Undertaker loses, McMahon, is gone. Fans went crazy upon hearing that, I should know. After suffering a motorcycle accident, the boss came out to the contract signing in a wheelchair. Instead of signing straight up, he dragged the contract signing like it was an 8-minute YouTube video. First up, he refused to sign until Stone Cold does. Austin was going to, but demanded the Smoke and Skull title. Lights went out and suddenly Kane's music played, but turns out this was a setup and the Undertaker blasted him with a title, and instead of signing the contract like a normal person, McMahon signed it with Austin's own blood. The champion was downright pissed, and the Big Show felt it was necessary that he had help because on the side, the Undertaker was trying to recruit Kane. That's a bit of a different story. About that, yes, Austin was busted open again, but unlike last week, he stood tall. On the final Raw before Fully Loaded, tensions arose within the corporate ministry. McMahon said that his career wasn't the only one on the line because Undertaker's was as well, and once he heard this, he didn't take it lightly. You see, his problem with Austin was personal. Clearly, Vince wanted to show who's the boss, and Taker had this confused look on his face. Seeing as Triple H likes to get involved in everything, he did that here, and it was something. He asked McMahon to place him in the title match, and this convinced the boss to have a number one contenders match with the winner facing Austin at Fully Loaded, while the loser faces Rock in a number one contenders match for SummerSlam. Suddenly, Stone Cold's music plays, and he's out here with a bloodmobile. Makes sense. The Undertaker wants blood, and he's about to get locked in the truck. Austin also said that he was going to donate a part of Vince's blood, and as a result of this, he had to be guarded by Triple H the entire night. The number one contenders match went the Undertaker's way, and afterwards, the Austin gave everyone a preview of Fully Loaded. He launched the Dead Man into the Bloodmobile and finally got his hands on McMahon. Defenseless McMahon took a couple of shots directly to the face with the title, and there was nobody to save him. Triple H was busy with The Rock, Shane was nowhere to be found, and The Undertaker was locked up. Austin signed the contract, and the match was confirmed. All was good on his side, but then The Undertaker returned and opened up that wound again. It didn't help that The Undertaker opened him up on heat as well. What this meant was, his chances increased gradually, while Austin's drastic go down. An extremely angry Rattlesnake ruined Jeff Jarrett's night by randomly hitting a stunner on him and told the dead SOB that he's entering the match the same way he is. Well, Stone Cold said it was true because he attacked The Undertaker and he bled. Now, about the First Blood match, I liked it. It's like any other Attitude Era match. It doesn't stand out because Undertaker hit a moonsault or something, but it just clicked well. I'm not saying it's match of the year. Matter of fact, there's some that don't even like this match, and there's a part of it that kind of drags, but it picked up. Austin knew that forcing Taker to bleed would be an uphill battle, so he went after the knee for a while. He inflicted damage to the face, but no results were found. Taker was stuck on the ropes at one point, and Shane had to save him by taking a shot of his own. It was so bad for the ministry at this point that Vince got involved. Taker did bounce back, but after attacking X-Pac earlier on, paid the price for it and took a spin kick with a chair to the face. Austin grabs a TV camera, and there he is bleeding. Crowd's going wild. Shane's taking a beating, and all that was left was for the ref to verify. He's busted. Ref takes a right hand. Vince is sad, but it didn't matter because he took a stunner. Helmsley, the #1 contender, made a run before The Rock followed up. Undertaker and Austin were still battling, and because he couldn't see anything, he nailed Shane. It was electrifying, and after all of this, Stone Cold wanted to wish McMahon goodbye. How? By hitting a stunner. Very exciting main events. The Attitude Era formula just worked, you know. The final third of the matches are always must watch. It doesn't matter what happens early on, they always bring it near the end. Mr. McMahon was gone, and basically in storyline, the corporate ministry was a failure. The boss spent all this time to form a plan, and Stone Cold not only fooled it, pissed on its grave. Shane announced that the corporate ministry was no more the following week, and so that's the run. Honestly, when I compare it to the ministry, I just don't like it as much. The Undertaker, I feel like he let himself go a bit here. Like, once Vince came in, it was like a different story. The Shane McMahon partnership was kind of interesting. But once Vince comes in, he was just a lackey, which is weird because he was the leader initially of the ministry, and he should have been much more of a focal point, you know? He was a focal point, all that, but it's like he took a back seat to the McMahons in a way. He's talking about this greater power, and it ended up being Vince, of all people. It was surprising. It's hilarious to this very day. It's often quoted, you know, it's me, Austin. So that's cool. And like I said, they didn't really have many choices for the reveal. But after the reveal, I feel like the corporate ministry fell off, honestly. It felt like the Corporation 2.0 with The Undertaker in The Rock's position, basically. Could have gone down better, but they didn't have an idea of who the higher power was from the very beginning, which kind of hurt it in a way. Now, as I said earlier, The Undertaker wasn't really a fan of his ministry gimmick, and I remember this from an old WWF documentary. Seen some clip of it a long time ago. But if you want to read what he said about it, here it is from The Undertaker Dead Man Walking, and I quote, "The ministry was kind of the last facet of the dark side stuff," Mark said. "I'm not sure it was a good idea to have the ministry join with the corporation," said Mark. "It was all about the McMahons and meant that The Undertaker was no longer leading the pack." Yeah, I agree with that, you know, like, as I said earlier, with the Shane thing, it wasn't bad or anything like that, but once Vince came along, that's a different story. The Attitude Era to those guys was fun. Just look at the other guys and gals like D-Lo, The Godfather, Chyna. I felt like the stars of that time enjoyed what they were doing. But when I see the APA, it's a different level of enjoyment. They enjoyed whooping ass, sometimes for real, and just drinking beer and playing cards. Their run lasted for 5.5 years with a small break in between 2002 and 2003, and while they weren't the most impactful team in terms of accolades and moments, they were among the most entertaining for sure. Before this video starts, I just want to say, what the hell is that APA t-shirt? Explain to me. Always pounding ass. Yeah, that's pretty smart. I just shudder to think how that was discussed in the boardroom or an office. Hey, we should call it Always Pounding Ass. And that t-shirt, man, I want to be caught dead wearing one of those. Right now, let's get into it. The Acolyte Protection Agency. As you all know, the two loved drinking beer and pounding ass. But how did they form? Well, before the formation of the Acolytes, Bradshaw was mostly a lower card heel. Sometimes babyface, depends on what time period. He wasn't really doing much. Farouk, on the other hand, he was the leader of the nation, and after getting kicked out of the group, he was in limbo. They just didn't have any plans for him, which I find quite bizarre because this guy was the WCW World Heavyweight Champion 6 years earlier. That's when they decided to pair these two. The Jackal, better known as Don Callis or Cyrus, began managing the team of Bradshaw and Farouk. At this point, both men weren't doing much as single stars, and yeah, that's it. The Jackal was starting to call them the Acolytes, and funny enough, Callis himself would get fired a couple of weeks later. He had some heat within the company, and Bradshaw himself wasn't really a fan. There's a story around about Bradshaw asking the Hardies to stick some toothpicks into Callis' car. This is where he changed his clothes due to the heat he had back in '98. Also, his nickname in the back was Monkey Boy, yet he was paired with the two. Since he was gone, the Acolytes were left in limbo. Well, a couple of weeks later, that wouldn't be the case. Why? They were paired with The Undertaker's new faction, the Ministry of Darkness. The duo were the henchmen that rarely spoke. They did Taker's dirty work, destroyed opposition, and one example of this is perhaps the most memorable. On the March 7th, 1999 episode of Heat, the Acolytes faced the new team on the block, Public Enemy. The match itself was a total destruction of the new team. They already made a name for themselves in ECW and WCW, but the Acolytes wanted to welcome the team in the WWF in the best way possible. Now, the story goes from JBL that Public Enemy arrived to the arena much later than the rest of the roster. You know what? Here it is. This is what he has to say. He explains it way better than I would. As we were standing in Gorilla, curtain right before ring entrance. The music was playing and one of them said to me, "We don't like the table spot. We will do something different." I just said, okay, what was I supposed to say? The table is the finish. I have no idea what they wanted to do. Ron turned to me and asked what happened. When I told him, he calmly replied, "If they don't want to go through the table, then we'll take the table to them." Jerry Briscoe is the only person in Gorilla, and this match was for Sunday Night Heat, and came straight to me alarmed and asked if we were putting them through the table. My response, yes, I just don't know if it will take 15 seconds or 15 minutes. Jerry said to me that we were to get the proper finish done. We didn't know what to expect. We didn't know if we were walking to a shoot or what we were walking into. We decided to get our heat from the start. We took over on them, and you could see for yourself in the video. After this, Public Enemy was basically gone from the WWF, and if you watch that video, basically you realize they got their asses handed to them, and they didn't retaliate. They didn't fight back. So basically, they were scared to fight, and they were disrespectful earlier on, and so the Acolytes put them in their place. As for Bradshaw and Farouk, their first real action as a team came on the May 31st, 1999 episode of Raw's War, when they got the chance to challenge the superhero team of Kane and X-Pac. At this point, the Ministry and the Corporation merged to form the Corporate Ministry, and so the Acolytes represented the supergroup. The match went pretty well for the Acolytes as Shane McMahon watched on from ringside. He influenced the results of the match when X-Pac ran into a chair shot. Bradshaw connected with a lariat, and they were champions. Their title reign, though, it wasn't remarkable, but the ending of it certainly was. Why? Well, you know how the Hardys were essentially the punching bag for the entire WWF roster? On the July 5th episode of Raw, the team challenged for the Acolytes' titles. For years, Jeff and Matt were getting beaten up, but on this night, though, they stepped up to the challenge, and with the coaching and guidance of Michael P.S. Hayes, who was wearing skater shorts, which is something you can't unsee, by the way, the duo upset the champions to capture the gold. If you look at it from the perspective of that time period, definitely an upset. I mean, the Acolytes were pretty much unstoppable in the tag division at this point. They were beating everyone left and right. Didn't matter if it was the Brood. Didn't matter if it was the Hardys. Didn't matter if it was the New Age Outlaws. They were winning. Most of the time, obviously. The duo were pretty pissed off with the loss, and they received a rematch at Fully Loaded. Beforehand, though, the two were demanding a fight with anyone. Their original opponents, D'Lo Brown and Mark Henry, had other plans. So, guess who came out? Hardcore Holly. And what followed was pure violence. He gets his ass beat, and the Big Show had to come out and stop this. Now, about their rematch, it went very well. First of all, it was a handicap match featuring Michael P.S. Hayes. Second, the ending was pretty rough. Poor Jeff Hardy. Unfortunately, once again, this was a transitional title reign, and at this point, the Ministry was no more. So the Acolytes were in limbo. They were mostly featured on Raw, though, but there just wasn't a story for them. There was, however, some stiff-ass matches against the Dudleys, so there's that. You guys should check some of those out, because they're rough as hell. But then things would change for the Acolytes. In an interview with Corey Graves on After the Bell, this is very, very recent, by the way, JBL discussed how the APA thing was formed. And I quote, "It was my birthday and we'd wrestle up in Philadelphia and we were down in Baltimore. We're staying at the old Red Roof by the airport and I wanted to go get something to drink. Godfather was riding me, Teddy Long, Ron Simmons. It's my birthday, so they're feeding me everything I can ingest. By the time I get to Baltimore, Ron goes, 'I'm going to bed.' And I go, 'Well, I'm going to the bar. It's my birthday.' So I went down to the hotel, which we never did, but I knew there was going to be people down there to talk to. I ran into Vince and Shane. They bought me some drinks, put me in their car, and sent me back to the Red Roof. I get to the Red Roof, and I'm stumbling around, and Ron said, 'How did you get back?' I said, 'Vince's limo.' He goes, 'Where, you went to the TV hotel?' I said, 'Yeah,' and he goes, 'You still got connections in Japan?' I believe he's trying to imply the impending firing of Bradshaw. Then he got called into Vince's office the next day. So I went in there and thought, okay, this is it. He's going to ring me out for being drunk at the TV hotel. And he goes, 'I want to put that on television.' I said, 'Put what on television?' And I'm still so hungover, I'm seeing triple. He goes, 'You and Ron sitting around BSing and having beers.' He goes, 'That's good stuff.' He goes, 'I like that. That's just guys.' And I go, 'You want me and Ron to sit down and drink beer on television?' He goes, 'Yes.' He goes, 'I got it all figured out. The Acolyte Protection Agency, the APA. You're going to beat people up for money.' So I go back and tell Ron, and he goes, 'Yeah? When are we going to Japan?' I said, 'Ron, Vince wants us to drink beer on television.' Ron goes, 'That's the best idea I've ever heard.' And that was it. Damn, your career could swing upwards or downwards at a moment's notice. That's what happened here. These guys essentially became much bigger than they were previously due to Bradshaw getting drunk, basically. Now, when did the thing debut on TV? I believe it was around October 18th, 1999. Around that time period, they were playing cards with Howard Finkel and Chris Huge, and then it was like official the following week when they visited the Friendly Tap. Some guy wanted to buy them a drink, but they declined. Bradshaw and the guy had a little arm wrestling contest, and Bradshaw won when one of the guys asked if his darky friend can't count. This prompted a brawl. The duo caused total anarchy in the bar, and another time some goons were looking for a fight with the Acolytes and they obliged. The beating was completely one-sided, and the assumption was that these guys were bar owners. After the commercial break, they found the battered guys in a room and the fight, well, wouldn't call it that, continued. Looking at this segment, you can notice a significant change in their characters. They were into beer and cards. They weren't those guys that just came out with no emotion, just destroying people. Over the next couple of weeks, the new Acolytes fleshed out their characters. They were hustlers. One moment in particular saw Bubba claim he won a game of 6 cards, which was a game of 5 cards, except he was dumb. And it turned into a mean-ass brawl. Also, every time WWF was in Providence, the Friendly Tap was the Acolytes' home bar. They always visited. During a little program with the New Age Outlaws, they made their presence felt in the bar once again. A bunch of guys ran away realizing what's to come because of the previous incident from October. And funny enough, the Outlaws were there. As if APA didn't know. I mean, they were very well aware that the champions were there. The little douche from last time was there, and he was fixing to get his ass whooped. Billy and Road Dogg managed to run the hell out of there. And yeah, that's it. APA, they were good guys now. They're destroying anyone that disrespected them even a little bit. Now, the match of the Rumble didn't go well for the Acolytes. The Outlaws were cheating and X-Pac interfered, and so they lost. But luckily for the duo, things were much, much, much brighter from here on. On the January 31st, 2000 episode of Raw, the Mean Street Posse were desperate for help from the Acolytes. The two refused to help, and they were willing to kick their asses instead. But then, the trio offered a little something called money, and Bradshaw had a bright idea. Make a protection business called the APA. Later that night, the Dudleys asked for help too. They didn't have money on them, unfortunately, and they offered to write a check instead, which stunned Bradshaw completely. Farouk, though, accepted, but warned the duo, stating if the check bounces, their asses bounce too. Later that night, the APA showed what kind of business they specialize in. The Hardies were thrown around and totally destroyed. Edge and Christian tried to make the save, but the APA showed quality work. There was a little friction there when Bubba asked them to set up a table, and eventually they obliged though. The Hardys were basically dead, as you can see here, and APA got a 5-star review on WWF.com from the Dudley Boys. From their many sought the services of the APA. Heels and faces, it didn't matter. Terry Runnels one night wanted them to do her own dirty work in facing Edge and Christian, and the guys nearly 100% of the time they delivered. All you had to do was pay. Midian one night didn't have money to pay for their services, and so he was forced to work for the group for a couple of weeks. After Wrestlemania 2000, things started to pick up for the duo. One night, Triple H was arrogant enough to defend his title against Taka Michinoku, so Taka was smart enough to get some protection in the form of the APA. He had a very competitive match with Triple H. It was awesome. The game made everyone believe that maybe it's Taka's night. I'm not exaggerating. Just go watch. The fans, they were all in on Taka. The guy was lower card at this point. He wasn't really winning matches, but they were following his every move. Unfortunately, though, Shane brought out his dad to negotiate, I guess, but he opted to bring in a boss man and Buchanan to do the work. Chris Jericho the following week brought them out to provide protection in his title match against Triple H. The investment paid off as Chris Jericho captured the title, if only for 10 minutes. Now, the team weren't finding success as a tag team. They were winning matches all over the place, but when it mattered the most, for the titles, interference or cheating cost them the match. But it was all good because the duo were featured on TV weekly, and occasionally they actually main evented shows. Their office, which I forgot to mention earlier, wasn't really an office. I'm sorry about that. It is an office. Look at that. There's a door, and about that door, if you don't knock, you'll get your ass rocked, basically. That's what it was with the APA. You have to knock on that door. Just ask Just Joe.
Hey, guys, what the hell are you doing? Door, Joe! You were just begging for a kicking. What? Knock!
I believe they knew their moment was going to come, win the titles, but until then, they were just going to have fun. The APA had a little feud with the Right to Censor, and this got them on the WrestleMania card where they teamed up with Taz. Jacqueline came out along with them, and they beat the duo. They rocked them. They destroyed them. They demolished them. But when the invasion occurred, the APA were somewhat more prominent than ever, I guess. On the July 9, 2001 episode of Raw, the APA got a WWF Tag Team title shot. Since Spike Dudley had a little issue with his brothers, he interfered and whacked Bubba in the ring. Bradshaw at the clothesline from hell, and they were champions. During the invasion, the Acolyte Protection Agency sided with Team WWF as expected. They were given pep talks, rallying up the boys. They were leaders. Unfortunately, though, they were victims of the invasion's ongoing title changes, and so they lost the titles a month later when Test went rogue and turned on Team WWF to hand Canyon and DDP the gold. They failed to recapture the titles throughout the invasion. Bradshaw's attempts at singles gold were mostly unsuccessful until he captured the European title on the October 22nd, 2001 episode of Raw. He held the title for 8 days before losing it to Christian. Unfortunately, after the invasion, they were the team that lost to the champions, basically. Also, it was the same situation here as I mentioned earlier. Win the normal matches, but lose the title matches. But then in March 2002, we realized that all good things must come to an end, and that's what happened on the March 28, 2002 episode of SmackDown when the APA closed shop due to the draft. Bradshaw went to Raw while Farouk went to SmackDown. They held one final party in the office, and a bunch of WWF stars had fun, except for Christian. William Regal then entered the room and told the APA that they're out of business now. And it turned into an all-out brawl befitting the Acolyte Protection Agency's run. It was a sad ending, as you can see here, but at least the guys ended things on good terms, unlike other teams. Now, their singles runs were they weren't noteworthy, to be honest. Bradshaw won the hardcore title 18 times. He renamed it the Texas Championship too, and I believe he was pegged to get some kind of minor push, because he was teaming up with Austin in like April and May of 2002, so there's that. Farouk, on the other hand, he became Ron Simmons once again. He was feuding with Reverend Devon for like several months, I believe, and yeah, he just disappeared by the end of the year. He wasn't there. Bradshaw suffered an injury in September of 2002 that left him sidelined for 6 months. He wrote a book on financial management during his time away, and once he was able to compete, WWE decided to reunite the APA one more time. On the June 19, 2003 episode of SmackDown, the APA made their return, saving The Undertaker from an FBI attack. Bradshaw was sporting a new look, as you can see here. Now, this APA run wasn't memorable in terms of matches, I guess. Their matches were decent, they weren't bad, but they weren't like impactful, memorable, or something like that. They were more memorable for their backstage segments, I guess. The most memorable thing to come from this run, I believe, was the Barroom Brawl. You know, Vengeance 2003. That's probably the most memorable segment from this APA run. So basically, before Vengeance, the APA invites a bunch of stars to the Barroom Brawl. Spanky, Canyon, who's busy getting cable at his house, Brother Love, Doink the Clown, Johnny from Tough Enough, the Easter Bunny, the A-Train, the Brooklyn Brawler wanted to come. And the brawl itself was wacky as hell. The rules of the match were simple. Drink and fight. It was meaningless fun. I don't think it was supposed to be taken seriously, because if you do take it seriously, like, you're not gonna like it. But yeah, it's just some mindless fun. Brother Love proved to be a snake. Sean O'Hare was just chilling. Spanky was getting thrown around. Funaki was drinking. Matt Hardy was doing whatever. And one of the most memorable moments from this segment was when Funaki knocked himself out, I guess. Brother Love was treacherous as hell, but the APA, as expected, ended this thing on top. Other than that, the APA were featured on SmackDown nearly every week. They were featured on SmackDown pay-per-views too, but they weren't making an impact. Ron Simmons was considering retirement around late 2003, and WWE tied this into a storyline following WrestleMania 20. On the March 18, 2004 episode of SmackDown, Paul Heyman, in a very foul mood, ran into the APA who were making fun of him. He told the APA that they got a tag team title match, but if they lose, well, they're fired. About the match, they screwed up, and so the APA were basically gone. The duo couldn't believe what had transpired, and they immediately barged into Paul Heyman's office. Bradshaw asked Paul to say the words. He was threatening him, like, just say the words. But he reminded Bradshaw that he's not the one who's fired. It's Farouk. Why? Well, Bradshaw's got a successful portfolio. He's a stock market analysis, and he realized this. So he didn't walk out with Ron, as this would be very detrimental to his career. His partner was let down by this decision, and his final words, well, I'll be damned. That's what they were. So the APA was over. Enter JBL. And if you want the story of JBL, check out the Eddie Guerrero title reign video. I think I did a good job in there explaining how the JBL character was born. Anyways, APA's run was memorable. They weren't the most impactful team, but their segments were always entertaining, bar none. It doesn't matter. They were entertaining in the Ruthless Aggression era, the Attitude era, everything. They were just randomly paired up, and yet they managed to turn it into something very special and last 5.5 years together. So there's that. I personally love the APA, like I said. They did make a couple of reunions a couple of years later, like Raw 15th anniversary. They appeared at Raw 25. I shudder to think what would have happened had this team not been formed. Like JBL, he would have been gone. They were doing nothing with him in 1998. I think he would have disappeared. Farouk, who knows? He was doing nothing too. Maybe he could have gotten released. Maybe he would have worked as a road agent. But yes, the team was successful. It gave those guys something to do. They were having fun on TV every week, and you could see it. And if this team didn't happen, I don't think JBL would have been WWE champion, so there's that. Also, it's quite weird to see JBL as a lower card talent, and only 2 months later as WWE champion.
The tag team division in the WWF had felt like a huge priority during the Golden Age. Several strong, legitimate tag teams that excelled, the teams that felt like a big deal at times, main evented shows. The Hart Foundation, the Legion of Doom, the Rockers, but as time went on, the division lacked interest. This wasn't just a tag team problem. The WWF suffered in all areas, it's just the division felt more obvious and glaring. With the new generation in full swing, the tag teams just didn't hit the same. They're definitely memorable, no doubt about it, but because the previous teams in the golden era were top 10, it makes things look worse than they were. However, the future of the tag team division was right under their noses at the time. Emerging from Cameron, North Carolina was Matt and Jeff Hardy. The two brothers had grown up as lifelong wrestling fans and their passion was wrestling. It got to the point where both brothers trained themselves and even created their own wrestling promotion, which was later known as Omega. The promotion went by other names initially, and instead of wrestling in a regular wrestling ring, the brothers were having matches on trampolines. It simply came down to passion, and Matt Hardy himself elaborated further in an interview. And I quote, "When we would watch TV, we fell in love with wrestling, whether it was NWA or WWF. We begged our dad for a year to buy us a trampoline, and when he got us a trampoline for Christmas, we started putting together some moves. I was always the Macho Man Randy Savage, and Jeff would be Sting. We would emulate our favorites, and we then decided to turn the trampoline into a ring by cutting down some trees to use as ring posts, and we tied some rope around them for the ring ropes. We then saved up for a video camera to film what we were doing. We just loved doing everything about the wrestling business, and we worked hard to follow our dreams, and here we are in 2014, still wrestling for TNA on Global TV. The brothers had gimmicks. Matt was High Voltage, Jeff was Wolverine, who was based on Sting. Shannon Moore and Gregory Helms joined in, and this thing was slowly expanding in interest. Connections were made, and they started wrestling in public. Matt Hardy had done a lot of hard work as a promoter, and before he knew it, he met the Italian Stallion, and from out of nowhere, they started working as jobbers on TV, and this was right after WrestleMania 10. It seems like a mind trip to see the Hardys in the early parts of the new generation era, but with that said, the Stallion had started taking money from the brothers. He's like, oh, I give you guys this opportunity, you gotta give me some. They make 300, 400, they're left with 150 because he was giving them rights to the show. Sometime later, they grew tired of him and he bailed on him once, and instead of waiting or calling on him, they drove themselves and told the WWF that if they want their services, they should call them instead of the Stallion. Matt did have some praise for him due to him instilling some knowledge of the business into the Hardys, but in general, it was a small chapter in their careers. Jeff debuted as well and lied about his age. At the time, he was 16. However, this worked to his benefit. For one, Scott Hall took him under his wing and Hardy had more than positive words for him. And I quote, "Then moving forward, Scott Hall was so kind because he thought I looked like Vanilla Ice, and the clique started calling me Ice, and I'll never forget one time he told Pat Patterson, I was like 16 or 17 too, let's get this kid on the road, get him seasoned. I'm not even legal yet." There's something very special to what he saw. He saw my future through whatever it was, and he believed in us every step of the way, and that's rare, man. Matt and Jeff continued wrestling as enhancement talent. At one point, they featured in King of the Ring 1995, opening the doors for the wrestlers. They were slowly brought in and trained under Dory Funk. One advantage both men had at this point compared to others is that they had experience. Back then, it was likely a wrestler would have to pay their dues and go through a bunch of things before becoming an official member of the roster. These guys had been wrestling for years, so when they officially signed in 1998, all was good. Now, Matt and Jeff were actually pitched to join DX around this time period. You'll see moments if you look back in 1998 when we're in tights, and there's several times we probably do it for like 4 or 5 weeks straight. When we come to the ring, we go up in the corners, and Jeff and I are doing this, and we do the DX, and we're gonna pledge for DX. And then eventually kind of like ended up being like their lackeys to a degree and pledge with them, and then they were going to kind of see where it went, and then maybe we could legitimately like be a part of the DX when it's all said and done. That was an idea that Vince Russo had that they wanted to try. And DX, eventually we did it for like 4 or 5 weeks, and they said, okay, enough of that, we're not going to do this. These guys aren't quite ready, let them do whatever. And then it just like stopped immediately and was never revisited. They continued as jobbers with their roles more prominent. The brothers featured on Heat more often, but they were mostly losing. Their opportunity to make something of themselves came after WrestleMania 15, as Michael Hayes was paired with them. They had grown a bond with Freebird previously, and Jeff Hardy said that there were pitches from Vince Russo for that team to grow beards and look more in tune with Michael Hayes. According to Jeff, Hayes wanted them to wear some old school outfits, but they ended up taking him to Hot Topic, and that's where the iconic Hardy Boys look was created. Why would he wear it too? I don't know. He was probably undergoing some sort of midlife crisis. Michael Hayes at the time had started a feud with the Brood, who called him out by his actual name instead of Doc Hendricks, and because of this he grew disdain over being disrespected by these young guys. On the May 16, 1999 episode of Heat, the Brood were victims of a bloodbath by Hayes and the Hardy Boys. This led to a series of matches which definitely stand out in the era of Attitude because it was fast-paced, high-risk, high-reward type stuff. They brought something entirely fresh to the division, no doubt about it. It also helped that these two teams were young. Back then, if you hit some senton bomb, the whole crowd would be looking on in amazement. Shortly afterwards, the two teams faced off for the chance to challenge the Acolytes for the tag team titles. After the champions interfered and ruined everything, the match was pushed to King of the Ring. Once again, fast-paced action that leaves you wanting more, and for the Hardy Boys, it was a victory. The Acolytes heading into this title defense were destroyed by Kane the previous night, and when told by the doctor to stay in the back, they assaulted him. The Hardys went through hell. The Acolytes were 100%, but as they usually did, they were kicking ass. It came down to a stick shot in timing for the Hardys to win the tag team championships. This left them absolutely speechless, but before they could finish, GTV interrupted. Well, this was a great moment for the Hardy Boys. They had worked over 5 years to get to this point. 4.5 of those years were as jobbers. They had to work from the bottom all the way up. The Acolytes were extremely frustrated with the title loss and were desperate to rebound. The rematch at Fully Loaded involved Michael Hayes, and it ended the way you expected to, with the Acolytes victorious. They destroyed him, and by the looks of it, you'd be thinking he was a rookie lost in the locker room. The Hardys decided to turn on him later on and join Gangrel to form the New Brood. Why? I don't know. They fit the vibe though, for sure. But in storyline, it was kind of dumb. These guys ditched Michael Hayes for somebody that had less titles than Tottenham or the Orlando Magic. That's basically what it comes down to. Whenever something is called new in wrestling, it straight up fails because it's tied into the old thing, which is way better. That said, the New Brood from a look standpoint were flat out amazing. Take away that entrance, they still look awesome with the wet hair, the red and black shirts, the whole thing. I like the New Brood look-wise. As a faction, they're not that memorable. It's literally just the Hardy Boys and Gangrel. Man, the Hollies were funny here. As for the Hardys, they had some issues with Edge and Christian, and likewise, their chemistry together led to the creation of the Terry Invitational. Terry Runnels' managerial services were supposed to be the reward for the winning team, and of course $100,000. Once you shorten the Terry Invitational tournament, you get TIT. It was a best of 5 series. Each side traded victories, and it all came down to the final match at No Mercy. This was going to be the decider, and to say it was a perfect storm for the two teams would be a massive understatement. There were multiple years of wrestling had come down to this match. Now, what makes this match so good is that it was unexpected. Not to the guys, they knew this was a huge opportunity to make something out of themselves. The WWF didn't do ladder matches often, and if I remember correctly, this was the first ever tag team ladder match. They changed the way the ladder match was viewed. Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon at WrestleMania 10 was absolutely iconic. However, this match blows it out of the water. In general, the world evolves. Everything builds upon something. Here, they changed everything. The ladder match was innovated to greater heights, and it gets to a point where nobody could really top them, because since then, who can we truly say actually innovated the ladder match to even greater height? We can't really say that. The Hardys and Edge and Christian, you ask somebody their top 5 ladder matches, 3 of them are most likely going to evolve somebody from this match. The spots were grueling and absolutely show-stealing. You understood that these guys wanted to be in the headline, and these spots were almost mind-blowing in 1999. You have to look at it from that time period's perspective, because the audience wasn't used to action this fast and sudden. It was definitely high risk, but at the same time, it was high reward. For the Hardys, they were victorious that night, but in reality, all 4 of these men were winning. They received an incredible standing ovation from that crowd, and man, this is low-key one of the most important matches in WWE history. The ladder match was reimagined, and nobody can make a bigger impact with a ladder like Edge and Christian and the Hardys did. They are now stars in the tag team division. Now, what's odd about this match is that despite making the most noise on the show, being the standout, the 4 men initially made $5,000. They weren't too happy about it, especially after the Road Dogs said they should be making at least $30K from it. And so JR doubled the original bonus, and so in total, they all made $40K. But despite this, there was more value to come out of this match for the 4 men. The next night on Raw, the winners came out and told Michael Cole that they're not the New Brood. They're the Hardys. Edge and Christian interrupted, and the men were quite hostile, but Edge and Christian assured them that they weren't here for that. Edge mentioned how they gave them a standing ovation, and the fans followed up again. Their appearance here was simply out of respect, and they shook hands. Gangrel, though, was for other reasons. He wanted congratulations for scoring. Edge is like, screw this guy. Goes for this big-ass punch, and they jumped him. And so Matt and Jeff were faces again. Highly deserved standing ovation from the fans, and it was only good from here on. Upon the ladder match, Matt Hardy had made a pitch to the creative team that he wanted a faction alongside his brother and Edge and Christian. He saw the standing ovation they received and felt that they could grow together. The WWF, though, saw things differently. He felt that a feud with DX that had reformed at the time would have been nice, but it was the right call. Edge and Christian as rivals elevated the tag team division. Now, Matt and Jeff didn't really do much throughout the rest of the year. Once 2000 came around, though, this turned out to be an excellent year for the Hardys. They kicked off the year in a feud with the Dudleys. Well, actually, Bubba and Devon initiated this feud as Bubba had an appetite for tables. He sent the duo through a table, and this led to the tag team tables match at the Royal Rumble. The match was incredible, especially for something that felt like it was under 10 minutes. It was jam-packed to the max. It was the perfect representation of Matt and Jeff Hardy going through hell just for an advantage in a match, and that image of Hardy going for the Swanton is absolutely iconic. They won the match, went on until destroying themselves. The Dudleys were irritated with how the match went, but wanted to show respect to the duo and told them that if they win the titles tonight, they get the first shot. This turned out to be a lie, and Devon and Bubba laid them out. Terry got involved, and since Bubba loved tables, she went through one. Edge and Christian wanted to avenge the duo on SmackDown, and they won the match, but it didn't matter in the end. And this chaos only caused the Dudleys to run into hiding and get the help of the Acolytes. Now, the Acolytes at the time were opening up a protection agency. They were always getting one over the babyfaces and even earned a title shot for No Way Out. Terry was concerned over getting involved in some action again, and so she enlisted the help of the APA. This was during the #1 contenders match involving the Hardies and Edge and Christian. E and C were tough opposition, of course, but the difference maker was actually Terry, who shoved Jeff Hardy off the top rope. She slapped Matt, and Christian hit the Unprettier. Nobody knew what was up, and then the Acolytes destroyed them. Hardy and Matt got revenge and moved on. They fully focused on the tag team titles. Damn, Edge has been like that since 2000. The Hardy Boys made it to the final 2 in a tag team battle royal. However, the Dudleys ruined everything and destroyed the opposition. This meant both teams were inserted into the tag team match at WrestleMania. Tensions built between Edge and Christian and the Hardys during an interview. Edge and Christian grew annoyed with how Matt and Jeff were trying to make everything about themselves. Matt implied that Edge and Christian had more opportunities because they looked like baby faces. Edge claimed that they made the Hardys famous in their set of matches, and this led to the teams costing each other matches. So now Edge and Christian were heels. WrestleMania, though, was another notch in the tag team's belt. The inclusion of the Dudleys was welcoming because they brought the element of tables with them. Edge and Christian had the chair, and the Hardys, of course, had the ladder. They took that formula they created and went all out again. Zero regard for their own bodies. They may have been hurt that day, but nobody's going to forget this match anytime soon. And with the performance they had, they should be called Shawn Michaels because they stole the show again. There were so many iconic moments to come from this match, and for sure this was one of the best matches of 2000. Edge and Christian emerged victorious this time around and moved on to other things. As for the Hardys, they dabbled in the hardcore division, and Matt even won the title. Ultimately, though, the title was Crash Holly's. The Hardy Boys were always near the tag team titles, but they weren't making much noise. However, an additional element to the group allowed for the team to fly to greater heights. On the May 25th, 2000 episode of SmackDown, Matt Hardy faced S.A. Rios. Lita had some problems with Rios, who was not valuing their relationship, and Matt accidentally struck her during the match. After the match, Rios dropped her with a powerbomb and moonsault, and the Hardys saw enough and gave him a beating. They carried Lita to the back, and this was the beginning of Team Extreme. Lita officially joined the duo a couple of weeks later and quickly started off a feud with Trish Stratus. This also meant that the Hardys were feuding with TNA. The women's feud was more heated than the men. They had so much hatred for each other in such a short time, and the 6-person tag team match at Fully Loaded was intense. Lita made her mark. She was getting involved a lot more than Trish, who was interested in picking up the pieces, and she showed passion and resiliency to score the victory. But right afterwards, the heels attacked. They left the Hardys laying, and Trish ended up whooping the hell out of Lita. It didn't take long for her to pay back the favor, but this feud would be put on hold for the time being. As for Matt and Jeff, it was back to feuding with the Dudleys and Edge and Christian. The title match the next night on Raw was absolutely chaotic. Everyone barring Edge and Christian looked strong. They had to steal it from out of nowhere, and Edge and Christian were basically looking good. You know, they're coming out of these matches unscathed. They were cheating, they were stealing these wins, but regardless, they were always escaping with the titles, even if it meant they got disqualified. Here they hit a concerto on Jeff Hardy. Since these guys were leaving their mark and going unscathed, the Dudleys and the Hardys returned the favor using ladders and tables. As a result of this, Edge and Christian laid out Matt Hardy and went on strike in protest of Mick Foley's decisions towards them. He made fun of them but said that they have a point. Then he lowered their expectations by telling them that at SummerSlam is going to be Edge and Christian against the Hardys, against the Dudleys, in a TLC match. This was going to be the first TLC match of its kind. Edge and Christian had made it a mission to retain their titles under any circumstances, even if they got themselves disqualified. The Dudleys, the Hardys, everyone was tired of it, and this match was a way of making them pay for their sins. Now, it doesn't need to be said, but this match was tremendous, and the TLC element makes it better than the last 2 ladder matches. TLC was somewhat a part of WrestleMania 2000, but not entirely like here. Jeff Hardy, as expected, was done. You know what he was doing. He did it to himself during this match, and in general, this was out of this world. Every second, something crazy would happen. Matt getting tipped over, Edge spearing some love into Lita that would take 5 years to kick in, and these guys were hanging on to the belt. This was some action the fans hadn't seen before. And there's always a question of how can they top the previous matches. But they do it. They find a way to do just that. And in addition, their tag matches are good, their regular matches are good, but then you have this additional weapon in your arsenal. It's like a cheat code for them. Similar to last time, Edge and Christian's hands were on the belts when it came down to it. Iconic. The boundaries these men were pushing were absolutely incredible. These matches will leave you speechless because of how standout they were in a time where fans really weren't used to action like this. Team Extreme was quick to rebound with the help of Edge, who accidentally gave the Hardys the title shot after blasting Matt with the belt. The champions were fuming, but they quickly made a joke out of the Hardys by introducing their future selves via time machine. They even made fun of Lita. Mick Foley put a stop to this and revealed that Edge and Christian will defend the titles in a steel cage match. He then brought out the present-day Hardys, who beat the champions out of the ring. This taught them a lesson, not to do these types of things in the ring. And this led to one of the funniest Edge and Christian segments. They sat in front of a projector and made fun of the Hardys' old wrestling clips. Edge couldn't believe Matt's promo skills deteriorated since then. Jeff had zero charisma in their eyes, and knowing that they were coming, the champions ambushed them, and in the process, Lita bumped her head into the wall. This segment was good. It was funny. Edge and Christian were hilarious. Hardys were looking on in disappointment. They were sad. They weren't even that mad. They were almost sad. And I highly recommend you watch the segment if you haven't. As expected, the steel cage match was pretty good. The Hardys were isolated, and the champions took advantage, locking Jeff out of the ring. Matt was beaten from pillar to post and was busted open. Jeff had to ironically use a ladder to climb to the top and enter, and he hit the most Jeff Hardy move ever. A whisper in the wind from the top of the cage. Lead on the outside connected with a head scissors, and on the top of the cage, Edge got a taste of his own medicine with a concerto, and that was enough for the victory. The Hardys were new champions, and again, these teams show their level of depth. They could wrestle normal matches, they could wrestle ladder matches, they could wrestle steel cage matches. And this is another good match. It was fresh. The next night on Raw, the first episode on TNN, Mick Foley wanted a historic match. So he made Edge and Christian's rematch a ladder match. This was only 24 hours after that grueling steel cage match. Now, I don't need to tell you how good this was. Edge and Christian in a ladder match against the Hardys, that says it all. They're still finding creative spots even though they had like 4 of these matches before. And it's hard to say whether these guys were actually injured from the cage match or they were selling these injuries well. But regardless, they had the heart to put on another match of the night. The Hardys went through it here, especially Matt Hardy, who had to put on a gutsy performance to score the victory. Even Lita was banged up by the end of it. What this also meant was that Edge and Christian couldn't challenge for the titles. So they were desperate to cost Matt and Jeff to get themselves a match. This led to Los Conquistadors returning, and they assaulted the Hardys and nearly cost them the titles on 2 occasions. At the same time, they got themselves a title shot for No Mercy. Edge and Christian wished them luck, and when asked about their strategy for the match, they responded saying, "Si senor," and of course, arriba. The Conquistadors showed shades of Edge and Christian. The champions realized what's up, but they had additional masks under, and Matt took an unprettier, which meant they lost the titles. The accusations were starting to be made, and Edge and Christian tried offering a rebuttal with physical evidence. They asked for a title shot, and when they received it, they were more worried about choosing which sunglasses they should wear to the ring. Christian got ambushed by the Dudleys, and Edge, despite this, felt confident that he could take on the Conquistadors alone. They didn't follow up on the promise, and it turned out to be the Hardys. Mick Foley then revealed that the cameraman earlier on left the camera, and the details of their plans were exposed. Then he got their hopes up, saying their title victory counted, only to drag them down, saying it's one of the shortest title reigns of all time. So now, Matt and Jeff Hardy, the Hardy Boys, were the new champions. The Hardys had seemed to have steered past Edge and Christian, but they once again got in their business during a title match with the right to censor. Stevie Richards took advantage of this drama and helped his guys capture the tag team titles. Lita and Ivory had issues with the title as well. The Hardys had issues with RTC over titles, and this made its way to Survivor Series. Lita was all bloody during this title match. She didn't capture the gold. And RTC won the elimination match, but then the Dudleys returned after the match and dropped the heels. The real feud, though, was with the Radicals. These two sides had so much hatred for one another after Lita's head was bumped into a door that was aggressively opened by Chris Benoit. Deep down within, though, Dean Malenko had an entirely different feeling for Lita. Benoit told him that she's just another broad, but Malenko didn't see it that way, and to his own detriment, because Lita wasn't interested. He was too naive and believed he had a chance, and even offered Lita a title shot. If he wins, she has to go on a date with him, though. Lita put up a fight, but when Malenko wanted to wrap it up, he did it with ease. The date itself was initially rough, but Lita let her guard down, and she admitted that she couldn't resist Malenko. Mr. Rockefeller, as he called himself, was met with the Hardy Boys at the hotel, and they obliterated him. It wasn't all bad for Malenko, though, because he rebounded at Armageddon and rocked Lita. Even then, he upgraded his perf stats and almost had his career ended after the Hardys caught him staring at Lita in the shower. Even then, he was still interested in her. It was a weird dynamic where he'd beat her up and show affection at the same time. This reached a boiling point with Lita once again challenging Malenko. This time with the help of Matt Hardy, she emerged victorious. Then to top it all off, they kissed after the match, and so now it was revealed that Matt and Lita were officially in a relationship. As always, the Hardys couldn't remain away from the Dudleys and Edge and Christian. On the March 5th, 2001 episode of Raw, the duo captured the tag team titles with the help of Christian. This title run didn't even make it to WrestleMania because ENC recaptured the gold after Rhino made his debut and gored Jeff Hardy, leading to the title change. The Dudleys were supposed to receive the title shot, but after their flight was delayed, it was given to those two. Upon their arrival, they demanded their match and received it. Spike Dudley debuted during the match and it led to the Hardys winning the titles. So it was hot potato heading into WrestleMania. WrestleMania 17 in Houston was the apex, the peak of what was known as the golden era of this tag team division. The work these three teams put in was for this match and moment. TLC 2 is no doubt about it the greatest TLC match in WWE history. I've watched this match countless times and it has never failed to entertain me. It's hard to follow up on the previous ladder matches, but they did just that on 3 different occasions. How? I don't know. But a minor aspect about this match comes down to each team playing an excellent role in the match. The Dudleys you expected were here. Hardys, they were here. Edge and Christian were here, not to mention the additional interferences. It was extremely different to what had been seen in the previous matches. Different kind of athleticism, different spots, everything. It was nothing short of iconic, and like the WWF in general at the time, it wasn't going to get any better in the tag team division, especially after putting on a match like that on the biggest stage in wrestling. It's not overrated in the slightest, it's influential, and a huge highlight in all 6 of their careers, and it helped them achieve legend status in the tag team division. Edge and Christian emerged victorious by the skin of their teeth with the help of Rhino, who turned out to be the difference maker. But in many ways, this marked the end of Edge and Christian and the Hardys' feud. They did have one more match later on, TLC 3, but the feud wasn't as intense as it once was. As for Matt and Jeff, they finally met with the top of the WWF as Vince booked the Hardys in a 6-person tag team match against Stone Cold, Triple H, and Stephanie McMahon. This came after Lita was caught talking to Linda. That main event was heat. Lita won the match for the Hardys, and after the match, Austin and Triple H began beating up on her like she was the #1 contender to the title. It was very violent, and they were so desperate to establish this new Stone Cold character as a cold-hearted heel. Like, we all know Austin's a cold-hearted face previously, but he was very, very different here. And Jeff Hardy took advantage of his long-ass promo to blast both him and the game with a steel chair and drop Stephanie with a twist of fate. Triple H was so fired up over this that he demanded a match, even if it was for the title. He received this request and dominated. Hardy was without his brother and Lita, who were away. Sometimes he would find some momentum, but Triple H would bend the rules to take advantage. Turns out Matt was there. He interfered and blasted Triple H with a chair before Jeff hit the swanton to win that title. One of the greatest upsets in WWF history, especially in the moment. When you look at the crowd, they doubted the result, but it happened, and Jeff Hardy was champion. He even said in an interview that Triple H told him that he hopes to make a lot of money with him in the future. He saw the potential in Jeff Hardy, no wonder, it's clear why. Team Extreme in general around this time period were so damn cool because of their look, what they did, and what they represented. The fans gravitated towards that. You knew that these guys were for real. As for the title victory, Hardy didn't hold the title for long as Triple H reclaimed the gold on Raw. They once again tried to assault Lita, but this time around, the Brothers of Destruction, looking like the final bosses, came out and saved Lita. This fizzled out, and meanwhile, Matt Hardy became the European champion. He beat Eddie Guerrero for the gold, and this led to a storyline of trust. You see, Eddie was desperate to gain the Hardys' trust. They weren't eager to let their guard down, especially for him, and Eddie even went as far as to turn on the Radicals. At one point, he risked himself for Lita's safety, and this storyline ended up being dropped as Eddie Guerrero went to rehab. Now, my personal prediction is that he probably would have tried to drive a wedge between Lita and the Hardys, something a bit similar to Malenko. Around the same time period, the 3 teams that elevated the ladder match to greater heights were going to do it one more time. This time it was TLC 3 on SmackDown. Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho, though, were the additional team. Vince wanted to put those men through hell after they captured the gold from the 2-man power trip, and this match once again is a prime example of the sacrifices that these wrestlers were willing to make. Some of the spots around here were rough, and I'm sure it didn't feel good for Edge to get locked in the walls or for Christian to get tipped over without adjusting himself. And again, creative spots which almost leave you amazed and have you wondering, like, how? I was about to say it was a quiet match for the Hardys, but then they did this. Jericho and Benoit emerged victorious but suffered the most during the match. And that was it for the Edge and Christian and Hardy Boys arc. As for Matt and Jeff won the Light Heavyweight Championship, holding the gold for 3 weeks. He ended up winning the Hardcore title and having a great feud with Rob Van Dam, who was a part of the Alliance. Their matches were absolutely amazing, and the styles matched well, and I always have fun watching their matches. They're just so damn good. Great matches. The Hardy Boys' time as a successful team was slowly winding down, but they weren't going to go out bad. They won the WCW Tag Team Championships, holding them for 3 weeks before the Dudleys claimed the gold. They then won the WWF Tag Team Championships to set up a clash against the Dudley Boys at Survivor Series inside a steel cage. Winner take all. It was a pretty good match, but it had long-term effects on the Hardy Boys. For one, it was the tag team in a nutshell, blowing a good thing. They were champions. They had the match won, yet Jeff felt the need to go for the dive again, and this cost them the match, and it was the beginning of the end of the Hardy Boys. Jeff proceeded to make the same mistake against Christian for the European title, and Matt told him that he's stupid. Jeff felt that he was controlling and the team was falling apart. Tensions were building between the two brothers, even in victory, and this led to a one-on-one match for vengeance. At one point, an argument between the two led to them shoving Lita, and Matt complained about her not taking his side, so he asked her to be the referee to prove she doesn't choose sides. They both cheated during that match, and it all came down to a controversial finish with Lita not noticing Matt's foot on the rope. This meant more drama. He had been bitter throughout this whole entire thing, and it increased tenfold. He challenged Jeff and Lita to a handicap match and told her that, like the Hardy Boys, they're breaking up. Matt was going all out. He rolled up Lita for the win here, but the storyline would transition back to a Hardy Boys reunion. Now, I personally get why they would start a breakup story, but there was a little bit left for the team at this point. The Undertaker threw both Jeff and Lita off the stage, which enraged Matt Hardy, and this caused the Hardys to reunite to combat the Undertaker. It brought them closer together to get their asses kicked. The Hardy Boys were rejuvenated in the division, but when you look back in hindsight, it's clear they weren't the same. Not because of them particularly, they were popular. They were having the same matches, they weren't bad. But because WWF didn't seem to focus as hard on them as they used to. Brock Lesnar debuted and absolutely dominated the two men, and now learning their lesson, they decided to provoke The Undertaker, who wasn't all about that. This led to an incredible ladder match for the Undisputed Championship, and Jeff Hardy, despite the chances of him getting his ass beaten were 99%, made everyone believe. The fans were all in. JR's commentary was excellent. He's like, make yourself famous, kid. And Jeff Hardy's gutsy performance, despite falling short, earned the respect of The Undertaker, who, despite dropping him every time, would ask for more. This momentum that Hardy had from this match led to him becoming the European champion. Hardy was the last European champion, and the title was unified with the Hardcore Championship a couple of weeks later. Jeff fell short to RVD, which is the story of his career, basically. Matt Hardy, meanwhile, wasn't around as he was wrestling on Heat, and Lita suffered a neck injury that left her sidelined for over a year. On the August 5th, 2002 episode of Raw, the Hardys returned to action. It looked like the duo was going to feud with the Un-Americans, but that wasn't the case. With SummerSlam on the horizon, Eric Bischoff wanted Rob Van Dam to face Chris Benoit for the Intercontinental Championship. Matt and Jeff were standing in front, and Matt in particular had a problem with this. Bischoff claimed to not know his name, but ended up giving the Hardys a title shot. It was only going to be one of them, though, and it was going to be decided by a coin toss. Not even. He just put the coin on his hand and decided it was heads, and Jeff gets the shot. Matt ended up turning on him and costing him the match, and later that week, he signed with SmackDown. Matt didn't want to live in the shadow of his brother, and he was like, you know what, I'm out of here. And he immediately became Matt Hardy version 1. Alright, that's the Hardys' story. Damn, they really had a great run. TLC 1, 2, 3, the popularity from the fans, everything. These guys were doing everything. They wrestled each other for the hardcore title. They wrestled each other on pay-per-view. They won the titles on multiple occasions, and it was a great run. What makes it so good is that the Hardys brought life to the tag team division. It wasn't dead straight up or anything like that, but at the time there wasn't many big notable tag teams other than the New Age Outlaws and the Acolytes. Edge and Christian coming along with the Dudleys, helped bring more interest to the division. They elevated the division to greater heights. You saw tag teams fighting it out in ladder and TLC matches. You never seen that before. It wasn't happening, but these guys were doing it, and they were doing it at such a high level, which is also a bad thing because them wrestling these matches, these grueling matches, they had this expectation to top the last match, and in turn, it would hurt them, and slowly the injuries would pile up to a point where it's like these matches aren't sustainable. So as good as those matches were, they were bad for the guys in the matches. But yeah, I love the Hardys. They're one of my favorite tag teams of all time. What makes them so good is everything, like their matches there. They had unique offense, senton bombs, diving off ladders, the whole tables thing, the look, Lita being the missing piece of the group. Everything about them was perfect. And they ended at the right time, obviously they couldn't have gone till 2003 as the Hardy Boys. They're gonna get cheered a bit here and there, but it was best to end it at that point because both men needed to go their separate ways for the time being. Because at the end of the day, they're brothers. They're obviously not gonna deviate away from each other, and they were bound to reunite. But at that time, it was best for them to split, especially for Matt Hardy. Matt Hardy had to forge his own path because at the time he was falling down a bit. He was wrestling on Heat, and this gave him the opportunity to go to SmackDown to become Matt Hardy version 1. So yeah.
When the WWF signed Rocky Maivia in 1996, they had big plans in store for the Blue Chipper. Rocky showed great potential in-ring, but as a character, he came at the wrong time. The fans didn't accept him for being the smiley guy that wins and is just happy, so something had to change. Enter The Rock. The Rock was a very bitter individual who felt that the fans were stupid and held resentment over their chanting of stuff such as "Die Rocky Die." The Rock was extremely confident, egotistical, and just plain better than Rocky Maivia. His new character catches on with the fans. They say his catchphrases, cheer him despite being a heel, and it was clear that this man was going to be world champion. The Rock did become a 3-time WWF champion, but it was clear that this was just the beginning. The Rock was positioned as the second biggest wrestler in the company. It was Austin, Rock, and whoever came third was so far down below. His 1999 was building towards a superb 2000, where he was set to take the world by storm. Stone Cold had to undergo neck surgery in November of 1999, so that left the number 1 spot open. Rock won the Royal Rumble, main evented WrestleMania, where he was unsuccessful in capturing the title, and this decision is almost confusing, but then you see Backlash did almost 700k buys. So now The Rock was champion. He beat Triple H in this awesome main event, which involved every type of Attitude Era drama, the referee drama, the McMahons pulling the referee out of the ring, and to top it all off, Stone Cold Steve Austin. It was superb stuff. On the May 1st, 2000 episode of Raw, The Rock addressed his title victory from the previous night. When the new champion came out, the entire crowd was going crazy, and it was some exciting stuff. The Rock said that he's become champion. He mentioned his promise, how he gave his word that he'll win, but he also praised another person for giving their word. Stone Cold Steve Austin. He told the McMahons to do all kinds of things. Shane to know his role, Triple H to shut his mouth, and he was expecting something from there, so he told them to just bring it. And there they were. McMahon said that WWF history would be made tonight. Why? Because The Rock is going to have the shortest reign. He booked him in a title match with Shane, and Triple H was all confused, but the boss explained things. He wanted a steel cage match between the two. Shane's up. Chant intensifies. Vince was looking for one of those cheap SVR wins, and JR sensed something was up. Why would Shane wrestle in a cage match? Like, it just sounds clear as day that there was something that was going to happen. Rock said that tonight won't be the shortest reign, but the longest night for his candy-ass son, Shane. The game didn't understand why this was set up the way it was, because as you guys know, the center of attention is himself. He told him that as long as the title's in the family, but Triple H didn't want to hear it. As you guys know, JR was hyping this up like hell. By God, how's The Rock going to go through these insurmountable odds? And Shane out here with a full entourage came out like it's a boxing match. Everything was set up perfectly. The Stooges as the refs, Triple H and Vince on the outside. You know, it was obvious as day that this was positioned for Shane McMahon to win. Even Vince tried to get involved. The Rock was very fast-paced on the attack. Shane did get some shots in, but The Rock was The Rock. They were out here handing them weapons to use on Shane, and even though all this was occurring in front of him, JR still believed something was up. Patterson was out here wearing the stripes and hitting low blows, which JR said was a dream of his, and the man was about to break Shane in half just to get the title off The Rock. But of course, this situation flipped on its head as The Rock had the match won. But the odds are far too much. We want Austin Chance to intensify, but he's not here. And instead of Austin, it was Earl Hebner that came out. He once again screwed over Triple H, and despite the odds against him, The Rock managed to retain the title. Now some exciting stuff. It doesn't matter if the main event doesn't have much action, but if there's that heat and emotion from the crowd, that's enough. As a result of this, The Rock had to team up with Earl Hebner to defend his title against DX. The Grey One said that McMahon has failed to realize that he's not losing the title. So basically, this match is a 1-on-3. But The Rock was putting in work. The numbers though slowly got to him, and of course eventually, Earl had to get involved. They were out here ready to beat him up in his hometown, but it didn't end the way they intended it to, and with the help of Chris Jericho, The Rock retained the title. DX attacked afterwards, Hebner took a beating as well, and Triple H even pedigreed him on a chair. Rikishi and the Big Show had enough and they turned things around, but DX were very smart. Then the Dudleys came on. This is when things changed. With the title out of the McMahon-Helmsley vicinity, Triple H devised a plan that would see the Grey One's reign come to an end. So Triple H challenged him to an Iron Man match for that title. The Rock of course accepted, but he wasn't around to deal with DX because he was filming The Mummy Returns. Speaking of returns, Shawn Michaels was back. This was his first appearance probably since the Superkick incident. Being a man of drama, HBK made himself the special referee for the Iron Man match at Judgment Day. In other places, Triple H wanted The Rock to know that this isn't no joke, no catchphrases, no gimmick. Triple H said that this is the one match no one wants to touch. Why? Because they don't have the ability to do it. Triple H said that he had that ability and told The Rock that when Judgment Day is over, one man will walk out of the ring. He'll be the best, the greatest, and the undisputed World Wrestling Federation champion. I love how they built up the matches back then with the World Wrestling Federation moniker. It just sounds so damn big. He's of course referring to himself though. He also threatened Shawn Michaels saying if he doesn't call the match the way it should be, there'll be problems. And there's The Rock. He's back from Morocco, and the king really thought they named the country after him, you know, Morocco. go. Let's just say that the fans were more than excited to see him. He officially accepted the challenge and said that he's officially gonna kick his candy ass. The Rock realized that Triple H was annoyed at being inferior to him, and he knew that The Rock was better. The champion threw insults towards Shawn Michaels and made mention of the last time he crossed paths with him. He said that an hour isn't too long for The Rock, and he told Triple H that 1 hour isn't long enough. Now, of course, they didn't let him slide. Why? Because The Rock was set to face Chris Benoit in a submission match later that night. As you can see here, this wasn't no skill-based matchmaking. Rock was clearly out of his element, but he was a champion. This was proven to be nothing more than a setup, though, as The Rock had to fight like hell. Things slipped on their head, and Raw ended with chaos. Stacking the deck against The Rock was what the McMahon-Helmsley regime was all about. So they had him face the Dudleys in a lumberjack tables match only 3 nights before Judgment Day. They also added DQ and countouts to the Iron Man match falls. The Rock still refused to believe that Shawn Michaels was going to officiate the match properly, and also acknowledged that himself and Triple H have done it all. Except the Iron Man match. And about the tables match, you guys know how it ended. DX overpowered Rock and sent him through the table. Okay, about Judgment Day, The Rock let Shawn Michaels know that he better call the match down the middle or else he'll kick his ass. The game, as always, is driven by championship gold. It's his lifeline. It proves that he's the best in the business, and without the title, he essentially loses his sanity. The match is more about Triple H's pursuit of the title than it being The Rock's title match. The game wanted to do this without any of the McMahons around, but as you know, people lie. This match was pretty damn good, and it's hard to pull off Iron Man matches, but they did it here. A match like this in the Attitude Era would have been a struggle, but because of their sheer chemistry and competitive nature, it worked. These guys were spent before the match was even in the final parts, though, because it's an Iron Man match. I mean, what do you expect? Triple H went 2-1 up, and it'd only get worse for The Rock because he took a pile driver, making it 3-1 now. You guys know what's up. 3-1 is the worst lead you can have. The Rock was desperately trying to quicken the pace, and his strategy was a success. Before you knew it, Triple H had blown the lead. Some of this could have been avoided, but it was no problem because using the chair to disqualify himself led to him taking the lead once again. The Rock was scratching and clawing his way up, but the chair shot did a number on him and gave Triple H another point. So now it was 5-3. HBK finally intervened after Triple H was doing the most, and this led to The Rock going on another sprint. He of course needed some help though, winning a fall by countout. And this is when the McMahons realized The Rock was gaining momentum. He hit the people's elbow to tie things up, and this is when DX got involved. Shawn Michaels attacked the McMahons, and in the ring, The Rock was out there by himself getting jumped when the Undertaker randomly comes out in a motorcycle. No longer the Ministry, no longer the Dead Man, whatever. He was just a plain old guy in a motorcycle, and he was ready to kick ass. He raised hell, the crowd's all in, but for The Rock, this was a crucial problem, because the Undertaker attacked Triple H. He was given the fall, and so Triple H won the title. The Undertaker looked more upset than The Rock upon hearing this, and unlike WrestleMania 14, he didn't need to tape his fist. He was ready to beat up Shawn Michaels. Easily one of the best matches in the Attitude Era, no doubt about it. There was just something crazy about this match. The fact that it's 1 hour and these guys went in there and they overcame the challenge. They knew it was going to be a struggle because, well, it's an Iron Man match. I mean, what do you expect? But they went in there, they did the work, and it's easily one of WWE's best Iron Man matches of all time. Okay, the next night on Raw, The Rock went straight after Vince and gave him a premium level whooping. Bro was getting his ass kicked in the limo too. He followed up with Shane DX, and all that was left was the game. Triple H was very calm about things, and he praised Rock for keeping up for 60 minutes, but said that he was punished on Judgment Day. Unlike him, though, he was rewarded. He could say whatever he wants, but right now, one is standing in the ring as a loser, and the other is standing on the ramp as a winner. All Rock could say to this was, just bring it. The brawl was intense. The Rock had the edge laying the smack it down, but then DX came on and the numbers game came to play. Rock hit the Rock bottom on Vince, but he was overwhelmed, and then the Undertaker came on. DX lined up ready for a fight. It was so damn chaotic, the type of chaos that this era was known for, and he dropped them one by one and then went back on the bike trying to run them over. In the ring, The Rock managed to turn things around in his favor and hit the Rock bottom on Triple H through the announce table. His intentions were clear as day. To reclaim the title, he wrongfully lost, and this ending is definitely a top 10 from this era. It just has to be. In an effort to smooth things over, Mr. McMahon tried to talk to The Rock. He tried blaming The Undertaker for him losing the title and gave him the night off. Rock wanted him to come closer, and boom! He slapped the sense out of him. That's why WWE's booking got weird after 2000. It's because of that slap. The Great One, of course, couldn't stay away for long, and by the end of the night, he was back clearing house with The Undertaker. As a result of their actions, Mr. McMahon booked The Undertaker to face The Rock. It was a two-bird, one-stone situation for the regime. The former champion wasn't really focused on returning the favor. It was more about reclaiming the title, because winning this match would put him back in contention for the title. Of course, it wasn't all that easy, because Mr. McMahon made this a lumberjack match. Austin chants intensified, but it was far from here. The thing is, this should have been bad for both men, but they ended up going straight after the lumberjacks, and all hell was loose. And the heels managed to take control, and these odds were far too much for any man except Kane. He single-handedly saved The Rock and The Undertaker, and with that, he also put himself in WWF Championship contention. The Undertaker was looking at him like, you can't be serious right now. But the McMahon-Helmsley regime wanted to be a bit fair. They gave each of these men the chance to win the title shot, but they had to win handicap matches. The Undertaker won his match, whereas The Rock had to face Edge and Christian. Shane tried his damnedest to screw him over. It was pretty damn close, but The Rock had a lifeline. He was still in the match, and this greatly upset the Boy Wonder. The whole arena was shaking for The Rock, and with that, he managed to become the #1 contender. Then to top it all off, Kane was #1 contender as well. The McMahon-Helmsley regime were running the show like Elon runs Twitter. The Rock was impatient, and instead of waiting until King of the Ring, he wanted his title shot on Raw. He gave Triple H 2 options: wait until the end of the night where Triple H is ready, or he could kick his ass now. Kane invited himself to this party, and similar to Rock, he wanted the title shot now. Then the Undertaker came out and said that he's never seen so many assholes gathered in one place. He knew Kane and Rock had their issues with Triple H, but he wanted the title shot, even if it was a fatal 4-way match. Because of all this chaos, Mr. McMahon booked a triple threat match. The winner faces Triple H later on. He's all like, yeah, that's cool when we all know what's up. The Rock later that night won the right to challenge for the title, and this was with the help of Triple H, who blasted The Undertaker with a chair. And Rock was rewarded with a chair shot to the face. As you guys know, this was overbooked like hell. This drama all culminated with The Rock accidentally blasting The Undertaker with a chair, leading to the choke slam and Triple H retaining that title. DX finally looked good here. Rock felt that he was wronged and wanted anybody from the faction in a match, even Stephanie. He was seeking retribution. Triple H thought that Rock's anger was misguided. He said that he should be looking elsewhere, probably in The Undertaker's direction. So the champion showed him footage from Raw because in the moment, Rock was completely unaware of what had occurred. Bringing up The Undertaker's name only caused him to come out. He tricked the faction and caught them off guard, and The Rock watched on from a distance as DX were jumping all over the place. Once they got a hold of him, The Rock ran in and made the save. Similarly to Raw, The Undertaker dropped Rock with a chair, and the Grey One wasn't going to let that slide, easily barging into his locker room. Kane was just standing there like nothing happened, but he ended up saying he'll scramble his brains, so they brawled. Once again, these guys had to be side by side for the main event. This time around, it was The Rock who stood tall, dropping both Kane and The Undertaker with a chair. The Grey One knew very well that everyone would be going after him on Raw. The Undertaker, Triple H, that $2 slot, everyone. And for those people, he had 3 words: just bring it. And they brought it. Out of everyone to put a stop to this, though, it was Linda McMahon. She came out and tried to make things good, and McMahon, upon hearing this, was very irritated, feeling she's trying to be the morally positive person. He started trashing her before she booked a 6-man tag for King of the Ring: Kane, The Rock, and The Undertaker against Triple H, Shane, and Vince. Feeling this was a challenge towards his manhood, he accepted and didn't give a damn what kind of match she books. So Triple H was going to defend the title against a mystery opponent tonight. Nobody except Linda knew. McMahon accepted on his behalf, and Triple H was raging. It was unfair in his eyes, and so she added insult to injury, booking Stephanie in a match with Lita. To complete the hat-trick, she gave Vince and Shane a tables match against the Dudleys. The regime was slowly burning down, and it was falling rapidly. As for The Rock, Vince booked him in a match with Kane. As expected, the faction interfered, and it turned into yet another all-out brawl, but this time, it concluded with Triple H going through the table. DX finally got a hold of things by isolating Kane and The Rock, and The Undertaker, meanwhile, was arrested. SmackDown also revealed that the 6-man tag team match at King of the Ring was gonna be for that title. Linda added to that, saying whoever from the other side wins the match, they'll win the title. With the pay-per-view on Sunday, the faction put The Rock in a handicap match against TNA. The duo brought him hell. He was spent and worn out, but he had the main eventer badge. I mean, what do you expect? And Triple H was fuming over this turn of events, so McMahon told him to wait until SmackDown. What was his plan? It was a handicap match for the 3 men. The top heels came running down, and this plan turned out to be a failure initially. So the rest of them came out, and at this point, they stood no chance. About the match at King of the Ring, this would have went harder if it was a fatal 4-way. But it wasn't, and for that, it did some harm to the match. It wasn't bad though. Triple H and The Rock did most of the work. They're the ones that spent the most time wrestling, whereas the others were brawling with each other. Of course, for championship gold, this tag match meant everyone was for himself, and that's what Kane showed. But the best part of the match had to be when The Undertaker sent Shane McMahon through the announce table. In the ring, McMahon goes to the people's elbow, but he's caught, and The Rock hits the rock bottom to win that title. The game wasn't pinned, and he lost his cool, and The Undertaker told him that he owes him one after preventing Triple H from winning. Decent stuff, but it's time for The Rock's real title reign. The next night on Raw, The Rock spoke about King of the Ring. He said that pinning Vince means he owns the title and owns the boss himself. He knew that he was going to come out and try to fight, but The Rock didn't give a damn because his era has just begun. A disappointed Mr. McMahon came out and explained deeply his sorrow and pain from last night. His emotions were directed at his wife, and it got to the point where his main focus wasn't the WWF, it was about his wife. I'd prefer not to talk about this genetic jackhammer stuff, but anyways, he wanted to shake The Rock's hand and clear the air. Rock shakes his hand, but he doesn't let him go so easily. He called him an asshole before dropping him with a rock bottom. So now that door's closed, the program between The Rock and the McMahons was so damn exciting. Every week there would be something crazy going on, and the fans were all in. From the DX Express being destroyed by Stone Cold to The Rock jumping all of them and whooping their asses. It really was compelling stuff. The Rock now had to move on to other things. Mick Foley, the new commissioner, congratulated him on this and asked how it feels to be on an elite list, because The Rock was a 5-time WWF champion, and I believe at this point it was only Stone Cold, Hulk Hogan, and Bret Hart who were multi-time champions, I believe. I'm not sure. Just as he speaks, he says it doesn't matter. Mick Foley 1, The Rock 0. He got him to the point where he smiled. How often did The Rock smile in this era? Not much. But with that said, The Rock wanted a #1 contender and wanted Foley to make it happen. All of a sudden, Shane McMahon, a limping Shane McMahon, interrupted. He started talking about how he's not a normal person and elaborated on his life story. Shane's up. Chant intensifies and he talks about overcoming that chokeslam from King of the Ring. Shane McMahon's green for power and glory caused him to go off the deep end. He couldn't bear himself to see somebody like Mick Foley in control. So he's going to be the one to choose the #1 contender for the title. Foley saw this as Shane saying he wants to be the #1 contender himself, and he definitely implied it, but the Boy Wonder claimed otherwise. So Mick Foley made the match tonight. The Rock said that like the forefathers, he can't lie. He said that he was just going to kick Shane's ass. McMahon was doing his best to get away from the match, but Mick Foley went on a scathing description of some of his most violent matches. The Rock refused to show Shane sympathy. He simply returned the favor and was sorry to know that his boot will be shoved sideways in his candy ass. In a last-ditch effort, Shane said that Rock doesn't want to take advantage of him, and if he was 100%, he would take the title from him. He starts talking about how they should be allies, and he started discussing the possibilities. Rock dropped them, and just as the match started, Chris Benoit came out with a steel chair and viciously battered the Great One into oblivion. Shane was pushing away the 23 overall refs, and many officials tried putting a stop to this defenseless beating but failed. But then Mick Foley stormed down the ramp and into the ring. The partnership was clear as day. Shane was going to use Benoit to plateau to the top of the WWF, and this was his moment in storyline. Everything about the McMahons was dysfunctional, and his way was clear. The Rock on this incident wasn't phased. He knew who Chris Benoit was, but said that he was going to kick his ass all over Fort Lauderdale. Benoit did get something, but right after the match, Shane got involved. This led to China taking the crippler crossface. Rock comes back in, but Benoit makes a run for it. These two are the most hated guys in the WWF at this point. Shane McMahon finally explained the relationship between himself and Benoit, saying he always respected him, but that increased recently. It's because he's goal-orientated. They showed a clip from last week, and Shane claimed that Rock had been ducking him. Why else would he chase him, Shane, instead of fighting Benoit? Shane even went as far as to call Benoit a friend. Likewise from Benoit. The Rock, though, isn't his friend. He's not friends with cowards that hide behind your woman and those that don't call him the greatest technical wrestler in WWF history. So what was he going to do? He wanted The Rock in a non-title match. If he wins, he challenges for the title at Fully Loaded. The Rock didn't waste time. He came out and said that he had no problem proving Chris Benoit wrong. He threw in a shot towards Shane, calling him a punk son of a bitch, and he accepted. He told him to just bring it. On paper, Chris Benoit was in amazing form. He had the edge, but this was a great one. The match was very competitive, but it was going Rock's way. Then Shane pulled the ref and took off his shirt. He had everyone thinking there in Montreal, and the winner was Chris Benoit. They're all happy when Earl Hebner reversed the decision. So they tried dealing with it, but all that did was make it worse because The Rock was back up. He was wounded and hurt, but was looking forward. Later that week on SmackDown, The Rock called out Chris Benoit. He said that he's not a great technical wrestler. He's not the Rabid Wolverine, but the biggest chicken. Despite what happened on Raw, he was defending the title at Fully Loaded. Why? Because he made it personal, and The Rock was eager to give him a beating of a lifetime. Then from out of nowhere, Chris Benoit ambushed The Rock and locked him in the crossface once again, all while Shane was talking the talk and indicated what's to come at Fully Loaded. With Fully Loaded only a week away, both these men went face-to-face in a 6-man tag team match. Once again, the numbers got to him and Benoit stood tall, so not only did Rock lose the tag team match, but Benoit had his number. The Great One refused to go down like that, and he discovered him in the locker room, but Edge and Christian jumped him. Rock goes through them and continues a vicious beat down that left him a bloody heap, and to top it all off, The Rock hit the rock bottom on top of the limo. Chris Benoit, of course, is a pit bull, though. By SmackDown, he rebounded. This was orchestrated by Triple H, who was busy with Chris Jericho. This caused The Rock to lose, getting himself disqualified in the tag team main event. He assaulted everyone in sight, dropped Benoit with the rock bottom, and even locked him in the crossface, forcing him to tap out. The Rock was now a crazed man, and this build was awesome. They took a different direction since Benoit was not much of a talker. They just started waffling each other. For The Rock, it was onside. It didn't matter if they were outside, he would go after him. At Fully Loaded, Shane McMahon was feeling like proving himself. He wanted to face The Rock tonight, non-title, and he told him to just bring it. The Rock came out and called him a and he knew that this was a setup and called for Benoit to come out. Unlike him, the Rabid Wolverine preferred to wait and instead destroyed his belongings. The build was awesome, intense, it's what you want for a world title match, and from the very beginning, The Rock was wrestling with Fury. This Fury almost brought Benoit to the breaking point. The match was very, very heated, and it felt like they were wrestling a blow-off match, but it was their first. Benoit had that pitbull mentality. He was expected aggressive and always on the Rock, but he figured it out, and the gray one hit the people's elbow. Shane got involved in the momentum swing in the Rabid Wolverine's favor, and Shane even then had to blast the ref with a chair, and that still didn't work as Rock won the match under controversial circumstances. At least that's what it looked like, because the ref ended up calling for Benoit as the winner by DQ, meaning he's a new champion. Why? Because Mick Foley added a DQ rule before the match because of Rock's aggression. At one point, Rock had grabbed the chair and the ref assumed he was the one that used it on him, but he didn't notice this. The fans knew what's up, but they didn't have power. Well, Mick Foley does. Foley said that the title could change by disqualification, but he didn't see a disqualification. He restarted the match and The Rock was all in. He was bloody, but he was like, just bring it, and the match was back on. The Rock laid the smack it down, but Benoit brought out the German suplexes. He locked in the crippler crossface, and The Rock was in a critical condition, and it was real bad, but he managed to reach the rope. A little opening, and boom! Rock bottom. The Rock retains the title in a tremendous, competitive, highly dramatic match. They sold you on Chris Benoit, a maniacal athlete who was technically proficient. Rock hadn't faced somebody like him in a long time, and when you look at the match from that time period, it didn't seem obvious that Benoit would lose. Of course, the edge was with The Rock, but it wasn't out of the question to see a new champion. Great program. I thought they did their jobs well. The Rock turned into a bloodthirsty champion who was out for blood. He had enough of the attacks and lost his mind. In turn, this may have seemed like a disadvantage for Benoit. But with the DQ rule, it was the contrary. The Rock had to scratch and claw his way to victory, and it came down to a clutch moment. The next night on Raw, Mick Foley was looking forward. He was proud of Fully Loaded, however, acknowledged the controversial ending to the show. Once Chris Benoit heard this, he came out with a look of anger on his face. He told Foley that he got screwed straight up and called him a fraud, and the Rabid Wolverine was only a moment away from turning things up. He mentioned the referee's decision being final, and Foley said that things changed. Shane probably cracked a smile back then. Things changed. Benoit felt that he proved he's the greatest technical wrestler and demanded a rematch tonight. Foley said that he'll take that under advisement, and he didn't want to hear it. Stephanie McMahon all of a sudden came out. Her appearance was in support of Chris Benoit and Shane McMahon. She didn't want to see the rules placed by her family being taken away, and Foley basically called her an ugly person, so she slapped him. He booked the siblings in a tag team match. As for Chris Benoit, he had to face the Grey One in a tag team match. The Rock laid the smack it down. He dropped everybody in sight. His momentum was about to bring him the victory, but Shane got involved, and this turned out to be an intelligent setup, as Shane McMahon's new partnership gave The Rock a beatdown. As a result of this, Kurt Angle had to go one-on-one with the Grey One. The King of the Ring winner had championship gold in his sights, and he saw this match as a positive because he could finally shut up The Rock. Hell, he even asked him to put the title on the line. After the commercial, the title match was confirmed. The Rock heard Angle's remarks and wanted to prove what's up. This one was very competitive. Angle had an aggressive streak to him, and then to make matters worse, Shane McMahon's entourage was here. The Rock, though, had that fight in him, and the adrenaline kept him in it, and he hit the spine buster. And it was time for the people's elbow. Shane interferes, Rock locks in the sharpshooter, Angle taps, and Benoit attacks. They brawl, Rock brings in a chair, and he drops both of them, getting himself disqualified. Shane's like, I don't want none. Rock drops Benoit the spine buster, and Angle celebrating in the ring like he's champion. At face value, it seemed like The Rock's title reign was going to go through yet another huge hurdle. Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle. But things took a different turn on Raw. At this point, Triple H had some huge problems in his marriage with Stephanie McMahon. She walked in on him teaching Trish Stratus some stuff. Mick Foley, being the commissioner, he booked both the Game and Trish in a tag team match against The Rock and Lita. Rock only did more to intensify the problems, as I'm sure Stephanie McMahon hates the number 69. Rock's main attention, though, was still at Chris Benoit. He made a complete and utter joke out of him with Kevin Kelly and mocked the Big Show for being tall. As always, Shane McMahon provided the assist to Chris Benoit, putting his name in title contention once again. Kurt Angle, meanwhile, was not only craving the gold, he wanted some. So now the tides had turned. Triple H for 2 weeks had been trying to get on his wife's side. Now she's in the very same predicament. Well, back to The Rock. He said that he couldn't give a damn what Shane McMahon wanted. He wanted Benoit to challenge for the title at SummerSlam. Instead, he gave Chris Benoit his title shot right now. Benoit came out and said that everyone knew he beat Rock at Fully Loaded by himself, only to have the title stripped. He wasn't that mad, though, because he was going to become champion tonight. However, Shane wanted a no disqualification match for the title. Shane's up. Chant intensifies, and he tells The Rock that he's going to fall victim like The Undertaker and Chris Jericho. The Rock had no problem with this, saying, no DQ, The Rock's cool, Benoit with that gap in his tooth, never being GQ. He guaranteed to whoop both their candy asses all over New York City. Upon hearing this, Kurt Angle had a bit of a problem. Foley told him that the fans want it, but anyways, Kurt Angle thought SummerSlam should be his chance to win the title. He likened his Olympic victory to the summer and said that this should be his moment. As for Benoit and Rock, these two had a natural chemistry. They brought the best in each other, and The Rock was doing everything he could to keep the title, but the situation was far too overwhelming. Shane was interfering, Benoit was the most aggressive opposition he faced, but Chris Jericho saved him. And with that, The Rock retained the title. Good match. It served an ending to the feud, and it deserved one. Benoit was absolutely outraged at this, and so Mick Foley decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to add Chris Jericho into the #1 contenders match with Kurt Angle and Triple H. This obviously didn't go Benoit's way because he's not in the match. About that one, both Angle and Triple H pinned Chris Jericho, leading to confusion. Rock didn't know what's up, and the drama was about to ensue. He laid the smack it down on all of them, even Stephanie, and Raw ended with the #1 contender status left in question. Mick Foley thought long and hard for this decision and decided to make it a triple threat match at SummerSlam. The Rock, upon hearing this, did not give a damn. Later that night, he faced both men in a tag team match. Triple H got so irritated with Kurt Angle that he walked away. Stephanie tried to convince him but was unsuccessful, and in the ring, Kurt Angle took a last ride. The game finally came to the aid of his wife, but took a chokeslam and people's elbow. All this because she wanted to check on Kurt Angle. However, a meeting with Vince McMahon brought these two men together, and The Rock's chances decreased for SummerSlam. At face value, all was good, but then Mick Foley mentioned a match with The Rock for SmackDown, and both these guys started arguing over who gets it. Shane McMahon decided Triple H should get it, and Angle thought it was personal, feeling Shane, doesn't want him to be friends with his sister. Triple H went out there and with the help of Kurt Angle, emerged victorious. On the final Raw before SummerSlam, The Rock addressed the events of SmackDown. He was out here talking about sticking boots and candy asses. The Rock mentioned that they both want the title. They want the biggest $2 piece of rancid meat, Stephanie McMahon as well. The Rock wasn't thinking about SummerSlam though, as he wanted payback. Mick Foley all of a sudden came out and said that tempers like The Rock's could get titles lost. So that's why he wasn't going to book him in a match tonight. Kurt Angle came out and tried to explain things to The Rock, and he said that when Mick Foley tried splitting him and the McMahon family apart, he was testing him. Angle called Triple H a friend and brought him out. The game said that nothing will make him a friend of somebody's faster than when Kurt Angle wrapped a chair around The Rock's head. Triple H was still pressing Rock for a title match, and Foley said that if only his ears were as big as his nose, he would have heard that he gave the night off for The Rock. So he booked them in a tag team match against the Acolytes. Even Shane McMahon was booked in a match against Steve Blackman. To top it all off, Stephanie McMahon was set to face Lita for the Women's Championship, with a special referee being The Rock. As expected, Kurt Angle and Triple H got involved. This only brought back the problems between those two, as Angle accidentally blasted the game. This led to Lita winning the title, and it was an amazing ending. I mean, it's 2000 WWF, what do you expect? Later that week on SmackDown, Stephanie was set to face The Rock in a tag team match. She needed to choose somebody, and she was out here considering Kurt Angle. This did nothing but anger the game. She ended up choosing Kurt Angle as her partner, and this did nothing but bring the relationship between Triple H and Kurt Angle to a point where it couldn't be fixed. Team Extreme were jumping him, and Angle preferred to walk away and kiss Stephanie McMahon. This was despite Triple H carrying Stephanie to the bag and helping him out with his tag team match. It was a very exciting and heated storyline. Rock obviously wasn't the main focus of the story, but it didn't matter. Bro really kissed a married woman. The WWF had an incredible summer, and this storyline played a huge part. Stephanie admitted that Kurt Angle was a good kisser and straight up lied to Triple H about the phone call from Kurt. Too much drama. Triple H, the most dastardly person being played, you don't see that often. At this point, Angle went all out and said that he gave Stephanie more passion than Triple H ever has. These guys were hated, and everyone was going to enjoy watching them hurt each other over a woman nobody likes. Unlike them, The Rock just wanted to steer to victory. These men had an intense pre-match brawling. Their hatred basically broke the announce table, and Triple H didn't even need to hit the pedigree. For Angle, though, he was in a whole other world. He doesn't really remember much from this match. Rock finally came back, but Triple H's main focus was getting a piece of Kurt Angle. Stephanie, despite Triple H's orders, came out to check on Kurt Angle. As for The Rock, he had a fight on his hands, but Stephanie was making things a whole lot easier. Triple H, though, rebounded with a sledgehammer, and The Rock's title was slowly gone. The game saw him holding onto his abdomen after the sledgehammer shot continued on the attack. The Rock had this little opening, and Stephanie, meanwhile, convinced Kurt Angle to come out and help Triple H. She forcefully dragged him out, and this is when he cost him the title. He wanted the title as well. Angle and The Rock had a mini match that saw The Rock with the edge, and Stephanie was beside herself in all this drama she caused. Rock bottom when Triple H breaks the fall, and to top it all off, Stephanie brought in the sledgehammer for Triple H, but Angle took it, and this led to her taking a right hand from her husband. Angle hits him with a sledgehammer. The Rock hits the people's elbow to retain the title. This was one of the most dramatic matches in the Attitude Era. It had so much intrigue and twists and turns. Angle getting his ass beat, Stephanie accidentally instigating her own assault, and The Rock trying to steer clear of all this nonsense. And to top it all off, Kurt Angle carried Stephanie to the back. The next night on Raw, Mick Foley felt that The Rock had to go through yet another challenge, Kane. For Kane, it was all about taking the title and representing the people. Of course, the Grey One couldn't give a damn. As expected, Kane was a huge challenger. He took control with ease, and it also helped that Rock was still hurting from SummerSlam. But he turned things around, and if it wasn't for the ref, he would have won it there. Kane rebounds with a chokeslam, but the champion managed to kick out. Rock follows up with a rock bottom, and it still wasn't enough, and then the Undertaker interfered and dropped his opponent. Even then, Kane kicked out. This man was 99 overall, and The Rock had to hit another rock bottom to retain that title. It looked like hell. You felt that The Rock had to dig so damn deep to beat this monster. 3 rock bottoms and a choke slam from The Undertaker. He endured everything and dished it out, but he had to rely on luck. The Undertaker's chokeslam was also a sign that he wanted a title shot, just not from Kane. His number 1 contenders match with Chris Benoit was ruined after Kane interfered, leading to The Rock making the save. So now it was not only Kane and The Undertaker, but Chris Benoit. So Mick Foley booked the number 1 contenders match between Kane and Chris Benoit. This match once again ended in controversy after Kane attacked The Rock, leading to the DQ finish. A Great One dropped Kane with a rock bottom, and the number 1 contender had to be determined at a later time. As for The Rock, he had to team up with The Undertaker to face Edge and Christian for the tag team titles. The Rock was super resilient, but Kane's interference led to the concerto, and the heels retained. The Rock wasn't going to let that slide though. It was an embarrassing defeat, so he interrupted them on SmackDown. The champion admitted that he lost, but said that these two needed help. So what was he going to do about it? He wanted both Edge and Christian in a handicap match. They refused to compete before realizing something. They reek of awesomeness. He said that it didn't matter if that's their new catchphrase and gave them a proper catchphrase. They reek of grade A Kentucky Derby. Edge and Christian wanted to be in the ring at the same time against The Rock, but that wasn't enough. Why? Because Edge wanted the match to be for the WWF Championship. He accepted. The Rock looked into the future and said that he sees a picture of himself whooping their asses all over Louisville. Right before the match, he gave them a beating. This beating was enough to leave Edge on the sidelines, so Christian had to bring in a partner at the request of Commissioner Foley. His partner, Kane. This match was no problem for the duo, but when it came down to it, Christian wanted the WWF's most coveted gold. Then you had Edge interfering, and it's no wonder why The Rock retained the title. Kane was so frustrated over the result that he chokeslammed him through the announce table. Just as Raw began, The Rock was seeking retribution. He wanted Kane. The Rock made a big red mockery out of Kane and called him out. The problem was Chris Benoit wanted to fight. His reasoning for a match was because he's the best wrestler, and if anyone deserves a shot, it's him. Kane wasn't going to let anyone take his title shot, and if you thought that was it, The Undertaker was here. He didn't want anyone to forget about him, and a brawl ensues. Mick Foley guaranteed that there's going to be a number 1 contender by the end of the night, and in the meantime, he booked them in a tag team match. As for the main event, it was too damn chaotic, so Mick Foley made it a fatal 4-way match for Unforgiven. The Rock knew very well that this was a challenge, but similar to every other opponent, he treated them like jokes. Foley had a master plan in place for all this chaos, and Chris Benoit straight up told him that it's gonna suck. What Foley was talking about involved The Undertaker and The Rock. Benoit threw some insults with the fatal 4-way stipulation, feeling he's the better wrestler out of anyone in the match. Kane wanted to prove to people that say he's terrible, ugly, right. But about The Rock, he had to team up with The Undertaker in a tag team tables match. This one didn't end so well for them, and even worse for The Rock, as The Undertaker thought he was attacking him, so he dropped him with a chokeslam through the table. So kicking off Raw, he wanted him to come out and deal with things. Hell, he was even willing to put the title on the line. The Undertaker in anger came out and explained things. He said that when The Rock was a little kid, he was out here winning titles, and he was mostly offended about The Rock calling him out. And liking this to people never learning. He's like, oh, people never learn, despite what happened on SmackDown. SmackDown, he told him not to piss him off, but he did just that, and the Dudleys put him through a table. And The Undertaker told him he may not dress like the devil, but he's still down with them. Mick Foley refused to get in their way and made the match official for tonight. Chris Benoit wanted a title shot tonight, thinking the main event was just that. He thought it was a title match. Kane followed up, and Mick Foley reminded them that it's non-title, and since Benoit wants to fight, he gets to face Kane. For The Rock, it was one of the only times he lost in 2000, as The Undertaker pinned him decisively. Since Kane and Benoit couldn't be away from the title, they started a brawl after the match. Once the dust settled, The Rock caught The Undertaker and hit the rock bottom, and this brawl was nothing compared to SmackDown. Everyone was going after each other. The Undertaker almost ran over The Rock, and Kurt Angle once again kissed Stephanie. For Chris Benoit, he's considered the best wrestler, but being the best also requires you to hold championship gold. Kane wants to prove the haters right and show that he's the most sadistic wrestler in the WWF, but he also wanted to do it with the title on his waist. The Undertaker wants to regain that old glory he had from a year ago. Before the match, The Rock trashed them, and the best part had to be when he said The Undertaker rides on his motorcycle to get a funny feeling. About the match, I wasn't really feeling this one. They did the same finish from Fully Loaded with Chris Benoit winning the title under controversial circumstances, so the match was restarted. It did kick up a notch after that. Benoit was a pure workhorse. Kane and The Undertaker were brawling on the outside, and it was Benoit who was the one that brought the most drama. But through it all, The Rock managed to score the victory. It really felt like the ultimate challenge, but he pulled through. Since Chris Benoit was a crybaby, Commissioner Foley gave him yet another title match for Raw. On this match, The Rock told Benoit that he won absolutely nothing last night. He's not a 2-time champion, he's the ultimate punk-ass SOB. He promised that Benoit will hit rock bottom, and the action here is very fast-paced. Within the first few minutes, they were already doing some big stuff like the sharpshooter and Shane's interference. The match itself wasn't going to be better than the previous ones, but there was a lot of drama here. Earl Hebner almost fought Shane, who retaliated by dropping him. The Rock in the ring was laying the smackdown when Shane got involved. Benoit screwed up here. Stephanie came in to check on her brother. Triple H gets bumped into and argues with Benoit before getting involved, and The Rock hits the rock bottom to retain the title. After the match, the game has a stare down with a Grey One before Kurt Angle came in. Stephanie gets involved once again, and at this point, Chris Benoit decided to headbutt her. There was so much drama to come out of this. A little bump from Benoit kickstarted an entire feud with the game, and for Kurt Angle, it seemed like he was seeking the title. This led to a tag team match on SmackDown between the four. The Rock didn't want to team up with his former rival, but told him that all they gotta do is tag each other, and that's it. Other than that, he still dislikes him. The Rock and Triple H worked much better than Angle and Benoit, whose egos clouded their main goal. But the match was far too chaotic for a normal result. Chairs were brought in, The Rock and Triple H were trying to top each other, and Stephanie McMahon's interference brought Kurt Angle the victory. She was still on Kurt Angle's side despite her husband being on The Rock's team. Later that week on Raw, The Rock made fun of Stephanie, calling her Kurt Angle's wife, and belittled Angle's Olympic celebration back in 1996, calling him a crybaby. And then he gave him a title shot for tonight so he could whoop his ass. Kurt Angle did not waste any time. He started going off on his Olympic victory, saying he gave the fans something to live for, and threw insults towards Michael Jordan's way. Why? Because they're in DC. He praised them for being terrible at running the Washington Wizards, and for him, it wasn't like Mike, it was like Kurt. Mick Foley all of a sudden interrupted, and he told Angle that there's somebody that wants him a little bit more. Triple H. The game took offense to The Rock making fun of Angle's Olympic victory, saying it's his job, and Triple H also told the champion that he's keeping the title warm for him since he never beat him one-on-one. Mick Foley ended up booking a number one contenders match between Angle and the game, but Chris Benoit had a huge problem with this. Kane followed up as well, and he told The Rock that he's his and his time is over. Rikishi randomly came out and he had some unfinished business with Kane. Mick Foley booked Rikishi and The Rock against Chris Benoit and Kane. As for Angle in the game, winner faces the champion at No Mercy. The Rock told those two to go to a quiet place where all their dreams come true, and he told Kane to search for Benoit. But anyways, these two's hatred of each other led to Benoit costing Kane the match. At the same time, Mick Foley was conducting an investigation into who ran over Stone Cold Steve Austin at Survivor Series the previous year. As for the main event, Kurt Angle won the right to challenge The Rock at No Mercy with the help of Chris Benoit. On the other side of things, because Kane was annoying, he got his chance once again for the title. Kane said that The Rock was the man that had everything. He says just bring it, and Kane assured him that he will. He also told him that nothing will save him. As Kane said, he dominated. He looked almost unstoppable. Rock was putting in the work, but at times it was like fighting a wall. Well, somebody did interfere. Kurt Angle. Angle dropped both men with a chair shot, and once they recovered, Kane hit the chokeslam for a 2 count and walked into a rock bottom. All of a sudden, Rikishi came out and attacked Kane, causing the DQ, but the champion didn't want it to end that way, and this led to yet another brawl involving Kane. But yeah, Rock retained. Match is just there. This Rikishi and Rock partnership would be short-lived though, as Mick Foley concluded the investigation into who ran over Stone Cold, and he came to the conclusion that it wasn't The Rock who ran him over. The evidence pointed to him initially, but he was not guilty. It was Rikishi, and The Rock was left visibly disappointed and frustrated with him. And to make matters worse, Rikishi said that he did it for The Rock. The funniest part is this guy said that he'll do it again, and he walked out to his Too Cool song like this man didn't commit attempted murder a year earlier. When I thought to myself here, damn, Rock could have used a different challenger for the title, I didn't think they'd give Val Venus a title shot. I don't even remember this, and I was watching WWF 2000 a while ago, because that's what happened on SmackDown. Kurt Angle was a big supporter of Val Venus for this one, and said that if they could find OJ innocent in LA, you could find some fans here that think The Rock was innocent too. Val Venus tried to take advantage of this, but you know what happened. The RTC were an intense challenge for The Rock. Val Venus isolated the Grey One and wore him down, but it just wasn't enough. Steven Richards got involved and almost screwed over Venus, who took The Rock bottom. He rebounded with a title shot, and even then, The Rock kicked out. Angle and Stephanie were getting annoyed with things, and in the ring, Stevie Richards takes a Rock bottom, and Val Venus takes the People's Elbow, and The Rock retains. Kurt Angle attacks after the match, and Stephanie almost took a Rock bottom, but Angle makes a save, and he hits the Olympic Slam twice. Even Stephanie got some shots in. With that said, I thought that match was enjoyable. It's crazy that 2000 Val Venus had an entertaining main event match with The Rock for the WWF Championship, but it was just that. As for Stephanie, she wanted to pursue a managerial career with Kurt Angle. Why? Because Triple H didn't want her to come out to his matches. Kurt Angle once again got one over The Rock on Raw, but the Grey One showed him that he's got to do a whole lot more to win the title. Ahead of No Mercy, The Rock gave his final thoughts on his match with Kurt Angle. It was clear that his thoughts were more with Rikishi, but Rock said that he was now focused on Angle. He said that he's gone through many opponents in the last 2 months. Now, he has to face a guy who endorses milk. The Rock gave a rundown of the match at No Mercy and said that this isn't the Olympics, and he told him to bring his gold medals, Stephanie to bring her dirty panties, and most importantly, to just bring it. Once again, at the end of the night, Kurt Angle scored the win in a match involving The Rock, but it was the Grey One who had the last laugh over Angle. There was a little positive for Kurt Angle, though. Chris Benoit locked the champion in the crossface. Kurt Angle despite facing The Rock in the biggest match in his WWF career, had enough time for jokes. He interviewed him. Angle made it seem like Rock played a part in running over Stone Cold, and it was a funny-ass interview. Angle acting as the moral compass, talking about how Rock's a mean person. It was really good. So this is what it's come down to. Stephanie McMahon's influence over Kurt Angle had him convinced that this was over before it began. For her, it was about having a career besides managing Triple H. Managing Kurt Angle to the most coveted gold in professional wrestling would give her managerial career a stamp of success and would set her on a road similar to her father. It's why she was so desperate to convince Triple H that this is the right thing for her. It was all about the family. For Kurt Angle, the WWF Championship was the most valuable prize he's never won. It also helped that the match is announced as no disqualification right before it began. Stephanie's influence gave Angle the control, but he was overwhelmed by the onslaught from The Rock. Once they got back in the ring, though, Angle found himself. Stephanie was still adding insult to injury, and a furious Triple H watched on in the back. The no disqualification rule wasn't exactly favoring Kurt Angle. He locked in the sharpshooter and got Angle tapping, but the ref didn't notice. So The Rock started running after Stephanie, giving way to Kurt Angle. Angle was mostly in control here until they went out to the outside. That's of course where it changed. He almost hit The Rock bottom, but Angle blasted him with a title belt. This wasn't enough. Stephanie's interference wasn't really working because even though Angle had these big moments to win it, The Rock kicks out. Superplex from the top, and with that, the match entered the final third, the ending. A beautiful moonsault lands on John Cena, and The Rock begins his comeback. Spine Buster, and Stephanie gets involved once again, so Rock hits the rock bottom on her. He even tried the people's elbow, but Angle made the save, and this is when Triple H interfered. How Triple H even hit the pedigree on The Rock. He takes her away, and in the ring, The Rock kicks out. The champion turned up once again, and the crowd was all in. Then all of a sudden, Rikishi, who got his ass beat, was here. He assaulted Angle before The Rock started laying the smackdown. A low blow stops him for a moment, and Angle goes in and he takes a rock bottom. Two accidents led to Kurt Angle hitting the Angle Slam. 1, 2, 3. New champion. Kurt Angle, after 11 months of debuting, had captured the World Wrestling Federation's most coveted gold. It was an incredible match. Damn. Loved this match. It was one of my favorites from this title reign. Easily. You asked me, hey, what's your favorite Rock title match from this run? I'm probably going to go with this. But yeah, for The Rock, this 4-month title reign had come to an end. And with that, he was going to feud with Rikishi and eventually challenge for the title once again. So what did I think of this title reign? Awesome, amazing. He really showed what The Rock was truly capable of. He was the number one guy. No one was stopping him. He was comfortably the guy. You know, no one was above him. He delivered in promos. He had amazing charisma. Out of this world. We already know The Rock was out of this world in charisma, but we just got to mention it. His look, his clothing was incredible. His matches were even better than they were in 1999. He really turned it up here and would only get better after his return in July of 2001. But here, he was good. Especially if he was facing somebody like Chris Benoit, Triple H, whatever. If he had a good opponent in there, for sure he was going to have a good match. My favorite match is No Mercy. I really loved the drama that unfolded. I loved how, even though it was no disqualification, it had a different vibe compared to the other Attitude Era matches, you know. Because when the match is no disqualification in the Attitude Era, they go in the crowd, they wrestle all around the place. And they did that here, but it felt a bit different. There was just something different about this one. This title reign is easily one of the most memorable, especially from the Attitude Era. It's one of the longest from the Attitude Era as well. So yeah. Alright, what you guys think of The Rock's title reign? Please comment down below. And that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the rock bottom on the like button or pass the people's elbow on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.